The carriage rolled beneath sunlit trees, birds flitting between branches as the steady clip-clop of hooves echoed through the forest. Inside, the mood was far from peaceful. "You absolutely cannot make a scene this time, Alice, do you understand?" Chloe Verdier sat perfectly composed, hands resting on her cane, her voice calm but unyielding. Alice frowned. But the last soirée was unbearably dull. "I couldn't help it." She waved it off lightly. "And how was I supposed to know a few glasses of sherry would get me so tipsy? Anyhow, I'm sure this one will be much livelier, especially with you there." Chloe smiled, serene and controlled. "You really must behave yourself this time. This ball is hosted by none other than Duke Thisse," she said. "You must find yourself a potential suitor." Alice lowered her eyes. "I know. I'm well aware that my betrothal is the only thing that can save our family from drowning in debt." Her voice softened, almost wistful. "Still, I've always hoped to meet someone who would truly sweep me off my feet." Silence followed. Chloe's fingers tightened around the handle of her cane. "I'm sorry, Alice. If only my leg weren't in such a state." Regret flickered across her calm expression. "I wish I didn't have to place such a heavy burden on my younger sister. This is all my—" Before she could finish, Alice suddenly stood, crossing the carriage in a single step. "Chloe." She wrapped her arms around her sister without hesitation. "What could you possibly have to feel sorry for?" Alice held her tighter, voice firm despite the smile. "If anyone is to blame, it's our father. Loving mother so much that he spent his entire fortune on her medical bills, and completely failed to manage the estate." Alice's voice sharpened as memories surfaced. "Think of what happened 3 years ago," she said bitterly. "Despite our family's precarious situation, father allowed Duke Thisse's army to use our castle." Chloe stiffened, startled. "He may be our father," Alice went on, "but I can't tell if he has a heart of gold, or if he's simply a fool." "Have you heard the rumors about Duke Thisse?" Alice said coldly. "None of them are good." The words grew darker as the rumors followed. Stories whispered in shadows, of illegitimate children born to mistresses, only to be secretly executed, of a man with a cruel temper, one who could destroy anyone who crossed him, regardless of rank. Some even claimed it would have been better if he'd died on the battlefield. "If you get on his bad side," Alice warned, "he'll ruin you completely." Chloe turned to her. "Alice, considering our family's standing, we're lucky to have even been invited to this event. Still, he's not the kind of person we should associate with," Alice said with worry, then sighed, waving it off. "I just hope we don't run into him while we're enjoying the festivities." Chloe didn't answer, but the unease in her eyes said enough. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her cane. "You cannot allow yourself to be afraid, Chloe," she told herself, forcing her breathing to steady. 3 years earlier, at Verdier estate, Viscount Verdier, the lord of a small castle, had opened his gates without hesitation. As the imperial army retreated from battle, the Verdier estate became their refuge. Chloe stepped carefully across the courtyard. Whispers followed her like shadows. "So, it's true. Viscount Verdier's eldest daughter is a cripple. In that state, how could she attend to anyone? Won't she just be in the way?" Each word struck sharper than the cold. Chloe lowered her gaze, pretending not to hear, and continued treating the injured. "Leave her be," someone muttered at last. "The cripple just wants to help." "Yeah, I've no complaints. She's a right feast for the eyes at least," another answered, and from not far behind Chloe, her father heard every single word. Later that night, Chloe stood at the doorway when the message was delivered. "His lordship has requested you leave the wounded in the care of the servants." Chloe paused, then bowed her head. "I understand." She sat on the edge of her bed, cane resting against her knee. "Did I cause father to worry?" A soft sigh escaped her lips. Still. Her eyes lifted slowly, resolve returning in quiet measure. "Imagine the pain they're experiencing," she thought. "No wonder they're on edge." Just then, "Attention!" The sudden shout cut through the night. Chloe flinched, fingers tightening against the window frame. Footsteps followed, firm, measured. "Greet your commander!" Outside, the soldiers snapped into formation in perfect unison, boots crunching against the snow as they saluted. Chloe's breath caught. "That's the commander?" Her eyes followed the tall figure who stepped forward, broad-shouldered, clad in a dark uniform trimmed with gold. Then he spoke. "Earlier today, I received news of my father, Wilhelm von Thisse's passing. The air grew heavy. He was beheaded by the enemy," the commander continued evenly, "who chose to display his head upon their castle walls." Then he turned to one of the soldiers. "You," he said calmly, "do you wish to return home?" The man hesitated, then answered, "Yes, sir. My wife recently gave birth to our child. I wish for nothing more than to see them." The commander nodded and turned to another. "And you?" The second soldier hesitated as well before replying that he had a sick mother waiting for him at home, one he worried for deeply. One after another, the soldiers spoke, each giving their reason to return home. From above, Chloe heard them all, finally understanding the weight of their worries. Below, the commander continued, "As you can see, we have countless reasons to end this war and return home. I share that same goal." His voice lowered. "I have not even been able to recover my father's body and hold a funeral to lay him to rest. So I will do everything in my power to lead my soldiers to victory. After all, this is a matter of house, this is pride and dignity." Damien Ernst von Thisse, commander of the army, paused before adding firmly, "So now, let us turn all the desperation and longing we just felt into action." The soldiers' morale surged as they raised their hands in agreement. From above, Chloe's heart nearly skipped a beat. In a single moment, he had lifted the spirits of his men, far greater than the rumors claimed. Below, Damien stood as the soldiers shouted the name Thisse with pride. Then suddenly he glanced toward the window where Chloe was standing. Their eyes met. Chloe flinched, startled. She slipped down to the floor, covering her mouth. Were their eyes really locked just now? She wondered. After a moment, she peeked through the window again, only to see that the man had already turned away with his soldiers. She let out a heavy sigh. Remembering his words, she thought how she herself would never be able to stand like that after hearing of her father's passing. Clasping her hands together, she prayed softly, "Please, allow those soldiers to return home so they can meet their loved ones." Below, the man who had turned away earlier paused. Slowly, he looked back toward the window, his fierce gaze piercing through the glass, as if searching for the woman he had seen only moments ago. The next morning, Chloe peeked outside her room. Seeing no one in the quiet dawn, she decided to hurry out and return before everyone woke, hoping to gather some herbs from the woods. Just as she was about to leave, a voice called out, "Lady Chloe!" She flinched at the sound of her name, then slowly relaxed when she saw it was Gilles. "Where are you headed so early in the morning?" he asked politely. "Didn't his lordship ask you to stay in your room? I'm just going to gather some herbs from the forest," she replied. "I can do that for you," Gilles offered quickly. "And what if you pick the wrong ones again, like before?" Chloe teased with a small laugh. Gilles flushed in embarrassment. "But still, it's too cold outside, lady." "Chloe," he said with concern. Smiling reassuringly, Chloe shook her head. "You don't have to worry. I've gone on my own plenty of times. I'll be fine." Seeing her determination, Gilles could only nod. "My lady, please be careful." Chloe waved goodbye and left while Gilles stood there watching her go, worry still lingering in his eyes. Inside the woods, Chloe carefully gathered herbs. Everyone else was working hard, so she felt she should make herself useful as well. As she thought that, a faint rustling of leaves caught her attention. Her gaze followed the sound, and she froze. A man stood by the riverbank in the early morning light. He was no ordinary man. It was Duke Thisse, the same man she had seen the night before. What was he doing here? This was a place only she knew. Her instincts told her not to disturb him. She decided to leave as quietly as possible. But in her haste, her cane pressed down on a dried leaf. The man turned sharply. "Who's there?" he demanded. "What is your name?" Chloe hesitated, then stepped forward. "My apologies, Your Grace. I am Chloe Verdier, eldest daughter of Viscount Verdier." He strode toward her and stopped directly in front of her, his gaze fixed on her as if assessing something. After a moment, he spoke coldly. "I've been noticing a pattern since last night." Chloe flinched. It seems Lord Verdier's eldest daughter has a habit of spying on others. Like a rat. She let out a slow breath and bowed slightly. "I apologize if I've offended you, Your Grace. I swear on my name that I had no such intention just now." "Oh?" He raised a brow. "So you did yesterday?" Then, with an arrogant edge, he asked, "Did your father order you to seduce me?" Chloe froze, utterly stunned by his words. Damien continued coolly. "So Lord Verdier isn't as naive as he looks. What an ambitious fellow." Lowering her head, Chloe replied firmly, "That is not the case, I assure you." "Really?" He smirked. "Then why were you making a show of treating my soldiers? Wounds?" His gaze dropped to her foot. "House Verdier may be of low standing, but such work is hardly fitting for a noblewoman, especially one of your condition." Chloe clenched her skirt tightly, her grip tightening around her cane. "Is this truly the same man I saw yesterday?" Meeting his gaze with dignity, she replied, "I was only helping them so they could return to their families sooner. I fail to see how my title makes that wrong." She straightened. "Besides, my late mother taught me that it is a noble's duty to aid those in need. That is the conduct expected of nobility." The man laughed softly. "The comportment of nobility, you say?" He stepped closer and leaned in. "Chloe Verdier, has it never occurred to you that trying to help beyond your abilities is not only selfish, but also a nuisance to others?" His gaze sharpened. "If you had heard the filthy jokes they made, would you still be able to hold your head high and speak of noble conduct?" He paused, voice lowering. "And imagine if Viscount Verdier had overheard them. How do you think he would have felt?" His hand lifted, brushing through Chloe's hair. "If I were him, I would have severed the heads of those who dared sully my daughter's name." Chloe stiffened. "Those soldiers," he continued evenly, "have watched dozens of comrades slaughtered in battle. Do you know what that does to a man?" His eyes narrowed. "And what's more, you're wandering through the forest early this morning with that leg of yours. If something were to happen to you, who would be to blame, my lady?" Chloe turned her face away, avoiding his gaze. "This land has belonged to House Verdier for generations. No one can enter without permission. It's safe," she argued. Damien smirked. "Safe, you say?" Before she could react, he seized her cane. "Would you still babble such nonsense if I did this?" "What are you doing?" Chloe cried, reaching for it. In a swift motion, Damien turned and drove the cane straight through a snake's body, killing it. Instantly, "There is always danger lurking in the forest, my lady," he said calmly, "so don't be reckless." He straightened and handed the cane back. It's damaged, but you should still be able to make it back to the castle. No thank you, Chloe replied politely. Damien laughed lightly. I see you have a bit of a temper. That's unexpected. He crouched and reached toward her foot. Let me examine your leg. Is it hereditary? Chloe frowned sharply and pulled back. Why must you be so rude? She snapped. He sighed, rising to his feet. You're too sensitive. I merely asked a question, yet you mistook it for an attack. Then, calmly, allowing your emotions to prevail will only lead to defeat, Lady Chloe. She lifted her chin. I am not a soldier, Your Grace. I do not fight wars. Well, Damien replied. Life itself is a war, especially for someone like you. Chloe frowned. He truly was a devil. She had been completely wrong about him. Clenching her skirt, she spoke firmly. Your Grace, there are two things I wish to say. First, regarding the cane you damaged. I would like a replacement. Damien smiled. No problem. I'll speak to the woodmaker as soon as I return to the barracks. No, Chloe interrupted. She met his eyes. I want a cane made from the birch trees that grow on this estate. Damien's brow furrowed. It was an unusual request. Chloe continued. I heard yesterday that you intend to return victorious from this war. Damien smiled and slowly raised his hand, playing with her hair. My lady, what if I were to give you something even better? She looked at him carefully, searching for his intent. It seems your father definitely wants something more, he added coolly. Chloe understood at once. She pushed his hand away. And that brings me to my second point, she spoke steadily. If my father has ever praised his daughters in front of you, it was purely out of fatherly love. Though he adores us, he is not a fool who would forget that House Verdier stands far below House this in rank, she continued without wavering. You are not the only one who would prefer not to be involved with an impaired woman. The same is true of all men. I am well aware of that. Damien frowned. Why not save such self-disparagement for your journal, he advised. No, Chloe replied, turning away. There is no disparagement in truth, she said as she began to limp forward. And I would like to make one thing clear. Though you are free to pity me, you have no right to assume I am unhappy, or that my life is a war. Behind her, Damien spoke again. Does that mean you're happy living as you are? If you believe that, then your life will never change. Chloe paused. After a moment, she turned back to face him. Yes, I am. Her voice was steady. Living a peaceful, unchanging life on the land where I was born for the rest of my days, that is happiness to me. After that, Chloe Verdier did not remember how she made it back after her encounter with him. All she recalled was how the cold of that early morning wrapped around her entire day like a snake. When she finally awoke, the man had already left with his soldiers. After that, a long time passed before she ever returned to the forest again. And now, 3 years later, Chloe Verdier arrived at Castle Rose of House Thisse with her sister. The castle was as extravagant as the rumors claimed. Built solely for the Duke's entertainment, it was meant to be used for only a single season. Chloe and Alice sat at a side table, quietly taking in the beauty of the castle, when a young man approached. You've arrived, Lady Alice, he said in greeting. He bent slightly and offered his hand. May I ask you for the next dance? Alice accepted with a smile and introduced Chloe to him. The man bowed respectfully, and Chloe returned the gesture. Feeling obliged, he seemed about to ask Chloe as well, but his eyes fell on the cane in her hand, and he hesitated. Sensing his awkwardness, Chloe smiled gently. Watching people dance beautifully is a joy in itself, she said softly. Though I do appreciate the thought. It was her way of preserving her dignity. Lord Cormier led Alice to the dance floor, and the music began. Sitting aside, Chloe felt a quiet sense of relief. It seemed everyone had finally forgotten the scene Alice had caused at the last ball. Count Cormier appeared to be a fine match for her sister. There was nothing negative said about him anywhere, and Chloe found herself glad. She even considered thanking Duke Thisse for the invitation. Though, after how their first meeting had gone, it would have been better to avoid him altogether. Still, it wouldn't be proper. And besides, why had he invited them at all? Was it because their father had helped him and his army 3 years ago? Yet he hadn't seemed like a man who appreciated another's kindness. Chloe could only hope that if she did run into him, he might have already forgotten her. Lost in thought, she was startled by whispers. Look, the Duke has arrived. Her heart sank. When she looked up, she realized the man was already standing in front of her. So he remembered her. With a quiet sigh, Chloe rose and stepped forward. Greetings, Your Grace, she said, bowing. Damien smiled faintly. It's been a while, Lady Chloe Verdier. I am indebted to your father and wish to thank him in person, but I have been quite busy, he continued. So thank you for accepting my invitation. He inclined his head slightly. Then his gaze fell to the cane she was holding. Without hesitation, he raised his hand. If it is not too much to ask, may I have this dance? Chloe stared at him, utterly confused. What did this man think he was doing? Whispers immediately filled the room. Did he not see her cane? One murmured. Lady Verdier must have done something to antagonize House Thisse, another whispered. Chloe, who had been standing quietly and listening, finally spoke. My sincere apologies, Your Grace, but I'm afraid I'm not proficient enough to be your dance partner. The man she had met years ago hadn't changed one bit. Damien stepped closer. Are you turning me down because others have already asked you, and I might have to wait? He asked lightly. If so, I hope you aren't rejecting me. I would very much like a dance with you. He smiled as he spoke, yet every word made Chloe uncomfortable. Are you tormenting an innocent young woman again, Damien? A voice cut through the tension. Can't you see the poor girl is about to break into tears? It was Johannes, the first prince of the kingdom of Swanton. He stepped closer, his tone sharp. She's already declined your invitation. It's hardly gentlemanly to continue harassing her. Did you forget your manners after spending time on the battlefield? Damien glanced at him coolly. Asking a beautiful woman to dance is not something I would consider poor etiquette. He then looked back at the woman in front of him, and I'm sure she isn't the type to cry easily. Johannes sighed and turned to Chloe. I apologize on behalf of my cousin. Chloe met his gaze calmly. Your Highness, there's no need to apologize. His Grace was merely being considerate, thinking I might end up a wallflower due to my condition. Johannes studied her with interest. What a clever young lady, he said. What is your name? I am Chloe Verdier, the eldest daughter of House Verdier, she introduced herself. Damien stood silently beside them, watching the exchange. House Verdier, Johannes said. I would very much like to meet your father someday. The man who raised such a beautiful daughter to be so bold. He patted Chloe's shoulder lightly. Damien's brow furrowed at the sight. Chloe bowed deeply. My apologies, Your Highness, but I am here today with my younger sister, not my father. As she finished speaking, she suddenly realized something. Alice, she scanned the ballroom, but her sister was nowhere to be seen. Is that so? Johannes replied. Then introduce her. To me later. With that, he departed. Damien watched Chloe carefully, understanding at once why she looked flustered. He leaned closer. Where is your sister, Lady Chloe? She was just here, Chloe said anxiously. I can't see her anywhere. Please allow me to look for her. As she turned to leave, Damien caught her hand, still gripping the cane. Chloe Verdier, he whispered, leaning in. Do you remember our little agreement regarding your cane? She looked at him sharply. Unless you're going to give me a new one, please let go of my hand. Don't worry, he replied calmly. You'll get it soon. He yanked the cane from her grasp and offered his arm instead. It would be troublesome if your sister were inebriated and indisposed again, wouldn't it? He said smoothly. And this castle is vast. As its master, I shall guide you. After failing to find Alice inside the ballroom, Damien led Chloe outside toward the rose garden. It seems you've practiced walking on your own quite a bit, he remarked. As they descended the steps, Chloe felt herself waver, certain she might fall. That must be painful, he added calmly. She tightened her grip on his hand, the only support she had. No, I'm fine. You're very kind, Your Grace, she replied. Damien smirked. I see you still have that fighting spirit. Chloe sighed quietly, regretting having let him take her cane. As they walked, his gaze drifted to her hair. Who put those hair ornaments in for you? He asked suddenly. Startled by the question, she looked at him. I did it myself, she answered after a moment. No wonder it's a mess, he said, his eyes still fixed on her. Chloe felt his gaze pricking her skin. Her face flushed as she asked softly, Please, return my cane. Oh, shall I? He replied lightly. But we're already here, and I was informed a young woman was spotted in this garden. It might be your sister. Chloe could only pray inwardly that Alice hadn't done anything reckless. As they moved forward, a breathless moan reached their ears, ragged, urgent. Chloe's eyes widened in shock. Two figures came into view, entwined and kissing passionately. And one of them was her sister, Alice. Realizing Chloe was there, Alice tried to push the man clinging to her away, but he didn't budge. Oh my, Damien muttered under his breath. What on earth are you doing? Chloe asked, flustered. At last, Alice shoved the man back. Go, she urged. You'll be in danger if they catch you. I don't care, he replied with a smirk. Please, Eddie, Alice pleaded. Chloe flinched at the name. She had heard it before. Alice had once told her about a man she met at a village festival, a bohemian she spoke of with a smile. Never in her dreams had Chloe imagined they would meet again like this after the man finally left. Alice ran straight to her sister. Chloe, Eddie just appeared out of nowhere. Stop talking, Alice, Chloe said firmly, and go back to the carriage, now. As Alice dashed back toward the carriage, Damien and Chloe were left standing alone. The air turned awkward, heavy, suffocating. Damien broke the silence first. It seems the younger daughter of House Verdier will be setting tongues wagging yet again, he said coolly. She certainly has a talent for causing scandal whenever she appears in high society. Chloe lowered her head, trembling. I beg you. Please do not speak of this to anyone. But Damien was not easily persuaded. He leaned closer. And why shouldn't I? Then he added calmly, I'm sure you're aware no one would find fault if I were to punish your family for bringing an unauthorized person into my estate. Chloe's hands shook. She knew she had no choice. If she failed to convince him, her family's ruin was certain. She dropped to the ground and bowed deeply. This is my fault for not keeping an eye on her, she said urgently. Please, if you must punish someone, punish me. Damien knelt in front of her instead. And if I agree, he asked with interest, What will you do for me? Chloe looked up at him, her heart racing. She had no time. She needed an answer. 3 years ago, she said after a moment. It was my father who allowed you to use our castle during the war. That is how he contributed to your victory. Damien laughed softly. So you're asking me to repay that debt like this? I only ask that you show our humble family a little generosity, Your Grace. Chloe replied. But haven't I already repaid it? He said, rising to his feet. By inviting the two of you to this ball? His voice hardened. It is your sister you should blame for trampling over that generosity. So now, he added coldly, do you have anything else to say? Desperate, Chloe clung to his feet. If you could please forgive us this once, she pleaded. I will do anything you wish. Damien bent down, lifting her chin. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. The noblewoman who once held her head high, where has she gone? He brushed his fingers along her cheek, clinging to my feet and offering to do anything for me. It doesn't suit you, Lady Chloe. He understood the reason behind her desperation. It was for her sister's marriage. To save their family, one of them had to marry into wealth. A marriage of convenience, he said thoughtfully. And what about your life, Lady Chloe? Do you not care what becomes of it? No, Chloe answered without hesitation. To me, happiness is seeing the people I love well cared for. And you're willing to do anything to achieve that? He asked. If it is within my ability, she replied. Damien narrowed his eyes. Interesting, he murmured. Then I'll have to think about what you might be able to do for me in return. He stroked her cheek once more, then straightened. Now go back to the Verdier estate, immediately. But His Highness said I should introduce Alice to him? Chloe began. Damien's voice cut through her words. Remember this, he said coldly. From this moment on, if you behave in a way that attracts the attention of Johannes or any other man, I will kill you and your family with my own hands. There is a limit to my generosity, he continued. Do you understand? Chloe froze. And one more thing, he added, leaning closer. I suggest you refrain from entering this area with men you do not trust. This garden, he said quietly, is frequented by lovers who come to satisfy their unbridled passions. Unless, he finished, you are hoping for rumors of a scandal between the two of us. With those final words, he turned and left. Chloe remained where she was. He was just as despicable as he had been during their first meeting. Biting her lip, Chloe stared after him, her thoughts bitter, her heart heavy. To His Grace, Chloe wrote a letter addressed to Duke Damien von Thisse. I hope this letter finds you well. 3 months have passed since my return from the city of Swan. There is now talk of marriage between my sister and the gentleman she met at the ball that day. I am well aware that this is the fruit of your Grace's generosity. After writing those words, Chloe paused. Is this a bit excessive? She wondered. When Gilles entered with refreshments, Chloe asked about Alice. She went out this morning and hasn't returned, Gilles replied. She's also been refusing food, saying her stomach feels unwell. Chloe sighed quietly, hoping her sister hadn't gone to meet that bohemian again. Lady Chloe, Gilles said hesitantly, if Lady Alice gets married, you'll become rather lonely. Chloe smiled gently. How could that be, Gilles? She replied. I'll still have you, won't I? Gilles nodded, his face turning slightly red. At that moment, the door opened. Chloe, my dear, Viscount Verdier announced, prepare yourself. Duke Thisse is coming to hunt on our estate. Chloe's hand trembled. Why now? Had he finally decided how she was to repay him? Soon after, Duke Thisse arrived with his attendants. Viscount Verdier stood at the entrance with his daughter to welcome them. Damien surveyed the surroundings and remarked casually, it seems you have fewer servants than before. Caught off guard, Viscount hesitated. The poor harvest had forced them to let many go, but he struggled to explain. Chloe stepped forward smoothly. Unfortunately, we received news of your Grace's arrival rather late, so the castle is still in some disarray. Nonetheless, we shall do our utmost to make your stay comfortable. Damien smiled and stepped closer. Then I shall hold you to your word, my lady. Later, they gathered for dinner. Viscount Verdier apologized for his younger daughter's absence. She has confined herself to her room, feeling indisposed. I hope it's nothing serious, Damien replied with a smile. Then his gaze shifted to Chloe. But what a pity, he added lightly. It seems this course is not to Lady Chloe's liking. Chloe lowered her eyes. I'm afraid it's simply the recent hot weather. I have little appetite. Then, perhaps, Damien suggested, it would do you some good to build more resilience outdoors. Oh, it's not that, Viscount interjected warmly. My daughter loves the forest. She's merely nervous in your Grace's presence. Is that so? Damien replied. Then she must be quite knowledgeable about the terrain. Yes, Viscount said thoughtfully. I recall she only fell ill once after returning from the forest. Come to think of it, it was around the time your Grace was staying here. It was the time of their first meeting. Seeing Chloe pale slightly, Gilles quietly filled her glass with water. Thank you, Gilles, she murmured. From the side, Damien noticed. If she's so fond of the forest, he said calmly, I would like to make a request. He turned to Viscount. That she guide me during tomorrow's hunt. Viscount's expression tightened. I'm afraid, your Grace, Chloe may be a hindrance due to her condition. If you allow, I could find someone else. I'd like to hear what she thinks, Damien cut in. He turned directly to her. Lady. Chloe, will you accompany me? Chloe understood at once. He already knew her answer. If your grace permits an attendant to lead my horse, she replied carefully, I will be happy to accompany you. Damien smiled brightly. No, Lady Chloe, you shall be riding with me on my horse. After all, he added smoothly, I'm not accustomed to following behind others. And so, Chloe found herself standing at the entrance, prepared for the ride. Damien soon arrived astride his horse. She turned to Gilles. Gilles, will you hold my cane? He accepted it, worry clear on his face. Will you be all right, my lady? Chloe nodded. Behind her, Damien's brows furrowed slightly. As they rode together, Damien spoke casually. It seems you're quite familiar with that attendant of yours. You must be referring to Gilles, Chloe replied. He has been with our family since he was young. When other servants left due to unpaid wages, he chose to remain with us. To our family, Gilles is much more than an attendant. Damien suddenly pulled the reins tight. Hold on, my lady, he said. Then, with a hint of amusement, he asked, Now tell me, which direction? Left or right? Chloe flushed, startled by his closeness. Before she could properly answer, the horse surged forward. The ride left Chloe gasping for breath, clinging tightly, while Damien remained perfectly at ease. Looks like they've caught a deer, he commented lightly. Chloe knew he had done it on purpose. Was this his way of tormenting her? Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. This man was a devil. As she struggled to steady her breathing, a large hand suddenly reached from behind, covering her eyes. Breathe, Lady Chloe, Damien said softly. It's all over now. Everything will be all right. His gentle words were completely at odds with his earlier actions. That night at the dinner table, Chloe spoke first. We should call for a physician in the morning, she suggested. Your grace has been wounded. What happened? Viscount. Verdier asked anxiously. Is your grace badly hurt? Damien smiled faintly. Hunting on horseback was dull, so I gave chase on foot and was nipped. If it's only a small wound, Chloe should be able to stitch it, Alice said sharply, stabbing her food with her fork. Unfortunately, we don't have any anesthetic, so you'll have to bear the pain. Your grace, we really should call a physician, Chloe insisted. Alice cut in immediately. Dozens of villagers have fallen ill, and there's only one doctor tending to them. We shouldn't monopolize his time over a minor wound. Damien smiled again. I suppose you're right. He turned to Chloe. Lady Chloe, would you mind taking a look after dinner? Viscount Verdier grew flustered. Your grace, we shouldn't take this lightly. Please allow me to fetch the physician at once. Damien shook his head. When I was here before, Lady Chloe tended to my soldiers' wounds. I have faith she's excellent at her work. The Viscount beamed with pride. Oh, you remember that? From the corner of his eye, Damien glanced at Chloe. I haven't forgotten a single detail of the events that took place on these grounds, he said calmly. Chloe's face drained of color. What? Does this man truly want from me? Later that night, Chloe arrived at Damien's room with her medical tray. He was seated casually, reading a book. Please show me your wound, Your Grace, she said, standing before him. Why don't you look for it yourself? He replied calmly. I will, but first you must roll up your sleeves, Chloe said, taking a seat. He closed the book and turned to her. I'm sure you're capable of that much, Chloe. With all due respect, Your Grace, she replied steadily, it is not proper for an unmarried woman such as myself to touch a man's body. How old-fashioned, Damien commented. He tossed the book aside and began unbuttoning his shirt. But I suppose you're right. He finished unbuttoning his shirt and shrugged it off with casual ease. Lady Chloe, he added lightly, a teasing curve to his lips. I know it may be difficult to resist, but it would be best if you didn't stare. Chloe flushed instantly. She had never asked him to remove his shirt in the first place. Honestly, the audacity of this man. Calming herself, she stood and began cleaning his wound. This may be painful, she warned. No problem, he replied casually. You may make me suffer as much as you like. Did you learn this from your physician? Yes, Chloe said while stitching carefully. I learned medicine from him. But it's a different pursuit that's coming in handy now. And what might that be? He asked. Embroidery, she replied seriously. Damien laughed. I never regarded embroidery as a useful pastime. Then, abruptly, he asked, Does your sister still have secret rendezvous in the dark? Chloe startled at the sudden change in topic. No, she replied. Since that night, she's realized her mistake. Thanks to you, discussions of her marriage to Count Cormier are now underway. I'm very appreciative. Had I known my silence would be repaid with 3 months of silence from you, Damien said, leaning closer. I would never have done you that favor. I wrote many letters, Chloe answered hesitantly. I never received a single one, he said sharply, because I could never bring myself to send them, she admitted, lightly pushing him back. And please, Your Grace, you're too close. Don't make excuses, he said quietly. Tell me the truth, Chloe. She bit her lip, then pushed harder this time. It's because you despise me. I know how unbearably repulsive you find me, so I hesitated. I didn't know how to repay you. She stood abruptly. My apologies, but I finished what I came here to do. I should take my leave. In her haste, her cane slipped. The tray fell from her hands, and she lost her balance. Before she could fall, Damien caught her. She landed on the bed with a dull thud, him hovering above her. The air grew hot and heavy. Her eyes drifted to the wound she had just stitched. Worried it might reopen, she said softly, "Your Grace, your arm." "You can always fix it again," his voice came from above. "Can't you?" She clenched her dress nervously. "What is it that you want from me?" she asked. He took a strand of her hair, kissed it lightly, and replied, "I think you already know the answer." Chloe turned her face away. "I am only here to treat your wound, as per my father's instruction." "My dear Lady Chloe," he smiled, "do you truly believe that's what he wants?" It was the same conversation they had shared 3 years ago. "I understand that after living on the battlefield for so long, you doubt people's intentions," Chloe said carefully. "However, to believe that every woman in the kingdom is desperate to marry you," she met his eyes, "is rather an egotistical delusion, is it not, Your Grace?" Damien froze. Then he laughed, loudly. Chloe watched him in silence, wondering if he truly was unhinged. At last, he spoke. "Very well. Shall we put your theory to the test?" He sat up, pulling her with him, then released her. "You may go now, Lady Chloe. You've done what you came here to do." Chloe left his room and let out a long breath, finally free from his grasp. Back in her own room, she wondered why she had ever wasted time thinking about such a detestable man, and why she had even prepared those gloves as a gift to thank him. Still, she reminded herself not to let emotion get the better of her. It was because of him that Alice had met Count Cormier. She opened the window, letting a cool breeze flow in. Once Alice is married, she thought, things will stabilize, and everything will be all right. The next morning, Alice paused mid-sip, her teacup hovering in the air. "Chloe?" she asked, utterly surprised. "Are you sure it was his arm that was injured, not his head?" Before Chloe could respond, Viscount Verdier spoke again, visibly unsettled. "Your Grace, I'm not certain I heard you correctly." Damien placed his cup calmly on the table. "I said I wish to propose marriage to your daughter, Lady Alice Verdier." The air froze. "Well, you see," Viscount began awkwardly, "talks of her engagement with Count Cormier are already underway." "That does not change my desire to have her hand in marriage," Damien replied with a polite smile. "And it seems you do not find me an adequate suitor, Lord Verdier." The tension in the hall thickened. No one knew how to react to the Duke's sudden proposal. "That is not the case, Your Grace," Viscount said hastily. "Regardless of my own thoughts, I must respect my daughter's wishes." Damien rose from his seat. "Indeed you must. I will give you 3 days to deliberate," he continued. "In the meantime, I shall stay at my villa on the neighboring estate." He turned toward Chloe, fastening his gloves. "I hope you will give this matter thorough consideration." Then he left. Alice fled to her room, sobbing. "I never asked to become a duchess," she cried. "I know this is a wonderful opportunity for you, but—" "Alice," Chloe said gently, trying to calm her, "if you don't want this, you don't have to go through with it." She didn't understand why the Duke had suddenly proposed. "Is this connected to the test he mentioned last night?" "I'll speak to father," Chloe assured her. Alice clung to her desperately. "What will happen if I refuse the Duke? But don't cry," Chloe said softly. "Everything will be all right," but Alice's heart held something else entirely. "I'm in love with Eddie," she confessed. "Alice, that man is—" Chloe began, but Alice cut her off, her voice breaking. "I'm carrying his child, Chloe." The words struck like lightning. "What can I do?" Alice sobbed. Chloe was utterly stunned. Later, Chloe sat alone in her room. Have we placed too heavy a burden on Alice? Was this the result of our own selfish greed? If this was the truth, then she had no choice. She would stop this marriage, and she would convince her father, no matter the cost. The next day, Chloe sat with her father, determination steady in her eyes. "I wish to speak about Alice's marriage," she began. Viscount Verdier sighed heavily. "I've been thinking about it as well. A marriage with House Thisse brings both relief and concern." "Relief," he continued, "because the Duke would never abandon his wife, even if fault were found with your sister. House Thisse understands better than anyone how cruel fate is toward a divorced woman in this kingdom." "Father," Chloe interrupted firmly, "there is something I must tell you." Before she could say more, the door burst open. "Lord Verdier! Lady Chloe!" Gilles appeared. "Lady Alice has disappeared." He handed them a letter he had found in Alice's room. Viscount snatched it with trembling hands and opened it. "To my beloved father and my dear sister, I grew up witnessing the boundless love between father and mother. That is why I can no longer ignore what my heart desires. For the sake of the child I carry, I wish to hold my head high. To prove that, to myself, I will relinquish the name Verdier and live simply as Alice. I apologize, father, for my selfish actions. I hope one day I may make amends." The letter slipped from Viscount's grasp. Unable to bear the shock, he collapsed to the floor. Several hours later, when he regained consciousness, the first thing he asked was, "Chloe, did you know?" "I was only aware of the man," she admitted quietly. "The fact that you never mentioned it," Viscount said heavily, "means you disapproved of him." Chloe shook her head. "If Alice chose him despite my objections, then he must be a worthy man." She took her father's hand. "I trust her judgment, father." Then she added gently, "As for Duke Thisse, leave him to me. I will speak with him." She rose with a faint smile. Outside the room, Chloe found Gilles waiting. "You looked the other way when she left, didn't you?" she asked softly. Gilles nodded. "I suppose there's no hiding anything from you," he said apologetically. "Thank you for being there for her," Chloe replied. "I wasn't sure what the right thing to do was. That's why I'm grateful you helped her leave." Gilles lowered his head. "Lady Chloe, please don't think you must take responsibility for this. If you do, I don't know how I could live with myself." Chloe met his gaze, her resolve unwavering. "But I am the only one who can look after this house now," she said, "so I will find a way for all of us to survive, even if it means making a dangerous choice." 3 days later, Chloe stood on an outdoor balcony when a man's voice rang. "Did you find my offer of marriage so pleasing that you decided to inform me of its acceptance in person?" Damien spoke casually as he approached. "There was something I needed to discuss," Chloe replied. "That is why I came myself." He tilted his head. "Are you suffering from some sort of illness?" "What do you mean?" Chloe asked, flustered. "If not," Damien continued nonchalantly, seating himself on the sofa, "then why don't you come closer and sit beside me?" His open shirt did little to conceal his broad chest. Not wishing to argue, Chloe finally sat down next to him. "My wound isn't healing," Damien said casually. "Have you seen a physician?" she asked. "No," he replied. "Will you apply some of this solution for me?" He gestured toward the bottles nearby. Chloe, who had come to refuse his proposal, silently leaned closer. She cleaned the wound and advised him to avoid going out too much in the heat so it could heal properly. "But we don't have such pleasant summers in house this," he said lightly. "So I want to enjoy it while I can." When she finished, he spoke again. "So, why was my proposal rejected?" Chloe hesitated, then answered, "Marriage is physically infeasible for my sister." Damien laughed. "And why is that? Did she suddenly pass away?" Chloe clenched her dress. "Before I tell you the truth," she said carefully, "I want to ask you something." She met his gaze. "The reason you wished to marry my sister, was it because of me?" He laughed again. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" He was referring to when she called him arrogant and delusional for believing every woman wished to marry him. With a smirk, he added, "But I would say it is you, Lady Chloe, who is absorbed in delusion, thinking I would marry the indebted daughter of a low-ranking viscount simply to torment her disabled sister." Chloe flinched and turned her face away in embarrassment. "You're right. I also think it's unlikely. Sometimes you're amusing," he remarked. Then Chloe asked quietly, "Then does that mean you love Alice?" Damien sighed. "Do I strike you as a romantic who believes marriage is founded on love? Then there can only be one explanation." Chloe said firmly, "There must be a pressing reason you need to marry a daughter of House Verdier, one you cannot reveal." Damien nodded slightly. "Go on." "If there is a rational reason you would reject every other proposal to marry into a low-ranking family," Chloe continued, "then it wouldn't matter which daughter you married." She looked at him directly. "You might even prefer to wed a woman with a flaw so conspicuous that no one would give her a second glance." Damien smiled and leaned closer. "You mean, for instance, a woman who has lost the use of one leg?" "If I had lost the use of both?" Chloe replied flatly. "Perhaps I would have made a more perfect bride for you, wouldn't I?" Damien leaned closer still. He lifted her chin, and in the next moment, captured her lips. Chloe's eyes widened in shock. The air grew hot as he deepened the kiss, his breath mingling with hers, until she found herself momentarily overwhelmed. Then he pulled back, watching her flustered expression. Chloe shoved him away. "What do you think you're doing? You keep making such remarks," he replied calmly. "I simply wanted to see how sharp that tongue truly is." He pulled her lightly back against him and kissed her neck once before murmuring, "It seems like the perfect opportunity to ask whether you could bear me in heir." Chloe froze, then struck him hard across the cheek. "To behave this way when you have yet to respond to my offer is shockingly disrespectful, Your Grace," she said, breathing hard. Damien turned his head back slowly, licking his lip. "Well," he commented, "that was a fitting response." He rose and began buttoning his shirt. "But I suggest you familiarize yourself with the principles of negotiation again. You may leave, now." A few days later, Chloe sat in the sitting room, unconsciously brushing her fingers against her lips. The memory of that kiss still lingered there. "Are you all right, my lady?" Gilles asked with concern. "You look rather pale." "Yes, I'm fine," Chloe replied firmly. They then spoke about the matter troubling the household. The royal family had continued sending gifts, all meant for Alice, the woman Duke Thisse had proposed to. "The garden is still filled, with wagons carrying presents," Gilles reported. Then, hesitating, he added, "If I may ask, did your conversation with the Duke not go well?" Chloe lowered her gaze. Of course, the conversation had ended bitterly. If her intuition was correct, Prince Johannes was the official heir to the throne. But there was one man whose influence rivaled that of the royal family itself, a man who commanded the people's support, Duke Damien von Thisse. If such a man married the daughter of a low-ranking viscount, the royal family would surely welcome it. Damien knew this as well. So why was he doing this? Before Chloe could think further, a knock sounded at the door. An attendant entered. "A guest has arrived, Lady Chloe. Who is it?" she asked. "It's Duke Thisse. Shall I inform the master?" Chloe flinched, then stood. "No need. Let father rest. I will prepare myself and meet him." But when she reached her room, she froze. Damien was already inside. "I see you look quite surprised too." "Find me here," he said with a grin. Chloe frowned. "It is improper to enter a lady's room without permission, Your Grace." "I couldn't help myself," he replied as he rose. "I missed you too much. This is a private space," Chloe said firmly. "Let us go to the drawing room." Damien stepped closer, blocking her path. "That won't be necessary, my lady." He toyed with a strand of her hair. "Our relationship will soon be such that privacy between us won't be required." From the side, Gilles stood frozen, stunned by the Duke's behavior. Damien's sharp gaze flicked toward him. "Shut the door and leave." His tone left no room for refusal. Gilles obeyed, his hands trembling as he closed the door, unable to understand why the Duke was behaving like a man who already claimed Lady Chloe as his own. Inside the room, Damien presented a necklace. "These jewels have been passed down through generations of House Thisse," he said calmly. "By tradition, my mother should be the one to give them to you, but she does not fully approve of this match." Chloe nodded. "That is to be expected," she replied evenly. Damien studied her for a moment. "Are you merely pretending to be calm?" he asked, sounding slightly displeased. "Or do you truly feel indifferent?" Chloe met his gaze and asked quietly, "Does this mean you are accepting my offer, Your Grace?" Damien smiled. "Yes." He retrieved the necklace from its box. "Chloe Verdier, consider this a proposal." Then he asked plainly, "Will you be my wife?" Chloe looked at him for a long moment before bowing her head. "I am truly grateful that you have decided to accept my offer." "Grateful?" he echoed. "And how will you prove that?" "I will do my utmost to assist you in every endeavor you undertake," she replied firmly. "And what do you think I want?" he asked, returning the necklace to the box. "What do you believe I seek from you?" Chloe hesitated. "Must I run my tongue across your lips again to make you speak?" he added coolly, lowering her head. She answered, "I believe it is power that you seek, though I am too short-sighted to know your precise intentions." "Chloe," he said sharply, "you are not short-sighted. From now on, you are not to say such things." She flinched, then nodded. "I will do everything within my capacity to assist you. And if, in the future, you wish for a divorce, I will willingly accept it." "You would grant me a divorce?" he scoffed. "How insolent. Your arrogance infuriates me." "I apologize if that is how it sounded," Chloe said quietly. "That was not my intention." "Then what is your intention?" he pressed. "What is it that you want from me?" Clenching her dress, Chloe finally said, I want to be a duchess." Damien stood, retrieved the necklace, and placed it around her neck. Chloe froze, hardly believing what was happening. Leaning in from behind, he whispered, "How does it feel to wear the jewel of House Thisse?" Her neck flushed red. "It feels heavy, Your Grace. This is nothing compared to the responsibility you will bear as a duchess," he replied softly. "Do you still wish to be my wife?" She turned slightly toward him and answered firmly, "I wish for nothing more than that right now." "I see," he murmured, brushing his thumb against her lips. "And have you given further thought to the principles of negotiation?" She nodded slowly. "Then tell me," he said quietly, "what do you think I want at this very moment?" Realizing there was no escape, Chloe grasped his collar and pulled him close, pressing her lips to his. He stiffened in surprise, then drew her in, deepening the kiss. Chloe closed her eyes, clutching her dress, his presence overwhelming, his tongue tangled with hers, insistent and unyielding, like the snake she had once seen in the forest. At last, she released his collar, her face burning. "Is this too much for you?" he asked. Unable to find her voice, she only nodded. He smiled. "You will have to grow accustomed to it. Things will only become more intense from here on, my dear wife-to-be." And in that moment, Chloe understood. She was now bound to this man for the rest of her life. Later, the decision of their marriage was announced to Viscount Verdier. "I expect she will make a fine duchess," Damien said with a bright smile. The Viscount beamed. "Of course she will, I guarantee it. My daughter is a wise young lady," he said proudly. "I'm certain she will win everyone's hearts, if only you can make her happy." Chloe remained silent. Her gaze dropped to the hand holding hers. Damien was wearing the gloves she had prepared for him, the ones she had never gathered the courage to give. When did he find them, she wondered. Damien spoke again. "In that case, Viscount, will you grant me the forest on the Verdier estate and the mountain path that leads to it?" "The forest?" the Viscount repeated, blinking in surprise. "But the soil is barren, Your Grace. It cannot be used for much." Still, Damien replied calmly, "It is cherished by Lady Chloe. And it also happens to be where everything began between the two of us." On the day of the wedding, they stood together in the chapel. The bishop's voice echoed solemnly. "Do you swear to stand by your spouse and fulfill your duties through all trials and troubles you may face?" "I do," they answered together. "You may now kiss the bride." Damien leaned closer. Chloe closed her eyes, bracing herself, already familiar with the intensity of his kisses. But instead, he placed a hand on her shoulder, pulled her close, and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. Pulling back with a smirk, he asked softly, "What? Were you expecting something else?" Flustered, Chloe avoided his gaze. She couldn't say it aloud, but yes, she had expected more. Viscount Verdier could hardly contain his joy. Behind him, however, Gilles watched with a troubled expression, his eyes lingering on the couple newly declared husband and wife. "Chloe?" Damien called. She looked up, only for him to suddenly wrap an arm around her waist and lift her into his arms. "Please, put me down," she protested, startled by the sudden motion. Damien leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her cheek. "My wife," he murmured, "do you intend to drag this out?" His intention was clear. After a moment's hesitation, Chloe raised her arms and gently clasped them around her husband's neck, as a bride should. "Well done," Damien said quietly. "Chloe von this." A few days later, rumors began to spread throughout the Verdier estate. People whispered endlessly about how Duke Thisse had left immediately after the wedding ceremony, how he had rushed to the capital without even spending the night with his bride. "Does that mean the Duchess has been left alone for 3 whole months?" someone murmured. Gilles heard every word as he waited for Chloe. The entire town buzzed with the same topic, an article published in Red Veil. The article claimed that the newly married Duke had been unable to restrain his fierce passions. It spoke of him being seen in the company of Marchioness Isabella. At the same time, Chloe sat quietly inside a tailor's shop, reading the very same article. "My lady," the shop owner said anxiously upon noticing her expression, "I will burn that paper at once." Chloe shook her head. "That won't be necessary," she replied calmly. "Burning it won't make the truth or the rumors turn to ash." She set the magazine aside and rose after giving her measurements for a dress. The shop owner bowed deeply. "Men and their inability to control themselves will be the ruin of this country," she muttered under her breath. On the way back, Chloe sat in the carriage beside Gilles. He urged her gently. "Please leave everything to me for the time being, my lady. I'll handle all the estate matters. It would be best if you avoid unnecessary attention after that article." But Chloe shook her head. She was not weak enough to abandon her duties as Duchess simply because of rumors. Retreating now would only give them more power. Gilles looked at her with concern. There was little more he could do. Chloe's thoughts drifted back to the day her husband had left. After the wedding ceremony ended, Damien had said that his business there was finished and that he would return to the capital at once. He had advised Chloe to remain behind and perform her ducal duties from the estate. Not once in the past 3 months had he replied to her letters. Could that article be the reason? She wondered. Truthfully, she had never expected anything from this marriage. There was no reason such rumors should affect her. And yet, they left behind an unease she could not quite name. Noticing her troubled expression, Gilles spoke again. "Lady Chloe, there is good news waiting for you at the manor." "Good news?" she asked, startled. "What is it?" "A letter arrived from Lady Alice," he said. "It's short, but it seems she's doing well." At once, the color returned to Chloe's face. If Alice was safe and happy with the man she had chosen, if her father was doing well, if the people of Verdier were in high spirits because their lady had become a duchess, then perhaps that was enough. In truth, she would have preferred to live apart from him anyway, unaware that once she had bound herself to that man, a peaceful life of her own choosing was never truly an option. "As I mentioned in my previous letter, all is well at the Verdier estate thanks to you, your grace. I hope the business that called you away will soon be settled. I shall write again should anything noteworthy arise. Sincerely, Chloe Verdier." Damien finished reading the letter. A smirk curved his lips. "Chloe Verdier," he murmured. "Does she not intend to take my name?" His gaze drifted to the newspaper lying beside him. The article featured his image alongside Marchioness Isabella, boldly suggesting a rumored affair between them. Chloe must have seen it too, yet she had not mentioned it even once. He wondered what she had felt upon reading it. Did she cry after seeing her husband with another woman? Probably not. She would suppress it, just as she always did, unaware that this very restraint was what irritated him the most. The thought made him laugh softly as he continued reading. The article went on about how Duke Thisse had carried on a secret affair during what should have been his honeymoon period, strengthening Prince Johannes's position. While rumors of the king's failing health continued to circulate, they had reported exactly what he had fed them. His mind returned to Chloe's words. "I believe it is power you desire, and I will do my best to assist you in every way." He scoffed. As if she could truly do anything, and yet, whenever he thought of her, an inexplicable urge rose within him, something sharp and restless. From the moment he first saw her tending to wounded soldiers, when she herself looked barely able to stand, that strange feeling had begun, and it only grew stronger each time he saw her. Damien opened a drawer and pulled out a pair of gloves. A sudden thirst stirred. She loved embroidery. Perhaps I should lock her in a room and let her embroider all day, he thought. And if she runs out of fabric, I could even let her embroider my body. The following day, Damien visited the king. The old man lay bedridden, his breathing labored. My days are numbered, the king said weakly. So I trust you will serve Johannes even after I am gone. With a sigh, he added, You are aware he is not of sound mind. Swear before God that you will remain loyal to him. Damien's brow furrowed. I will, he replied coolly, if he is worthy of my loyalty. What did you say? The king demanded, coughing violently. Do not forget, it is your duty to serve the king. Damien's expression hardened. Then the future of this country is clear, he said coldly. It will be ruined by a man who has gone mad, while no one dares to acknowledge it. He paused, then added lightly, Oh, but I take that back. His madness, and the people who died by his hands, have already begun to surface. Rumors of bodies pulled from his chambers are spreading. It won't be long before they are no longer dismissed as rumors. Damien rose to his feet. Your Majesty, I have risked my life on the battlefield for this country, he said firmly, and I will always be ready to fight for it. So it is only right, he continued, that the throne belongs to a man worthy of it. Don't you agree? The king shouted in fury. What do you dare imply? Since when have you harbored such self-serving ambitions? Damien had already turned away, but stopped. He glanced back over his shoulder. Since when? He murmured. Then, facing the king with a confident smile, he answered, Since the day I was born. Meanwhile, Chloe sat on the sofa, her thoughts repeatedly drifting back to the article. She tried, and failed, to distract herself. Just then, Viscount Verdier entered. Chloe, dear, he said gently, a letter has arrived for you, from your grace. She froze. He had not written to her even once since leaving. So why now? She opened the letter. To my beloved wife, Chloe von Thisse, he had deliberately written her name with his. Wait for me at the Thisse estate while carrying out your duties as Duchess. I hope you have been looking forward to our meeting as impatiently as I have. Your husband, Damien Ernst von Thisse, the next day, Viscount Verdier entrusted Gilles with escorting Chloe to the Thisse estate. Gilles bowed and nodded in acknowledgement, but the Viscount's heart was heavy as he prepared to send his daughter away. Noticing his worry, Chloe stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Father, you don't need to worry, she said gently. His Grace cherishes me. I will be all right. Even as she said it, she knew she didn't want to go. But she had no choice. I will be fine, she added with a small smile. So please, send me off with a smile as well. During the journey, Chloe sat quietly in the train coach, while Gilles spoke with some embarrassment. Lady Chloe, I would have been perfectly fine riding in the freight car. This feels far too extravagant for me. Chloe smiled softly. We have 2 long days of travel ahead, and soon I'll be spending much of my time alone. Along the way, they watched the snow slowly melting, a sign that spring would soon arrive. After the long journey, they finally reached the birch castle of House Thisse. A single head maid arrived to welcome them. I am Eliza, she introduced herself, bowing. The castle was vast, yet only one person had come to greet Chloe. It was clear enough, she was not particularly welcome. Setting that aside, Chloe requested politely, Please prepare food for Gilles for his return journey. The maid glanced at her irritably. I've already assigned that task to a maidservant. She then turned sharply. Please follow me. Chloe turned back to Gilles. I'm sorry, I won't be able to see you off. Have a safe journey home, Gilles. As she followed the head maid, limping slightly, Gilles watched her with deep concern until she disappeared from sight. Inside, Chloe bowed respectfully. My name is Chloe. It is an honor to finally meet you. Raise your head, a woman ordered. Chloe hesitated, then lifted her gaze. You're quite a pretty one, the woman said calmly. Damien's mother. You remind me of the very first deer Damien ever hunted. Chloe let out a hesitant laugh. That comparison was unexpected. Are you secretly acquainted with death? Lady Thisse asked, stepping closer. Or perhaps knowledgeable about the skeletons hidden in the royal family's closet? Nothing of the sort, Your Grace, Chloe replied quickly. Then that means he chose you for reasons beyond mere practicality, Lady Thisse said, brushing Chloe's hair aside. I see you're beautiful, but hunting a deer with an injured leg is rather unusual for my son. When he asked me for the family jewels, I could hardly believe my ears. She waved her hand dismissively, then lifted Chloe's chin. Or perhaps it was simply curiosity. He does enjoy a thrill now and then. I'm not certain why he chose me, Chloe said firmly, but I intend to serve him to the best of my ability, despite my shortcomings. You're brighter than I expected, Lady Thisse replied, and quite pretty. My jewels will suit you well. You're clever too. You'll be of great help to me in this castle. Then, smiling brightly, she added, Now that you're here, how about I tell you what Damien was like as a child? Later that night, Chloe finally lay down on her bed. Damien's mother had spent hours proudly boasting about her son. Like mother, like son, Chloe thought. Arrogant as he was, one thing was clear. He had been deeply adored as a child. Exhausted, she turned onto her side. That was when she noticed a framed portrait of her husband beside the bed. It was almost as if he were there, Chloe sighed. He even placed a portrait of himself in his wife's bedchamber. Soon enough, her thoughts faded, and sleep finally claimed her. I was surprised you shut yourself away in the study for 3 days right after arriving, Lady Thisse said lightly. Then she chuckled. I see now, you're quite like Damien. Once he focuses on something, he barely notices the sun rising. She set her cup down and asked calmly, So, what was it you wished to discuss? Chloe hesitated, then spoke carefully. Eliza, would you mind giving us some privacy? Eliza's expression hardened at once, but Lady Thisse waved a hand dismissively. There's no need. Eliza has served this household since the day Damien was born. I consider her family. Chloe's expression tightened. She recalled the letter that had arrived from her husband. To my dear Duchess. How are you finding life at Birch Castle? I trust you are performing your duties satisfactorily, and I hope you will not disappoint me. Missing you very much, Damien. To Chloe, it felt less like a letter, and more like a warning. Still, she was a duchess now. She had to fulfill her duty. After 3 days of reviewing the ledgers, she finally spoke. After examining the accounts, Chloe began. I discovered several discrepancies in the castle's finances. Lady Thisse slowly placed her teacup down. My dear, she said coolly, overseeing a castle of this size is no simple task. Yes, Chloe replied, but the records don't clearly show where the funds are being spent. Chloe continued steadily. The tax amounts collected from the people do not add up. There is also a discrepancy between the number of wine bottles recorded in the cellar and those listed in the ledgers. This isn't an isolated incident, Chloe added. These irregularities appear repeatedly. She paused, and they began around the time Eliza assumed the role of steward. Chloe's gaze shifted toward Eliza. Eliza trembled. Never in her dreams had she imagined being exposed by a woman who had arrived only 3 days ago as Eliza began to sob. Lady Thisse reached out and grasped her arm. Please leave us for a moment, she ordered. Once Eliza left, Lady Thisse stood abruptly. Why didn't you warn me this was about Eliza? She demanded. We could have discussed this privately. I apologize, Your Grace, Chloe replied evenly. But Eliza is not the only one involved. We must also dismiss the stablemaster, Robinson. Lady Thisse frowned. The stablemaster? What does he have to do with this? To smuggle goods on this scale, Chloe explained. Eliza could not have acted alone. Wagons would have been necessary. Lady Thisse sighed heavily. Those two are loyal servants who supported me during difficult times, she said. Their dismissal is not something to be taken lightly. Chloe lifted her gaze. That is precisely why their dishonesty cannot be forgiven. Ma'am, she said firmly. If we overlook this, the crack will only widen. If you turn a blind eye, their transgressions will grow worse. Lady Thisse's expression cracked. Chloe, she snapped. Why do you insist on making everything so difficult? And why do you keep calling me ma'am as though we were strangers? Chloe hesitated, then asked softly. Then, would you permit me to call you mother? That wouldn't be appropriate, either, Lady Thisse scoffed. She stood. This conversation is over. I will discuss this with Damien when he returns and make a decision then. And I have no appetite, she added sharply. You may eat lunch by yourself. Then, shall I bring your meal to your room? Chloe asked. No, Lady Thisse replied curtly. I understand you don't want my company, Chloe began, but skipping meals is harmful for— Enough, Lady Thisse shouted. Must you respond to everything I say? You really are quite exasperating. With that, she brushed past her, leaving Chloe alone in the room. Lunch was served to Chloe, yet no one stayed to accompany her. Even the maid left, quietly closing the door behind her. Only then did Chloe realize how deeply she had made herself disliked. She had overheard whispers, how the lady who had arrived only days ago dared to dismiss a long-serving maid, and how important it was to be prudent when choosing a bride. Her appetite vanished. She missed her father. How is he doing? Did Gilles return safely? Has another letter arrived from Alice? And when will the Duke return? But even if he did, would anything truly change? She remembered his words, perform your duties as Duchess. Chloe let out a quiet sigh and shook her head. Of course not. Driving people into a corner seemed to be a tradition of House This. She stabbed her fork into the food and muttered under her breath, I don't know who's worse, the mother or the son. You seem to be having a pleasant conversation with yourself. A man's voice sounded behind her. Chloe looked up to see Damien standing there, smiling down at her. I must have made you very lonely while I was gone, he added with a smirk. Chloe immediately stood. Your Grace. Before she could finish, Lady Thisse rushed in. Damien, my dear son, she exclaimed, embracing him with a radiant smile. Why didn't you say you were coming? I returned because I missed you, Mother, he replied easily. Chloe stood quietly to the side, witnessing the warmth between mother and son. Then Damien's gaze shifted to her. Rushing here made me hungry, he said. I think I'll have something to eat. Of course, Lady Thisse said brightly. I'll have something prepared at once. No need, Damien replied, turning toward the table. There's plenty here. I'll have that. They sat down. Did you find your stay pleasant while I was away, Chloe? He asked casually. Of course, Chloe replied calmly. Everyone has been very kind to me. That's good to hear, Damien said, taking a bite. The next second he spat it out. Call the chef at once, he ordered coldly. Moments later, the head chef hurried in. How did leftovers meant for the poorhouse end up on the table of House Thisses? Damien demanded. The poorhouse? The chef murmured, clearly startled. It seems those assigned to set the table must have made a mistake. Who committed such a grave mistake? Damien asked. His voice was so dangerous that the servant responsible immediately fell to their knees, begging for forgiveness. How dare you ask for forgiveness after insulting my family? Damien scoffed. Chloe spoke hurriedly. Your Grace, she said firmly, it is only one meal. Please forgive them. Damien smiled faintly. My wife, this food was meant for the poorhouse. Sitting here and consuming such scraps is an insult to my name. You may come from a humble family, he continued, but even that much should be common sense. Chloe met his gaze. My apologies, Your Grace, she said calmly, but the food is still fit for human consumption. As your wife, and as the lady of this house, she added steadily, I ask that you restrain yourself, show them mercy, and grant them the chance to serve a proper meal befitting House This. That night, Chloe finally sat down on her bed. Thanks to her intervention at lunch, the servants had been spared. I suppose I should be generous if that is what my wife wants, Damien had said, granting her request. Only then had Chloe allowed herself a quiet sigh of relief. At least no heads had rolled. But her peace was short-lived. A maid soon appeared at the door. His Grace wishes to see you in his chamber. Chloe straightened at once. At this hour? What could he possibly want? Please inform his Grace that I will come as soon as I am ready, she replied carefully. Before the maid could leave, the door opened again. Damien himself stepped inside. As soon as you're ready? He repeated lazily. What preparations could you possibly need? Chloe stiffened and instinctively pulled her nightgown closer around herself. There's no need for decorum at this hour, he added coolly. Don't you agree, my wife? He stood on the edge of her bed without invitation. Chloe turned her face away. I will come to your chamber once I am dressed, she said firmly. Please give me a few moments. Damien merely leaned back, unbothered. I said there's no need, he replied with a smirk. You can come as you are. Chloe frowned but steadied herself. With the help of her cane, she carefully got down from the bed. Are you unable to move without that? He asked casually. It's not easy, she snapped. Would you prefer to see me fall to the floor? That would be rather adorable, he answered without shame. Ignoring him, Chloe draped a shawl over herself. Damien extended his hand. Shall we go to my room, my wife? They soon arrived in Damien's chamber. It's late, Chloe said cautiously. What urgent matter did you wish to discuss? He laughed softly. What business do you think there could be between a husband and wife at this hour? Chloe froze. Her thoughts raced. Was he referring to what they had left undone on their wedding night? Heat rushed to her face, embarrassment flooding her. Damien's smirk deepened. He clearly knew exactly what she was thinking. I intend to reward you, he said lightly, for performing your duties as Duchess by dealing with Eliza and Robinson. Chloe looked at him in surprise. So, you already knew about their dishonesty? How could I not? He replied with a shrug. I simply turned a blind eye because of my affection for my mother. He stood and walked toward the window. She's far too attached, he continued. She'll be staying at our southern villa for a while. Fresh air will do her good. Then, glancing back at Chloe, he added, It should also make things easier for you here. He retrieved a carefully wrapped box from the side table and returned to her. Open it, he said. Chloe reached out and opened the box. Her eyes widened at what lay inside. I thought I'd give you something more practical, Damien said calmly. You seem to have a habit of losing your cane. It was a brace. Once you get used to it, he continued, you'll be able to walk comfortably without support. He looked at her expectantly. Now try it on so I can see. Chloe stared at it for a moment, then closed the box. Thank you for the gift, she said evenly. But whether I use it or not is at the discretion of the recipient. I'll try it another time. In truth, she didn't know how to use it. And she didn't want to be seen stumbling, especially not in front of him. She knew he would mock her. Then I suppose inviting your servant into your quarters was also at your discretion, Damien said coolly. Chloe's eyes widened in shock. Did you have someone follow us? When you belong to House This, he said coldly, there are always eyes on you. His gaze sharpened. So tell me, why show such generosity to a servant and bring him to my estate? To Chloe, the answer was simple. Gilles had been with her family since childhood. He was more family than servant, but Damien's words echoed in her mind. Eliza had served his family since birth, and yet she betrayed them. Chloe let out a quiet sigh. Please, she said softly. I ask you not to insult me. I'm not insulting you, Damien replied. I'm reminding you. He leaned closer. Your faithful servant has not yet left the Thisse station. If people discover he lingered here out of attachment to his mistress, what do you suppose they'll whisper behind your back? Gilles hadn't returned? Why? Chloe couldn't make sense of it, until Damien's voice cut in again. I believe you will not abandon your duties and bring shame upon me, he said coldly. So, Chloe von Thisse, put the brace on. Her fingers clenched in the fabric of her dress. She had no choice. At last, she put it on and tried to walk, only to collapse to the floor the very next moment. Damien knelt beside her at once. "What part is uncomfortable?" he asked, reaching out to inspect it. Chloe grabbed his hand sharply. "Don't. Then answer me," he said firmly. "I need to know how to fix it. The whole thing is uncomfortable," she cried, frustration spilling over. "I don't need it. It only causes me pain." "It will ease with time," Damien replied evenly. "Endure it." He brushed his fingers near her eyes. "Are you crying?" Chloe turned her face away. "No, why would I?" Damien smiled faintly. "Of course. Crying like a child would be unbecoming of a duchess." He slid his hand beneath the hem of her dress to adjust the brace. "Your Grace," Chloe whispered. Her breath hitched at the sensation. "You truly are a devil," she said through clenched teeth. Damien lifted her chin, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "My dear wife," he murmured with a smirk. "I've yet to show you just how much of a devil I can be." He tightened his grip on her thigh. Feeling her flinch, he asked quietly, "What do you feel right now?" "Resentment," Chloe answered after a moment. "I don't believe you," he said, pulling her leg closer. He leaned in until their chests were nearly touching. "Let me ask you again," he insisted. "How do you feel?" Chloe's heart raced at the closeness. She clenched the fabric of her dress. "My heart is beating painfully fast," she admitted. His hand slipped into the brace, loosening it as he spoke. "Is your whole body burning like an ember?" he murmured. "Does your blood rush so fiercely you can barely control your breathing?" Slowly, he removed the brace from her leg. "Tell me, Chloe," he continued softly. "Does your heart feel as though it might burst from your chest?" Her face reddened. Every word he spoke was true, and that was precisely why resentment filled her, because every sense was being overwhelmed by the man looming over her, as though he intended to consume her whole. When their lips met, Chloe closed her eyes, as if surrendering to the devil before her. After a long moment, he pulled back, gently stroking her hair. "Tell me," he asked, "how does it feel to kiss the man you compared to the devil?" Her heart still raced, but she couldn't allow herself to be swept away like this. "Please," she whispered, "allow me to return to my bedchamber." He remained silent, gazing at her for a moment. Then he spoke calmly. "I suppose I must oblige, if that is what my wife wishes." He lifted her carefully, and soon after, Chloe was returned to her room. The next day, Duke Damien sat at the dining table with several members of the royal court, Chloe seated beside him. The nobles praised him generously, calling him a devoted husband, admiring how swiftly he had married and settled his household. Before Chloe could grow comfortable, the topic shifted. Reports had arrived of unusual movements in the neighboring duchy, signs that suggested preparations for war. The court agreed they could no longer ignore it and pressed the Duke to reach a decision. Damien listened silently. Then his gaze fell on his wife. "I would like to hear what my wife thinks," he said calmly. Chloe flinched. She could feel every pair of eyes turned toward her. "I don't know much," she began carefully, "but I do know that the people of Swanton are tired of war." Damien tilted his head. "Perhaps," he replied, "but conquering the duchy would ultimately benefit our people." "Yes," Chloe answered steadily, "but no one can guarantee victory. We also cannot assume the duchy will remain weak. It is perfectly capable of using its geographic advantage." A murmur spread through the room. No one had expected such a measured response from the Duchess. Several nobles praised her insight, but Damien was not finished. "So," he continued smoothly, "do you suggest we simply wait while their power grows? They've already begun raising tariffs on goods imported from Swanton. What would you do about that?" Once again, Chloe felt every gaze upon her. More precisely, she sensed they had been waiting all along, eager for her to falter. "Is he doing this to humiliate me?" The thought crossed her mind, but she refused to retreat. "The most effective way to prevent war," Chloe said firmly, "is to sign a peace treaty, one that avoids bloodshed through diplomacy. Promises can be broken," Damien countered coolly. A few nobles smirked. "Then we must ensure they cannot violate it," Chloe replied without hesitation. "There are many approaches, but the most effective is to form an alliance through marriage. A marriage alliance is effective," Damien said. "However, the duchy has 1 prince and 3 princesses, while Swanton has only Prince Johannes." A ripple of laughter passed through the table. Everyone knew Prince Johannes's reputation. To Chloe, unaware of the full extent of his infamy, it felt as though they were laughing at her suggestion itself. "Being wed to Prince Johannes is simply too dreadful to imagine," one noble scoffed. "It seems her ladyship hasn't been keeping up with the Red Veil." The mention of the magazine drew knowing smiles. Damien laughed lightly. "Well, now I'm curious myself. Has my wife ever read the Red Veil?" He turned his gaze to Chloe. "But judging from your expression, it seems you have." "Only by chance," Chloe replied calmly, "and I don't concern myself with such cheap tabloids." She rose from her seat. "Please excuse me," she said evenly. "I'll ask for dessert. Do continue your discussion." With that, she left the table. As she walked away, one thought echoed bitterly in her mind. "He's worse than I imagined." That night, when the entire estate had fallen silent, a loud bang echoed outside Chloe's room. Startled, she hurried to open the door. Eliza stood there breathless and crying. Before Chloe could ask anything, a maid rushed over in panic. "Miss Eliza, you mustn't be seen here. If His Grace finds out—" Eliza shook her off desperately. "Please, let go of me. I worked so hard to stay here." Chloe looked at her steadily. "Calm down, Eliza," she said gently. "And tell me why you're here." With a broken voice, Eliza sobbed. "It's my grandson. He's sick. He keeps losing consciousness. Please, Your Grace, allow me to see the family physician." At her words, Chloe's expression softened. She remembered being in that same condition as a child. "Call the physician at once," Chloe ordered. The maid hesitated, clearly worried about the Duke, but this time the Duchess did not waver. "Go, now." As the maid ran off, Chloe closed the door and turned back to Eliza. "Lead the way," she said firmly. "Fever doesn't wait." When they reached Eliza's house, Chloe quickly removed the boy's outer clothing. The child complained weakly that he felt cold. "He says he's cold. What are you doing?" Eliza cried in panic. Ignoring the fear, Chloe spoke calmly. "Go outside and bring snow. We need to lower his fever." Eliza froze. "If anything happens to him, I'll never forgive you. You can resent me later," Chloe replied steadily. "But if you don't want him to end up like me, you must trust me now." She administered the medicine carefully. After some time, the boy's fever finally broke. The physician arrived shortly after and turned to Eliza. "I was late. If not for the Duchess acting so quickly, the child would not have survived." Eliza collapsed in tears. "How can I ever repay you?" "There's no need," Chloe said softly. "I'm just glad he's safe." At that moment, the door opened. "Chloe." Everyone flinched. The Duke had arrived. Damien ignored everyone else, his gaze fixed solely on her. "Come outside," he ordered. As they walked, Chloe explained everything. Eliza was meant to leave 2 days ago, but her grandson fell ill. The money she stole ended up in her son's hands. He fled to the capital to gamble. She continued quietly. "The child is innocent. Adults are the ones who sinned. And Eliza devoted her life to house this. She can be considered family. We couldn't just abandon her." Damien listened in silence. "I apologize for calling the physician without your permission," Chloe added hesitantly, "but it was urgent." He stopped. "Chloe," she fell silent. "I never asked you to explain yourself," he said calmly. "I only want to know why you chose to help her, and I'm told you even wrote her a letter of recommendation." "She needed it," Chloe answered without hesitation. "After working her entire life at Birch Castle, she would never find proper work without help. And I called the physician because it was necessary." "Was it pity?" Damien asked. "Or guilt?" "No," Chloe replied firmly. "You always act with a reason, Your Grace." "Yes." "Almost always," he answered. "Well, I'm different," Chloe said, a slight pout forming. "Then tell me," he asked quietly, "what do you do instead of asking questions when you wish to become closer acquainted with someone?" She sighed. "I simply get to know people naturally. When you quietly observe someone, you learn things about them, without interrogating them." Damien noticed her hands, reddened from the cold. Without a word, he removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "I'm thinking of giving you another gift, Chloe," he said. She looked up in surprise. "I'm considering hiring Gilles Watteau for the vacant position of stablemaster. It seems he's been living poorly, working at the train station instead of returning to the Verdier estate. What do you think?" Chloe's face brightened instantly. "He's trustworthy," she said eagerly. "I can vouch for him, Your Grace." Then she added quickly, "And I swear, nothing improper has ever occurred between us." Damien listened quietly. Then he leaned closer, a trace of mischief in his eyes. "In that case, Chloe," he said softly, "kiss me. Then I will gladly employ him." "But Gilles' a free man," Chloe replied firmly. "He may work wherever he wishes." Damien smirked. "Then it seems the poor boy may soon find himself unwelcome in this." He stepped closer. "You see, I am a devoted husband. The less confidence my wife has in me, the fewer places he'll find himself accepted within my domain." Chloe exhaled sharply. "How unfortunate for the kingdom," she murmured. Then, lifting her chin, she spoke calmly. "Lower your head." Amused, Damien complied, only to be seized by the collar in the next instant. Chloe pulled him down and pressed her lips to his. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then his arms wrapped around her, returning the kiss with fierce intensity. When their lips finally parted, he spoke low and slow. "A commendable effort," he said. "Though unfortunate that it was done for another man's sake." His gaze darkened. "It pleases me. And insults me at the same time." Still, he kept his word. Gilles was appointed stablemaster, and Chloe felt a quiet relief as she wrote to her father, informing him that Gilles was doing well at the Thisse estate. That night, Chloe was summoned again. This time, Damien led her not to his chamber, but to the billiard table. "Play with me," he said casually. Chloe tilted her head. "I don't play without gain." He laughed. "Then what do you want? If I win," she said, chalking the cue, "you will stop summoning me to your chamber late at night." "Very well," Damien replied easily. "But if I win, I will take something of yours that I want." The game began. As Chloe focused on her shot, Damien spoke lightly. "You do know the essence of this game is deception, don't you?" "Do as you please," she replied coolly. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "In 2 days, guests will arrive at Birch Castle. I expect you to welcome them as Duchess." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "And one more thing. Marchioness Isabella will be among them." Chloe's hand faltered. She's rather particular," he continued softly. "I suggest you take extra care with the preparations." Her cue slipped. The ball missed its mark. "It appears you've lost, Chloe," Damien said with a satisfied smile. The name alone had been enough. "Now," he added smoothly, "it's time for you to give me what I want." "And what would that be?" she asked, resigned. "Your lips," he replied, fingers brushing her hair. "A sincere request, of course." She met his gaze. "Is it?" "Of course," he said lightly. "And don't forget, you proposed the wager." What he truly wanted, though, was to see her break, to see the restraint she clung to finally shatter. Chloe stepped closer. "Your Grace," she said quietly, "never have I felt such contempt for another person." Then she kissed him. When she pulled away, she whispered, "If there's nothing else, may I take my leave?" The door closed behind her. Damien leaned back against the table, exhaling sharply. A bitter scoff escaped his lips. He had gravely underestimated just how capable his wife was of driving him mad. A few days later, Chloe sat in the center, welcoming each noble lady one by one. At last, she turned to the final guest seated beside her. "Welcome, Lady Isabella," Chloe said calmly. Isabella bowed slightly. "Thank you. I was worried my presence here might upset you." Chloe's expression did not waver. "You are a close friend of His Grace," she replied evenly. "Why would I be upset?" Isabella flinched, then her eyes welled with tears. "Oh, I didn't mean it that way," she sobbed. Chloe immediately understood. She was doing this on purpose, and yet, here Isabella was, acting like the wronged one. "If you're feeling unwell," Chloe said smoothly, "I can have a room prepared for you to rest." At that, Isabella's crying grew louder. "I knew it," she said between sobs. "My presence was never welcome here." Murmurs spread among the noble women. Some whispered about how cold the Duchess's suggestions sounded. Just then, a familiar voice rang out behind Chloe. "What is going on here?" Damien had arrived. Chloe turned slightly. "Lady Isabella mentioned she wasn't feeling well," she explained, "so I suggested she rest inside the castle." Isabella stiffened, sensing her plan slipping away. She turned dramatically and said, "I should never have come. I knew how widows are regarded in this country." Instantly, sympathy bloomed around her. Damien stepped forward. "Shall I have a carriage prepared for you?" he asked. Chloe's gaze sharpened. She couldn't allow this to go any further. Rising with quiet authority, she spoke clearly. "If I felt uneasy because of you, Lady Isabella, I would never have sent an invitation." The room fell silent. "I merely suggested you rest," Chloe continued. "But if you're feeling well, you're more than welcome to remain with us. The choice is entirely yours, just as it is for everyone here." Isabella hesitated. Then, forcing a smile, she said, "I'm feeling much better now." The other ladies quickly followed, murmuring praise about the gathering, clearly unwilling to appear discourteous before the Duchess. "Thank you for your understanding," Chloe said. "Pudding will be served shortly. I hope you enjoy it." She turned to leave. "Oh," Damien said casually, stopping her. "That happens to be Isabella's favorite dessert." "Thank you for the hospitality, my wife." Chloe paused. Then she turned back slowly, smiling. "You're most welcome." She walked away without another glance. Behind her, Damien watched closely, searching her face, her posture, any crack he might enjoy. Further back, Isabella dabbed her eyes. A dangerous glint flickered in her gaze. That woman, she wasn't someone to be taken lightly. And yet, why was she even comparing herself to her? No matter what, Isabella was certain of one thing. She would never allow herself to be deprived of what she believed was hers. Later, as the others glided across the ice, Damien pushed Chloe forward in a skating wheelchair. "What pleasant weather," he remarked casually. "Are you enjoying yourself among the ladies?" "Yes," Chloe replied with a quiet sigh. "Everything went smoothly, thanks to you. And besides, I was merely doing my duty as Duchess." Damien glanced at her, amused. "Chloe," he asked suddenly, "do you resent me?" She flinched at the unexpected question, then answered calmly, "Even if I did, I wouldn't be foolish enough to admit it out loud." He tilted his head. "Why not?" Chloe leaned back slightly. "Because at the moment, my life is in your hands," she said dryly, "and I'd rather not be stranded in the middle of a frozen lake after offending you." Damien burst into laughter. "No one amuses me like you," he murmured. Just then, a nobleman called him aside. "Your Grace, my apologies if my wife showed any disrespect earlier to the Duchess." Damien barely looked at him. His gaze was fixed on Chloe, waiting quietly nearby. He wanted to know what went on inside her mind. If he learned everything about her, would it finally ease this relentless pull? A strange thought crossed his mind. Do I want this woman's love? The idea startled him. Have I gone mad? He muttered under his breath. Then he turned sharply to the man before him. Lord Spencer, Damien said coolly, leaning down to meet his eyes. If you seek forgiveness, ask it directly from my wife. He straightened. And if you're finished, I must return to her. He turned away. Lady Thisse, she's in danger. Damien froze. On the other side of the lake, Chloe's wheelchair suddenly tipped. She hit the ice hard as the chair overturned. A sharp crack echoed. Chloe tried to rise, but without her cane she couldn't stand. The cracks spread. Then, with a deafening sound, the ice gave way. Chloe plunged into the freezing water below. "Chloe!" She heard Damien's voice calling her, but soon, everything went silent. The cold swallowed her senses, numbing her body. Is this how I die, she wondered? If this was the end, she wanted to see them one last time. Her father, Alice, Gilles. Their faces passed through her fading thoughts. And then, she saw him, her husband, Damien von Thisse, calling her name softly. Perhaps, she thought as darkness closed in, before I die, I wanted to see him too. But in the very next second, strong arms wrapped around Chloe. Damien hauled her out of the freezing water and immediately pressed his mouth to hers, drawing out the water she had inhaled. After a moment, Chloe coughed violently, expelling the remaining water, but her body continued to tremble uncontrollably. Damien's expression darkened. Later, the royal physician insisted Chloe take complete rest. He warned that had the Duke been even a moment slower, her condition would have been far more severe. As Chloe listened, her thoughts drifted back to the chaos at the lake. My chair couldn't have overturned on its own. That meant someone had pushed her, deliberately. And it wasn't difficult to guess who could have been behind it. More troubling still, Margaret later informed her that all the guests had already departed, except for Marchioness Isabella. According to the servants, Isabella had fainted upon seeing Chloe unconscious. Chloe's eyes narrowed. "Where is she?" she asked calmly. "There's something I need to discuss with her." Meanwhile, in Isabella's chamber. Finally, Isabella said softly, "I have a moment to speak with you." The man seated before her lifted his glass lazily. "Since I've granted you the opportunity," Damien replied coolly. "Go on, speak." Isabella began at once. She spoke of Prince Johannes, how his illness was worsening, how the king was fully aware of it, and how rebellion loomed ever closer. She claimed the king had threatened her life, ordered her to bring Damien to Swain or face death. Then, with a faint smile, she offered her solution. "You should hide in Winsbury," she said smoothly. "I'll inform the king that you disappeared on the way to Swain." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Damien, I'm on your side. You don't need to worry." Damien remained silent for a moment. Then he lifted his hand and slowly brushed through her hair. "Isabella," he said calmly, "I do hope you're not foolish enough to believe I would follow that advice." Her eyes widened. "There's likely an assassin waiting for me there," he continued evenly. "I'd have to be mad to walk straight into a trap." What are you saying?" Isabella whispered, still trying to appear innocent. He laughed softly and reached for the bottle. "Don't play innocent," he said coldly. "Do you really think I'm unaware that you've betrayed me and chosen to side with the king?" Isabella froze. Damien went on without hesitation. "There will be no more dealings between us, and now you have nowhere left to run." He met her gaze. "If you fail to bring me to Winsbury, the king will kill you." Isabella snapped back, fury twisting her features. "I would never have betrayed you," she snapped, "if you hadn't cast me aside the moment you married." For a brief moment, Damien looked at her. Then he smiled. "What a strange thing to say," he murmured, pouring the contents of his glass aside without concern. "How could I cast you aside, when I never considered you mine to begin with?" Isabella stared at him, stunned. "Your only role," Damien continued coolly, "was to play my lover while investigating the royal family's affairs. That role was possible only because you once served as lady-in-waiting to the late queen." He straightened. "And as for your compensation, I've already paid you more than enough." His gaze hardened. Now, he finished calmly, "Is there anything else you wish to say?" With no cards left to play, Isabella collapsed at his feet. "Please, Damien," she begged, clutching his leg. "If I return to the king, he will kill me." Damien's expression darkened instantly. He seized her jaw, forcing her to look up at him. "What?" he said coldly. "Do you truly expect to survive after attempting to murder my wife?" His voice was as icy as the water Chloe had been dragged from. Isabella recoiled in terror. "It wasn't me," she cried. "I wasn't anywhere near the Duchess." Damien released her and straightened. "Do not enrage me further," he warned, turning away, by repeating those lies. As he began to leave, Isabella remained seated on the floor, her mind racing. "If I do nothing, I will die." She scrambled to her feet and grabbed him from behind. "I love you, Damien," she sobbed. "Please, help me. Don't cast me aside. Everything I did was because I love you." Outside the door, Chloe had just arrived. She stood still, having heard every word of Isabella's confession. Her love for Chloe's husband laid bare. Her expression remained unreadable. After a long pause, she turned calmly. "Let us return to my chamber, Margaret," she said quietly. Inside, Damien heard Chloe's voice as he stepped out. "Chloe," he called. "You're awake? The physician ordered you to rest. Why are you here?" Chloe exhaled slowly. Then she turned to him with a faint smile. "I wish to see the Marchioness," she replied, "but I apologize for causing a commotion." Damien sighed. She is not in a state to receive visitors at present, he said. You will have to come another time. Before he could finish, Chloe spoke again. Since you are here, Your Grace, there is something I wish to say. What is it? Damien asked. Chloe tightened her grip on her cane. Please allow me to return to the Verdier estate, Your Grace. Damien froze. He had not expected this. And why, he asked carefully, should I do that? My accident has made me long to see my father, Chloe replied calmly. It will not be a long visit. I'm afraid, Damien said flatly, I cannot allow that. Her brows furrowed. May I ask why? Because, he replied, you are first the wife of the Duke of Thisse. A duchess faithful to her duty does not entertain thoughts of leaving her husband behind. Chloe's grip tightened further. Faithful to my duties? She repeated quietly. So, you expect me to fulfill mine, while you reserve your affection for your mistress? Damien was taken aback for a moment, then his grin widened. Chloe, he said with amusement, don't tell me you're jealous, annoyed by his shamelessness. Chloe turned her gaze away. Of course not, she said sharply. Damien studied her expression for a moment, then spoke lightly. It's late. Return to your chamber, he said. We'll revisit this discussion another time. Perhaps we can find a way to avoid being apart. He smiled faintly. But for now, I have pressing matters to attend to. I bid you good night, my wife. And with that, he closed the door, leaving Chloe standing alone in the corridor. Later, Chloe continued walking across the snow-draped fields, her steps unsteady, her heart far more so. She had entered this marriage fully aware of what kind of man Damien was. She had told herself she would never concern herself with a man's private affairs, and yet, it hurt. What was I even expecting from him? She wondered bitterly. All she wanted now was to return home. She no longer wished to remain in this place. Before she realized it, her feet carried her to the small lodging where Gilles was staying. I'm sorry for coming so suddenly, Chloe said softly, as Gilles offered her a cup of tea. He hesitated before asking, carefully, My lady, did something happen? Chloe laughed lightly and shook her head. I just missed home, she said. I thought seeing you might make me feel better. She took a sip of the tea and smiled faintly. It's delicious. Gilles smiled in return. It's nothing compared to the tea you gave me when we first met. Oh, Chloe murmured, thoughtful. It's been 10 years since we first met, hasn't it? 11 years, Gilles corrected instantly. In his memory, that day was still as clear as the sky above them. And the taste of that tea, something he could never forget. Seeing her like this, Gilles hesitated. He wanted to ask if she was hurting. In the end, he said nothing, only wishing he could somehow ease her pain. Early the next morning, Chloe hurried back to the palace, scolding herself for having fallen asleep in Gilles' cottage. It was a relief that no one had noticed. If the Duke were to find out, it would cause a serious misunderstanding, and Gilles would suffer the consequences. But as soon as she entered the palace, a piercing scream echoed through the halls. There's a dead body, a maid cried out. Marchioness Isabella is dead. The Marchioness's body had been discovered by the maidservant who had accompanied her from Swain. As the investigation began, a vial of arsenic was found inside the Duchess's room, the same substance detected in the tea the Marchioness had consumed. An officer reported the findings to Damien and Chloe. I swear, Chloe said, her voice trembling, I have never seen such a substance. And yet, the officer replied carefully, it was found in your Grace's room. Moreover, witnesses have testified to your hostility toward Marchioness Isabella. So you are accusing my wife of murder? Damien's cold voice thundered through the room. Who dares say such a thing? The officer stiffened. Forgive me, Your Grace, but for their protection I cannot reveal the witnesses' identities. And since no one else had access to the Duchess's chambers or her maidservant, we have no choice but to proceed with an investigation. Chloe's hands began to tremble. Damien reached out and squeezed them firmly. My wife would never harm anyone, he said coolly, and if she were the culprit, she would have had to slip poison into the tea during the night. His lips curved into a faint smile as he turned toward her. But we were preoccupied all night long, were we not, Chloe? Chloe flinched. They had not been together. How could she utter such a lie? The officer began questioning her about her whereabouts. Chloe opened her mouth, but no words came out. Before she could respond, Damien lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to it. I can answer on my wife's behalf, he said smoothly. She was with me throughout the night. Then he looked up, meeting her eyes. Isn't that so, Chloe? Chloe stared at him for a long moment. Slowly, very slowly, she nodded. As the trial began, Chloe was confined to separate quarters. 3 days had already passed. Did she wish for Marchioness Isabella to die? She knew her feelings toward Isabella had never been positive, but she had never wanted such a fate for her. And if she was honest with herself, her resentment had never truly been directed at Isabella at all. It was toward her husband. I hear you've been refusing meals, Damien said, leaning against the doorway. You'll starve to death if you keep this up. Startled, Chloe lay back down and turned her back to him. That would spare the judges the trouble of hanging me, she replied coldly. Damien walked in and sat on the edge of the bed. You speak as if you wish to die. Chloe didn't answer. Idly, he picked up her cane and turned it in his hand. It seems my testimony lacks credibility, he continued casually. They find it strange that a couple who spent the night together were found apart the next morning. Chloe sat up abruptly. I did not murder the Marchioness, she said firmly. Someone planted the poison in my room. Damien looked at her calmly. In that case, it must have been done while you were absent, he said. So tell me, Chloe, where were you? She remained silent. Slowly, he raised his hand and brushed her hair back from her face. Why didn't you tell the investigators you spent the night in Gilles' cottage? He asked. Chloe's eyes widened. Seeing her expression, Damien continued evenly. He came to me. Created quite a fuss. He insisted you did nothing wrong. He was even prepared to go to the authorities himself. Damien's gaze hardened slightly. It took some effort to calm him down. He paused, then added quietly. And yet, despite having a witness to your innocence, you chose silence for 3 days. You never once spoke his name. Because no nobleman would tolerate rumors of his wife and a servant, Chloe replied. But is that truly the reason? Damien asked. Are you certain it isn't because you wish to protect him? Or perhaps because you fear I would divorce you for infidelity, and that your family would fall because of it? Chloe's grip tightened on her dress. I have committed no crime, she said, her voice steady, and I have not been unfaithful. Then why not at least testify that Gilles was with you? Damien countered. Though of course, that wouldn't stop our divorce, or your family's ruin. His tone was calm, certain. He knew her well enough now. She would never sacrifice someone she loved to save herself. Beg me, Chloe, Damien said quietly. Beg me for your life, even if the court rejects my testimony. I have enough power to ensure you do not die. Inside, he wished for her to beg him. He was the only one who could save her. But instead, Chloe reached out and took his outstretched hand. If you truly have that kind of power, she said softly, then please ensure that my execution is held in private. Damien froze. Every time he thought he understood her, she said something like this. That is my final request to you, Chloe continued, tears spilling down her cheeks. As your wife, your grace. The next day, Damien stood in court before the judges. Duke Thisse, the presiding judge asked, were you with the Duchess on the night of the murder, and does your testimony still stand? Damien's gaze shifted to Chloe. She sat motionless, lifeless, like someone who had already accepted her fate. The sight irritated him. It does, he replied coldly. But then, how do you explain the fact that you were seen in your study the following morning? The judge pressed. How is that relevant? Damien asked sharply. The issue is that there is no witness, the judge replied. We cannot simply accept a testimony that lacks credibility. Damien's expression hardened. What if I told you there is a witness? Chloe flinched. I request Gilles Watteau, Damien continued, a servant of the Thisse estate, to come forward. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom as Gilles stepped inside. Swallowing his fear, Gilles bowed and testified that the Duchess had been in the Duke's company that night. Then why did you only come forward now? The judges asked suspiciously. Because I committed a grave sin, Gilles answered, his hands trembling. I spied on my master's most private moments. That won't do. Explain yourself briefly. From behind him, Damien demanded. Gilles took a breath and explained. That night, exhausted from attending guests, he had been unable to sleep, hearing noises outside. He went to investigate and discovered the Duke and Duchess arguing like a typical married couple, their dispute fueled by the misunderstanding involving the Marchioness. The argument eventually subsided, and the two moved toward the storehouse. Unable to suppress my curiosity, Gilles admitted, voice shaking, I committed the unforgivable act of watching their intimate moments. A heavy silence fell over the court. When Gilles finished, Damien stepped forward. I will personally deal with my servant for his transgression, he said coolly. But what matters is this. My wife and I were together. From the side, Chloe understood immediately. Damien and Gilles had coordinated this testimony. Her chest tightened, not for herself, but for Gilles. Such lies could ruin a mere servant's life. Still, even with a witness, the judges hesitated. We will postpone the verdict for 10 days, one of them declared. Damien's patience snapped. You intend to keep my wife imprisoned, he said sharply, simply because you are incapable of making a decision? Duke Thisse, the judge shot back. Do not forget that I was sent here as the king's envoy. Damien reached into his coat. I intended to show respect to the king's envoy, he said coldly, but my patience has reached its limit. He pulled out something from his pocket. This button was found in the mouth of the late Marchioness, he continued. It belongs to a royal attendant's uniform. Gasps echoed through the hall. I kept this hidden for the sake of the royal family, Damien said, fury rising. But if you persist in this witch hunt against my wife, I will show no such consideration. The room fell silent. Moments later, at Damien's command, the royal attendant who had accompanied the Marchioness was arrested. Chloe was released, and 10 days passed. Yet the whispers never stopped. Maids murmured in the corridors, how the king had sent the Marchioness to assassinate Duke Thisse, how she failed, and how the king's servant silenced her to erase the truth. Some said the prince's unstable mind was the reason the king feared the duke. Others whispered something, far more romantic, that when it came to his wife, Duke Thisse did not hesitate to stand against the royal family. That was the tale spreading through the castle. That night, Chloe finally gathered her courage and walked into Damien's chamber. "I didn't call for you today," Damien said, not lifting his eyes from the book in his hand. Chloe sat across from him. "You look fatigued," she said softly. "Shall I bring you some tea? It's nothing compared to what you endured," he replied coolly. "But why are you here?" She hesitated, then spoke. "Your Grace, there is something I wish to tell you." Damien closed his book with a sigh. "If this is another request to return to Verdier," he said. "I'm tired. Please leave." But Chloe shook her head. "I came to express my gratitude." He looked up. "Though it involved the royal family, you saved me," she continued. "And though it required deception, no one innocent was harmed." Her hands tightened in her lap. "When you came to see me that day, instead of relying on my husband, I allowed my pride to cloud my judgment. So I am here to offer you a sincere apology." Damien set the book aside. "Are you not upset," he asked quietly, "that I did not reveal the real culprit earlier?" Chloe shook her head. "No. You had reasons to protect your standing with the royal family. You could have remained silent. But you didn't." She met his gaze. "That carries profound meaning to me, so in return I am determined to fulfill my duties wholeheartedly, as your wife and as Duchess." Damien smirked faintly. "Are you saying your efforts until now were half-hearted?" Her expression didn't change. "Damien," she said calmly, "may I ask you something?" He stiffened slightly. "Why have you not consummated our marriage?" For the first time, Damien was caught off guard. "That's an odd question," he said after a pause, especially while thanking someone. "I disagree," Chloe replied steadily. "It is the Duchess's duty to ensure the continuation of her husband's lineage." Damien frowned. "So that's why you're asking?" She nodded. He sighed, stood up, and turned away. "Then let me answer you," he said coldly. "I will not stoop to exploiting my power to force affection from a woman who has shown me nothing but disdain." He faced her again. "If that is answer enough, return to your chamber. It is late, just as you never failed to remind me." Chloe left the chamber, but her heart refused to calm. Just a few nights ago, she had been so certain of what kind of man Damien von Thisse was: rude, cold, arrogant, and utterly selfish. And yet, she could no longer deny it. He had changed, from the man she met 3 years ago, from the devil she thought she understood, and somewhere along the way, the resentment she once carried had begun to fade. In its place, something else had quietly taken root, something she had yet to tell him. Lost in those thoughts, Chloe didn't realize when her feet carried her back to his chamber. The door to his chamber stood open. He was still there. And in that moment, Chloe understood the truth she had been avoiding. She no longer hated him. The emotions she had held back overflowed. Without another thought, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, holding him tightly, as if accepting him fully. The air between them shifted. In that unspoken exchange, time dissolved, leaving only discarded clothes at their feet. As the room grew quieter, he drew her closer, and Chloe did not resist. Yet there was still something she needed to say. "Your Grace," Chloe whispered. Damien lifted himself slightly, his gaze locked onto hers, his hand resting firmly at her waist. "I don't hate you," she said at last. Her face flushed deeply as the words left her lips. For a heartbeat, he simply stared at her. Then Damien leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss that stole her breath, one that silenced every doubt she had left. And in that moment, Chloe believed she had finally reached him, unaware that she was merely unlucky. On the dawn of the day Marchioness Isabella was murdered, Damien had been in his study when the news arrived. He understood immediately. This was the king's doing. "There is no proof yet," his attendant explained carefully. Damien's patience snapped. "Then create it," he said coldly. "Summon the physician. Inform Red Veil as well." As he turned toward the window, his gaze caught a familiar sight, a figure limping toward the castle entrance. His eyes narrowed, the shawl, his expression darkened. That servant again. Annoyance flickered across his face as he stood. "Lord Weiss," Damien said calmly. "Tell me, why are you loyal to me?" "Because you saved my life," Weiss answered without hesitation. A slow, dangerous smile curved Damien's lips. "Then do you believe a woman might feel the same if she thought she owed everything to you?" The thought amused him. "Change the plan," he ordered quietly. "Go to the Duchess's room, place the vial in her bag." And that was how Duke Damien von Thisse secured his wife's devotion. For now. As days passed, whispers began to circulate among the maids in the garden. They spoke of how the Duchess had been going out far more often lately. "It must be because the weather has turned pleasant," one maid suggested lightly. "But I don't think that's the only reason," another murmured. "Have you noticed? Every time she returns from her stroll, His Grace is always with her." Their voices carried quiet excitement. The maids smiled among themselves, remarking how close the Duke and Duchess seemed now, so different from the first day she arrived, when their relationship had looked anything but promising. especially after all the rumors that had once spread about the Duke and Marchioness Isabella. It was when His Grace saved the Duchess that she fell in love, one maid whispered. Another shook her head confidently. No, I think it happened much earlier. I'm certain they fell in love long before that incident. Their chatter faded into the wind. Elsewhere, deep within this forest, two figures were quietly entangled with one another. Chloe sat adjusting the ribbon at her collar, casting him a mild reproach. Why must you be so stubborn, Your Grace? She said lightly. I told you just yesterday to refrain from interrupting my picnic. Damien bit lazily into an apple. That's simply who I am, Chloe. She sighed. And has it never occurred to you, Damien added casually, that you might be disrupting my duties? Well, Chloe hesitated, then spoke softly. I don't think it's necessary to try quite so frequently to conceive, Your Grace. Damien froze for a brief moment, then he leaned closer, fingers threading through her hair. Chloe? He asked quietly. Do you truly think I'm doing this solely for the purpose of having a child? He continued, voice low. All I seek is time with my wife, pleasure, nothing more. He began undoing a button on his shirt. And regardless of the purpose, the more attempts we make, the better, don't you think? And so, another attempt was made within the forest of this. Suddenly, Chloe felt a stir behind the trees. She glanced over her shoulder. Your Grace, I think someone is there, she whispered. Damien did not stop. It doesn't matter, Chloe, he said calmly. When you are with me, your attention should be on me alone. He lowered her gently. And even when you are not with me, he added, I expect your thoughts to remain with me. That is the duty of a duchess. Chloe slowly raised her hand, wrapping it around his neck. Yes, my lord, she replied softly. If someone were to ask Chloe what she valued most about her husband, she would pause for a moment before answering. His exceptional planning skills, perhaps? Margaret blinked, clearly not expecting that reply. Pardon? He always keeps me informed of his whereabouts, Chloe explained calmly. And he tells me in advance if anything occurs. Well, that may be true, Margaret replied carefully. But that has nothing to do with planning, and surely that can't be his only strength. Chloe smiled faintly. Well, there isn't much else I can think of right now. If Margaret had asked about his flaws, Chloe could have listed at least 10 without hesitation, each in vivid detail. But can't you see the passion in his eyes, my lady? Margaret pressed. His eyes only remind me of a frozen lake, Chloe replied sharply. But His Grace returned in merely 5 days. Just to be with you, Margaret tried again. His business there must have concluded early, Chloe answered flatly. Margaret sighed. I assure you that wasn't the case. He returned quickly because he wanted to see you. She leaned in slightly. Do you know what that's called? Love, Margaret said gently. You seem to be unaware of it, my lady. Chloe froze at the word. Her heart began to race. Could it be? The thought lingered, only briefly. She shook her head. No, he was incapable of feeling such an emotion. Then Margaret added casually, Oh, my lady, have you heard the news? Gilles has decided to resign. The teacup slipped from Chloe's hand and shattered. What? She asked, stunned. Margaret nodded. It seems that ever since the trial, he's felt uneasy. He plans to take the evening train. Regret washed over Chloe as she hurried outside, her thoughts racing. What happened to Gilles? On the other side, inside Gilles' cottage? Why are you still here? Damien demanded coldly. Did I not make it clear that you were to leave this once the trial was over? Gilles stood straight before him. There was something I needed to make sure of, he said quietly, that you wouldn't hurt Lady Chloe. Damien said nothing at first. Then he laughed, a sharp, humorless sound, as he rose to his feet. You truly don't know your place. In the next instant, his fist struck Gilles hard enough to send him crashing to the floor. Gilles Watteau, Damien's voice rang cold through the room. My intuition has never failed me. From the moment I saw you, I felt a strong sense of disdain. He grabbed Gilles by the collar and hauled him up. The look in your eyes, the way you speak, it has always irritated me. Your Grace, please put him down. Damien turned. Chloe stood at the doorway, breathless, having rushed there. His dangerous gaze flicked back to Gilles. That look of sympathy, was that what you wanted? He sneered. Or were you still hoping for a secret rendezvous here? Your Grace, please stop, Chloe begged, hurrying forward. But Damien did not relent. Chloe von Thisse, he warned coldly. Don't test my patience. At that moment, Gilles kicked out desperately. Damien's grip loosened, and Gilles fell back to the ground. He lifted his head and said hoarsely, Don't speak to Lady Chloe like that. You have no right. Chloe immediately moved in front of him, shielding him. Your Grace, please, stop here. Her words only fueled Damien's fury. Please, she continued, voice shaking, I beg you. He helped save me during the trial. He never lies, and yet he lied for my sake. Damien knelt in front of her instead. You see, he said calmly, it wasn't all a lie. He looked at her intently. He did witness one of our most private moments. Do you remember our picnic in this forest? Chloe froze. If you were to learn that the servant spying on us was him, Damien continued, would you still stand up for him? Her eyes widened. Slowly, she asked, without turning back, Was it you, Gilles? Gilles trembled. After a moment, he began weakly. I was merely... Damien scoffed. Do you intend to keep hiding behind that mask of loyalty? Your intentions are far too transparent. Boys like you always idolize, always worship, then mistake it for love that only brings agony. He rose and pulled Chloe firmly to his side. Do you know the flaw in that? You seek something that will never come to fruition. Because Chloe Von this, he said coldly, is already mine. With that, he took Chloe with him and left. Behind them, Gilles remained on the floor. Tears slid down his face as he whispered, He's a wicked man. A devil, Lady Chloe. Damien brought Chloe back to this castle and seated her on the bed. She assured him calmly that she would always remain faithful to him, and that Gilles was nothing more than a good friend. She admitted that Gilles had acted wrongly, but driving him out like that was not right. Damien had no patience to hear it. Do not utter another man's name in my presence, Chloe, he said coldly. His arrogance left her utterly disappointed. She turned her face away. Please leave at once, she said quietly, before I come to despise you even more. Damien stared at her for a long moment. Then, without another word, he left the room. Chloe remained seated, thinking of that self-righteous man. She remembered how Margaret had called it love, and how foolish she had been to believe it. Late that night, the door opened again. Damien entered quietly and sat on the edge of the bed. Chloe lay asleep, turned away from him. He lifted a hand and idly played with her hair. Chloe Von this, he murmured softly, leaning close to her ear. I chose to leave you alone today out of respect for you, as the Duchess. He lowered his voice further. But I must say, you upset me quite a bit. Chloe flinched at his words, though she did not open her eyes. He continued, I suggest you refrain from taking another man's side in the future. It thoroughly sours my mood. He leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her cheek. Now, he whispered, I bid you good night, my Chloe. With that, he left the room once more. Left alone in the quiet, Chloe's heart began to race. Her eyes slowly fluttered open. What was that, she wondered. A few days later, Chloe was summoned by the Duke once again. I am well aware of a duchess's duties, she complained flatly, but this is not included among them. Damien smiled leisurely. My attendant's cough is quite severe, you see. How could I possibly keep a sick person near me? Chloe sighed. Your Grace, not trimming your beard will not affect your impeccable visage. Damien paused. It was the first time he had heard such words directed at him. You don't need to flatter me, Chloe, he laughed lightly. And so, she finally did what she had been called for, shaving his beard. He sat still for a while before speaking again. You're quite good at this. I asked you to refrain from speaking, Chloe reminded him calmly. He obeyed for a moment, simply watching her face. Then he added, There is no task my wife cannot excel at. Chloe shook her head. You should look in a mirror. I've made a complete mess. He laughed, but I like it when you're a mess. She leaned closer, her face hovering just above his. But I don't like being a mess, Your Grace. That, Damien replied shamelessly, is none of my concern. Chloe leaned back and cleaned the brush. I don't understand you. You expect me to perform my duties perfectly, yet you say you prefer me like this. What is it that you truly want from me? Damien's voice lowered. What I want, Chloe, is to see your perfect self fall apart, before me and only me. I want you to care about my every little action, to make foolish mistakes while longing for me to embrace you regardless of everything. Chloe paused. After a moment, she spoke again. Allow me to ask you something, Your Grace. He nodded. Go ahead. Then she asked, Do you love me, Your Grace? Please, answer truthfully. He froze for a moment, then laughed suddenly. Do you want me to whisper words of love into your ears, Chloe? She did not flinch. If love is what motivates your malicious deeds, then I can make an effort to forgive you. Damien rose from his seat. Forgive me? He scoffed little, standing before her. I don't need your forgiveness. Chloe looked straight at him. If I cannot forgive someone, she said quietly, then I cannot love them either. Damien froze again with shock. What do you mean by that? She turned her face away. Please answer me first. Any answer will do. I only want honesty. He reached out and caressed her cheek. The moment I first saw you, he said slowly, I wanted to seize you. If the desire to make you mine can be called love, then, Chloe, I have loved you for a very long time. Her eyes widened. She had never believed he was capable of loving her. I love you 1,000 times over, Chloe Verdier, he added. She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled softly. Then, I think it's fine. What do you mean? He asked. If that's the case, she replied, then it's fine if you see me become a complete mess. Damien pulled her close by the waist. Just the thought of it excites me. As spring arrived, everything Damien Von this had done to turn Chloe Verdier into Chloe Von this slowly began to fade. And Chloe, realizing his true feelings for her, feelings she never believed could be love, felt her heart race for him more and more. At the This train station, Gilles sat quietly, luggage placed on a bench, ready to leave. Just then, Weiss appeared and stopped short when he recognized him. What are you doing here? Weiss asked. Gilles stood and bowed. After everything that has happened, I decided it would be best to leave Thisse and pursue a new path. Weiss clicked his tongue lightly. What? A pity. Still, considering the great favor you rendered. Duke Thisse must be very grateful to you. Gilles let out a faint scoff. Do you truly think so? Of course, Weiss replied without hesitation. After all, His Grace has been in love with the Duchess for a very long time. And you helped save her life. Gilles froze. Slowly he lifted his head. The Duke loved her for that long? He asked, stunned. Weiss smiled. I don't blame you for being surprised. He's always had a rather peculiar way of expressing himself. But they married so suddenly, Gilles said. How could that be? Oh, my boy, Weiss chuckled. The Duke is not the type to enter marriage on impulse. If anything, he likely spent a year, no, 2, planning it. Then he added casually, by the way, would you consider working at the monastery? My mother says they're short on labor. Gilles hesitated. Something still bothered him. Perhaps this man could confirm it. Thank you for the offer, he said carefully, but I find it difficult to understand why His Grace would frame Lady Chloe for murder and subject her to such suffering. For that reason, I wish to avoid any work connected to him. Weiss flinched. How did you know that? In truth, Gilles hadn't known. He had only suspected. Now he clenched his teeth. I didn't, he admitted quietly. I only had an instinct. You just confirmed it. Then he bowed again. My lord, does your offer of employment still stand? Weiss hesitated. Leaving a boy who knew this much unattended was dangerous, especially if Duke Thisse were to find out. After a brief pause, he nodded. Yes, Weiss said. It still stands. Please, come with me. Days later, Chloe walked cheerfully through the streets of this. She had written to her father, and after receiving a letter from the south, from Alice, she wrote back at once, hoping it would reach her safely. Now that summer had arrived in this, she could finally see its beauty. In winter, she had felt lonely here, but under the summer. Solstice sky. She found herself loving this almost as much as Verdier. Lost in thought, she suddenly felt arms wrap around her waist from behind. Were you enjoying your walk alone? Damien asked. Weren't you busy? Chloe replied, startled. I was, he said easily, but I finished my meeting quickly. How could I leave you wandering alone? Her face flushed at his words. You know your face is red, he teased. It's just warm today, she said quickly. His gaze dropped to the folder she was holding. What's that? Chloe stiffened. Oh, it's nothing of interest to you, she replied, flustered. She couldn't let him see it. Earlier, she had stopped by a shop where the owner showed her the last remaining set of stamps from the victory 2 years ago. Without thinking, she had bought them. It's just strawberry stamps for the summer solstice, she added hurriedly. They're really not important. Damien studied her expression, and then suddenly snatched the folder from her hands. Now I'm even more curious, he said, and I'm rather fond of strawberries myself. Please give it back, Chloe pleaded. How could I, he replied, amused, when you're acting like this? As they bickered, the folder slipped from his hand and fell straight into the fountain beside them. My stamps, Chloe said weakly, staring at the water. Damien's eyes widened. Oh dear, since when does my face remind you of strawberries? She looked mortified. You look disappointed, but you can always buy more. How could I not be? Chloe replied, embarrassed. I already paid for them. Shall I retrieve them? He asked, rolling up his sleeves. There's no need, she began, but before she could finish, Damien was already stepping into the fountain. Your Grace, please come out, Chloe cried, flustered as people began to stare. Damien laughed and lifted the soaked stamps. Look, Chloe, I've got them. No need to fuss. How can I not? She protested. You're drenched, and everyone is watching. He smiled at her. Despite seeing my face every day, my wife still bought stamps featuring me. This is the least I can do. Then he leaned closer, gently tugging her hat aside, and whispered in her ear. And it just occurred to me. There's a perfect place nearby. Shall we take a short rest there? What do you say? Chloe's face burned as her heart raced, her eyes drifting toward the nearby hotel. Later, as they sat in the hotel cafe, Chloe's face slowly turned red with embarrassment. I didn't expect there to be a cafe on the ground floor, she said quietly. Damien laughed, a smirk tugging at his lips. What? Were you hoping for something else? Oh, of course not, she answered quickly. Well, Damien added casually, the real reason I came out was to send an urgent telegram at the post office. A telegram? Chloe looked at him. Why so sudden? Damien's expression softened. Chloe, this concerns your father. My father? She asked in surprise. How? Do you remember the forest where we first met? He said. And the woods I requested from your father at our wedding? She nodded. A gold mine was discovered there, Damien continued. Everyone at the Verdier estate was delighted. But since the forest is now under my ownership, Verdier would gain nothing from it. Chloe listened silently. Yet Viscount Verdier never mentioned this to me, Damien went on. He's far too humble. Chloe sighed with a gentle smile. My father isn't the type to be upset over such matters, Your Grace. Damien studied her for a moment, then spoke again. The telegram I sent states that Viscount Verdier will receive a 50% stake in the gold mine. Chloe stared at him, stunned. Both you and your father need to be more ambitious, he added lightly. Then, changing the subject without warning, now, would you please serve me a bite of that cake? Half buttercream, half chocolate mousse. Still dazed, Chloe lifted the spoon and fed him as he wished. A satisfied grin appeared on his face. This, he said, contentedly is the best way to enjoy cake, though my mother would disagree. But when he lifted his gaze, he saw tears slipping down Chloe's cheeks. "Why are you crying?" he asked, startled. She wiped her face hurriedly. "It's nothing. You look silly," he said bluntly. "But seriously, why are you crying?" Her trembling lips curved into a smile. "They're just tears of joy." Damien reached out and kissed her hand gently. "Now I wonder," he mused, "how you would have reacted if I'd given your father the entire mine." Chloe flushed. "That's not what I meant." He laughed. "Chloe, you're becoming quite fond of me. Your Grace, please stop teasing me," she said softly. As they left the hotel and passed over the bridge, Chloe hesitated, then spoke. "Your Grace, have you heard? They say lovers who share a kiss on this bridge will never part." Before he could reply, she leaned in and kissed him, seeking a love she hoped would never fade. A few days later, a banquet was held at the royal estate in Swan. Damien attended with Chloe and Weiss. As they spoke quietly among themselves, a familiar voice sounded from behind. "It's been a while, my dear cousin." Prince Johannes had arrived. Chloe turned and rose at once. "Your Highness, I trust you have been in good health." Johannes's gaze settled on her, a faint smile forming. "Ah, my belated congratulations on your marriage, Duchess." Before Chloe could respond, Damien spoke coolly. "You may sit down if you're finished with greetings. Your legs must be tired." Johannes looked at him in surprise. "Oh, I almost didn't recognize you. You seem like a completely different man after marriage. I never expected you to become such a devoted husband. If I recall correctly, you were never like this when you were with Marchioness Isabella." Damien laughed lightly. "Marriage brings many changes," he replied nonchalantly. "Though that might be difficult for an unmarried man like you to understand." Johannes laughed along. "Perhaps I should learn from you more often. In fact," he added casually, "why don't you send the Duchess to the royal palace? We're just preparing to select new ladies-in-waiting." Damien's expression darkened instantly, and Chloe felt the tension thicken in the air. "Oh, it was only a jest, Damien," Johannes continued quickly. "Don't take it so seriously. I wouldn't truly do something like that to you. After all, you are my dearest cousin." Damien rose slowly from his seat. When he spoke, a chill ran through those nearby. "I suggest you shut your mouth," he said coldly, "before I wring your neck." Johannes's expression stiffened. "How dare you, Damien?" Then suddenly Damien smiled. "Now that," he said lightly, "is how one makes a proper jest, Your Highness." Later, Damien sent Chloe ahead to the train station while he stayed behind to handle some remaining business. He spoke with Weiss, who informed him that the royal family had begun preparing assassins, clear proof of their desperation. Judging by Prince Johannes's behavior earlier that day, it was obvious he was trying to appear healthy and composed, especially now that the king's condition had worsened. Agitation no longer suited him. "Do you plan to stay at Castle Rose in Swan for the time being?" Weiss asked. "No," Damien replied. "I shall return at once. The summer festival will begin soon, and my wife is to select the finest strawberries at the event. I must be there." Meanwhile, Chloe sat alone at the train station, waiting. Damien had told her to go ahead, explaining that he still had matters to attend to. He had even advised her to leave for this if he failed to arrive on time. But the train had long since departed, and after witnessing the tension within the royal palace, Chloe could not bring herself to leave him behind. So she waited. One train departed, then another. Night fell. "What are you doing here?" She jolted awake at the sound of his voice. Looking up, she saw Damien standing before her, breathing heavily, as though he had run all the way there. "Why haven't you left?" he asked. "I was waiting for you," Chloe replied simply. He let out a sigh, running a hand through his hair. "Chloe, why would you wait here alone in the dark, exposed to all kinds of danger? What were you thinking?" "I waited because I wanted to," she said. "I was worried about you. I'm not heartless enough to leave my husband behind after such a bitter encounter with the prince." Damien froze at her words. After a moment, he spoke again. "Chloe, the last train to the sea has already departed, but a train to Verdier will arrive soon. Since it's too late to return tonight, I suggest we make a brief detour to your home first." Her eyes brightened. What he meant to say, "I was worried too, thank you for waiting, forgive my anger," never left his lips. He was a man incapable of expressing his feelings directly. And somehow, she had grown fond of that about him. Overcome with emotion, Chloe stepped forward and hugged him. "I would love to, Damien." The train to Verdier rattled through the cold night. Inside the private quarters, warmth gathered as their kisses grew slower and more tender. Chloe wrapped her arms around his neck as Damien lifted her effortlessly. As he looked at her, responding to his touch, breathless and close, Damien realized something profound. When the crown had been within his reach, he had chosen instead to board this train, to win this woman's heart. "Chloe," he murmured, "you need to know just how much I love you." She looked at him, cheeks flushed. "You can be surprisingly tender sometimes, Damien." She lowered her head to meet his gaze and smiled softly. "Your mother was right about you." Damien smiled back, but deep inside he knew that one day she would have to learn every dirty detail of his deeds. And when that day came, everything would change. "My dear Chloe," Viscount Verdier wrote to his daughter, who had returned to this a few days earlier, asking how her journey back had been. He confessed how joyful he felt watching her board the carriage with her husband, her smile brighter than he had ever seen. To him, her sudden visit, and seeing her so happy was the most precious gift of all. He also mentioned that Alice had recently sent a portrait of herself with her newborn son, and he held on to the hope that it would not be long before they could all gather as a family once again. With the summer solstice soon to be held in this, he wrote as a father, wishing that Chloe would enjoy it to the fullest, by her husband's side. "Your Grace!" Chloe cried softly, pushing against Damien inside the palace at this. "What is it, Chloe?" he asked casually. She turned her flushed face away. "Your mother will be here any moment. We really should stop." "But, Chloe," Damien said with a smirk, leaning closer, "I know you enjoy it when I lose my composure over you." "We really don't have time," Chloe insisted, just as the door opened. "Chloe, what is taking you so long to get ready?" Lady Thisse said as she entered, then paused when she noticed her son there as well. "Oh, Damien. Why are you still here?" "Good morning, Mother," Damien replied nonchalantly. "I needed a bit of encouragement from my wife for the upcoming race." Lady Thisse giggled. "I see. I'm sure Chloe's efforts will pay off, of course," Damien replied with a smile. "I would never disappoint you." Chloe, her face burning with embarrassment, turned away and screamed inwardly. Mother and son were exactly alike, not a shred of shame between them. As the summer solstice festival began, Chloe walked through the grounds with Lady Thisse, enjoying the finest strawberries laid out for the guests. "There he is!" Lady Thisse called out. Chloe followed her gaze and saw Damien chatting with his fellow racers, his bare chest boldly on display. Soon, all the participants lined up. At the signal, the command rang out, and the race began, every rider dashing forward at once. "Chloe," Lady Thisse said quietly, watching her son, "Damien is a rather difficult man, isn't he? He has been ambitious since he was a boy." "Our father always said ambition is the key to success," Chloe replied calmly. Lady Thisse sighed. "Yes. But in Damien's case, he may have too much of it. I tried to raise him so he would develop loyalty to the royal family, but children rarely grow the way their parents intend. If His Majesty passes away with the prince's reputation in shambles, a great change will come to Damien. In fact, everything around him may transform." Chloe, who had been listening carefully, lifted her gaze. "Your Grace, is there something you wish to tell me?" Lady Thisse looked at her. Chloe was different, perhaps different enough to change her son, but still, there was an issue. On the other side of the field, the race ended. The announcement rang out clearly. Duke Damien von Thisse was the victor. Damien raised his hand and waved toward the two of them, a satisfied smile on his face. Lady Thisse turned back to Chloe. "Chloe," she said softly, "I have only one request to make." "Yes, Your Grace? Please do not become a source of weakness for Damien. Later, are you enjoying the festival?" Damien asked as he walked beside Chloe. "How was your time with my mother?" Chloe lowered her gaze. "Well, I can tell she loves you very much." Damien nodded. "Yes. And that is precisely why she occasionally makes mistakes, out of fear. I hope you can be understanding of that." Chloe glanced at him, hesitated, then asked quietly, "Your Grace, do you ever experience moments of fear?" Damien looked startled, as if the question had caught him off guard. Then he laughed. "I would never admit to being afraid, even if I were a second away from a bullet." Chloe laughed along. "Of course." He turned to her, idly playing with her hair. "I would rather be laughed at than remembered as a pathetic coward. If that happened, you would never forgive me." As the festival continued, women plucked flowers and lined up to offer them to their partners, who accepted them gladly and led them into dances across the garden. Chloe watched quietly, her grip tightening around her cane. "Your Grace," she said softly, "I've been practicing walking with the brace you gave me. One day, I'll present you with flowers too, just like those ladies." Damien followed her gaze, then straightened. "Very well. I look forward to it. No woman has ever given me flowers." Chloe stared at him in surprise. "Perhaps it isn't that they didn't want to," she said lightly, "but that they couldn't. After all, their lives might be ruined if they ended up on your bad side." She laughed, but Damien only sighed. "Why would you think that? Why would I ruin the life of a woman who confesses her love to me? Just, what do you take me for?" Chloe fell silent, watching him. She still didn't fully understand the man she had married. At their first meeting, she had been certain he was the most arrogant man in the world. Their first kiss had felt like waves crashing against a cliff, and even his proposal had sounded more like a threat than a promise. Yet, how many times had her world turned upside down since then? Somewhere deep inside, she was still afraid of what might await her if she stayed by his side. And yet, despite everything, she wanted him all the same. Rain began to fall just as Chloe called out softly, "Your Grace." Damien turned toward her. "Yes? I want to be your weapon," she said. "Earlier, your mother told me I must not become your weakness. So I want to be your strength instead." Damien laughed, lifting a hand to shield her head from the rain. "A weapon? Are you saying you intend to join me on the battlefield?" Chloe raised her gaze to meet his. "Life itself is a battlefield, isn't it? Especially for someone like me." They were the very words he had once said to her at their first meeting. Damien fell silent, watching her. "I know you will always fight for me," Chloe continued, "so I want to do my best to support you too. to make sure I never become your weakness. And also... Before she could finish, Damien lifted her chin and cupped her face, his arms wrapping around her as he sealed her lips with his. When he pulled back, his voice was low and certain. Chloe, allow me to say this. You have never been my weakness, not even for a moment. That is how it has been, and how it always will be. He leaned in again, stealing another kiss, then offered her his hand. Now, my wife, shall the Duke and Duchess set an example on the dance floor? Chloe hesitated as she joined him. Your Grace, I've never danced in front of so many people, and my skills are lacking. Everyone will laugh. Chloe, Damien said, lifting her effortlessly into his arms, no one will dare, as long as I am by your side. Slowly, she matched her steps to his. Her tension eased, replaced by joy, until she slipped off her shoes and laughed freely as she danced with him. Damien, thank you, she said breathlessly. For what? He asked. For persuading me to dance, and... I'm sorry I refused your invitation at Rose Castle. Damien smiled at her flushed face. Chloe, the rain is growing stronger. Soon, the caretaker called out that the carriage was ready to return to the castle, but Chloe tugged at his sleeve, smiling. Damien, I want to keep dancing. I want to keep dancing with you. He studied her for a moment. She rarely asked him for anything. As you wish, Chloe, he replied. Their dance continued, and later, even as the carriage carried them through the rain-soaked streets, it did not truly end. Dance, Chloe, Damien murmured, but only for me, only for me. Chloe gasped quietly at his closeness, her breath unsteady as his presence pressed in around her. His hand slipped to the back of her dress, loosening the ties, and she whispered his name again. Again. Damien leaned closer, his composure breaking as his lips traced along her neck, and Chloe instinctively tugged at his hair, pulling him nearer. The carriage continued on through the night, while the air inside grew heavier, their closeness deepening with every heartbeat. Much later, as they lay side by side, Damien spoke with a faint smile. I love you, Damien, said the Duchess. Chloe frowned weakly. When did I say that? He reached out, gently caressing her cheek. Did you forget already? How you called my name all along the way? Shall I remind you again? Raising a brow, he leaned closer and pulled her into his embrace. Chloe wrapped her arms around his neck in return, holding him just as tightly. 3 months later, Chloe happily welcomed her husband as he returned from the capital. Your Grace, there is something I must tell you, she began. But Damien spoke first. Chloe, His Majesty the King has passed away. The news had not yet been officially announced, he explained, but it soon would be. Then he looked at her again. Now, what was it you wished to tell me? Chloe hesitated, her lips parting, yet no words came. At last, her maid stepped forward and bowed. Your Grace, she said softly, her ladyship is with child. Damien froze. Slowly, he turned to Chloe, his eyes searching her face, silently asking if it was true. Chloe smiled, gently resting her hand over her stomach, and nodded. Joy shimmered in her eyes. Meanwhile, in Swan, 2 men spoke in hushed voices. They discussed how the king had remained firm until his final breath, keeping Prince Johannes as his heir. What troubled them more, however, was Duke Thisse's continued delay in seizing the throne, even after the mourning period. The prince's madness is known to everyone, Count Cormier muttered. The people have already turned cold toward him. So what is the Duke thinking? Weiss answered slowly. It may be because the Duchess is with child. If the Duke acts recklessly, now he would not. Only endanger himself. Cormier sighed. Then increase the protection. That can be arranged. I already suggested that, Weiss replied with a sigh. His answer was simply this. Those inexperienced in marriage should keep their opinions to themselves. Cormier frowned. Still, this marriage was part of his plan from the start. One of the many steps toward his ultimate goal, the throne. He even ordered me to approach Lady Alice, the Duchess's younger sister. But by sheer luck, she fled before anything could be done. Weiss exhaled. At first I thought he chose House Verdier to avoid the royal family's attention. Securing control over the mines he discovered during the war was another reason. He used Marchioness Isabella to build the image of a womanizer, and married a disabled duchess to evade royal scrutiny altogether. In the end, both men fell silent. We have no choice now, Cormier said at last. We must follow the Duke's orders. They stepped inside, unaware that someone had been standing far behind them. Gilles. He had heard everything, his face drained of color as the truth settled in. Back in this, Chloe knitted tiny yellow socks for the baby. She had chosen the color because they still did not know whether it would be a boy or a girl. I'm sure his lordship will be overjoyed regardless of the child's gender, Margaret said warmly. After all, this is your first child. Chloe smiled faintly, but her thoughts were unsettled. When Damien had learned of her pregnancy, he had said firmly, "This will be your first and final pregnancy, Chloe." She still did not understand what he meant by that. More than confusion, worry lingered in her heart. What if she failed to give him an heir this time? Damien's certainty only made her more uneasy. Since the king's demise, Damien had left this. It had already been a fortnight since he departed for Swan. A knock sounded at the door. "My lady," the butler announced, "a visitor has arrived. Lord Chelsea, the lawyer of house." "This is..." Chloe, now seated before the lawyer, blinked in surprise. "You are certain His Grace personally instructed this?" The lawyer bowed. "Yes, my lady. I transcribed every word exactly as he dictated it. The document stated that Duke Damien intended to bestow the name of this, and the title of Duke, upon his firstborn, regardless of the child's gender. It was something the current laws of the kingdom did not permit. Yet Damien had always opposed Swanton's inheritance laws, and he was known for keeping his word. Reading it, Chloe felt her chest grow warm. He was willing to go that far, to ensure their child would bear the name of this. The lawyer then presented another letter, along with a necklace. Chloe unfolded the letter. "To my dear Duchess Chloe von Thisse," it asked her to begin preparations to come to Swan. At first, he had intended to wait until after the child's birth, but his longing had grown stronger than his patience. He wished to see her, and the child, as soon as possible. Chloe opened the pendant attached to the necklace. Inside was a small picture of the two of them together. Her yearning deepened, matching his own. A little later, Margaret entered with tea. "My lady, you've been glowing ever since that letter arrived," she said with a knowing smile. Chloe nodded. She had feared he did not want the child, but now she realized her worries had been unfounded. Margaret herself seemed delighted. She would be accompanying Chloe to Swan, and Chloe encouraged her to pursue the auditions she had always spoken of there. Then Margaret added casually, "Oh, and Lily from the kitchen mentioned something curious. She recently visited Swan and saw Gilles there. He was dressed in a monk's habit. Later, he told her he's working at a monastery overseen by Count Weiss's mother." Chloe looked up, startled. Count Weiss was Damien's closest confidant. It seemed unlikely that Damien would arrange such employment for Gilles, or that Gilles would choose to work somewhere connected to House Thisse of his own will. Then what is really going on? Chloe wondered. Whatever the truth was, she decided she must speak to Gilles once she reached Swan. She owed him both an apology and her gratitude, spoken face to face. Margaret rose, gathering a bundle of documents. "My lady, please excuse me. I need to take these to the study and tidy it. Then let me do it," Chloe offered. Margaret blinked. "My lady, you really shouldn't overexert yourself while you're expecting." Chloe smiled gently. "This is the least I can do to assist my husband." Later, Chloe entered the study, but her thoughts lingered on Gilles. Was it really possible that Damien had helped him find employment? Gilles had been an invaluable support to her, and Damien was a man who repaid debts. Besides, he could be unexpectedly considerate at times. She walked slowly toward Damien's large portrait hanging in the study. She wanted to tell him how much she missed him, just as he had written. As she stood there, her eyes caught something strange, a thin string attached to the lower corner of the frame. Frowning, she reached out and tugged it. With a soft click, the portrait shifted, revealing a concealed door behind it. A hidden safe lay within, filled with documents. Chloe froze, startled. She glanced around the room. Just a quick look, she told herself. She pulled out a few papers. They all seemed related to Damien's affairs. Why hide something like this behind a wall, she wondered. Then she stopped. Among the documents was a map of the Verdier estate. Letters lay beside it. Her breath caught as she read. One letter stated that the sample Damien had sent for examination contained gold mixed with sand, and that its source was the Verdier estate. The date was from 3 years ago. At that time, Viscount Verdier had already been on the brink of bankruptcy. Chloe's hands trembled. Another letter followed, a response to an inquiry Damien had made about the eldest daughter of House Verdier. She is skilled in medicine and excels at managing servants. She has long abandoned thoughts of marriage due to her condition. Chloe stood motionless. Every word was about her. "My Chloe, there you are." The voice came from the doorway. She turned sharply. Damien stood there, rain-soaked. He must have taken the last train just to reach her. The face he had longed to see was now streaked with tears. Chloe stared at him, her eyes brimming, the letter clenched tightly in her hand. Damien's gaze fell on the paper. He understood at once. After a moment, he spoke calmly, his composure unwavering despite the rain dripping from his hair. "If you have questions," he said evenly, "I will answer all of them." Chloe stood there in silence for a long moment. Outside the window, the rain grew heavier, drumming against the glass. At last, she let out a shaky breath. "I don't wish to talk about anything right now," she said quietly. But the man stepped closer. "Chloe von Thisse," Damien called, stopping in front of her. "I told you to ask me. Ask me what those documents mean. Ask me why I did it." Her fingers tightened around the paper in her hand. "Chloe," he pressed again, "don't you want to know the truth?" Slowly she lifted her face. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Since you insist, tell me this. Was the death of the Marchioness part of your scheme as well?" Tears slipped down her cheeks. Damien fell silent for a moment, then stepped closer. "I was not the one who killed her," he said quietly. "Then were you the one who framed me as the culprit?" Chloe asked. He met her gaze without looking away. Yes, her breath caught. He reached out, brushing her hair back. I did it because I love you. I wanted your heart, so I stole it. Hate me if you wish. Yell at me. Strike me if you must. I will endure it. We're married, Chloe. Conflict is natural. Don't let your emotions blind you to the fundamental truth. She let out a bitter laugh. And what truth is that? She asked. That, when we first met, it wasn't me you saw, but gold. That you used my father, who bowed to you in gratitude. Or that the man who claimed to believe in my innocence in court was the very one who trapped me there. You shouldn't have done those things. Her voice broke. Damien answered firmly. None of that matters. The truth is this. I love you. As his hand cupped her cheek, Chloe stared at him, then suddenly stiffened. Then tell me, she said, instinctively shielding her stomach. Did you kill His Majesty as well? I did, Damien admitted. I was tired of a king who protected a deranged heir. I couldn't accept such a man ruling this nation. If I had a son like that, I would end his life myself to preserve his honor. It is better to die than to live in disgrace. His cold words crashed down on her. Enough, Chloe cried. Her breath came unevenly, her vision blurring. Damien's expression finally broke. Chloe. But before he could reach her, her knees gave way, soaking with blood. She collapsed to the floor, pain stealing the strength from her body. Damien caught her, calling her name as panic flooded his voice. Later, the physician informed them that the baby was unharmed and advised Chloe to rest. With a bow, she withdrew, leaving only the two of them in the room. Chloe lay on the bed with her back to Damien. Without turning to look at him, she spoke softly. Your Grace, you must have pressing matters to attend to. Perhaps you should return to Swain. Damien answered calmly. There is no matter so urgent that I would abandon my ailing wife. Her voice hardened. I wish to be alone, she said firmly. So I ask you to leave. If you do not wish to see this bed drenched in blood again, please go. Damien looked at her for a long moment, then spoke quietly. Chloe, ever since it became clear that this pregnancy is taking a toll on your health, I have found no joy in the life growing within you. Her hand clenched tightly around the blanket. Damien, she called coldly, please leave at once. He remained silent for a few seconds, then replied, As you wish. Rest well, and turned to leave. When the door closed, Chloe finally broke down, sobbing into the sheets. Everything had unfolded exactly according to his plans. He was a calculating man. He must have known how far she would go for those she loved, how much strength she could summon for their sake. Of course he had known. I'm so sorry, she whispered through her tears, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. But I will keep you safe, my baby. Outside the room, Damien leaned against the closed door and shut his eyes. Hearing her sobs was more than he could bear. Later, Weiss informed Damien of troubling news. An epidemic had begun spreading from the south, a coincidence made even more unsettling by the fact that it erupted shortly after the king's funeral. Despite the circumstances, Prince Johannes was determined to proceed with his coronation as soon as possible. However, when one of his attendants collapsed from the illness right before his eyes, the prince hastily withdrew to a secret villa on the outskirts of the capital. Rumors soon followed, whispers that the prince had aligned himself with the Duchy of Carter. If he secured Carter's support to legitimize his claim to the throne, the situation would grow far more complicated. Weiss hesitated before speaking again. Your Grace, are you still hesitating to act because of the Duchess? Damien paused, his pen hovering mid-stroke. There had only ever been one reason for his hesitation. He knew Chloe valued family above all else, and he had never wanted to become a man who murdered his own kin. But that concern no longer bound him. Slowly, he set the pen down and rose to his feet, resolve settling into his expression. Make the preparations, he said coldly. I will be the one to end his life. It is the last courtesy I owe my cousin, and it was also the moment when Chloe had to admit to herself that she loved him for the man he truly was. At night, everyone gathered at the dinner table, and Chloe joined them as well. While light chatter filled the room, Weiss gently told the Duchess not to worry about the Duke's departure for Swain, and to focus solely on her health. Concern? Chloe replied with a faint, bitter smile. His Grace always executes his plans with impeccable precision. I have no reason to worry. Damien smirked and turned toward her. It seems the woman who has become the most unpredictable factor in my life holds me in rather high regard. You flatter me, Chloe replied calmly. Weiss could sense the awkward tension lingering in the air, but the conversation moved on. Someone remarked that the child to be born in this would grow up in a vastly different world. Damien smiled, adding that the same was true for them as well. Laughter followed, but Chloe, who had been listening quietly, spoke in a soft voice. Not everyone desires change. Damien turned to her. Even if that change is for the better? Your Grace, Chloe said, lifting her gaze. Who decides what better truly means? Count Cormier nodded in agreement, sensing the discussion growing tense between husband and wife. Weiss quickly suggested they focus on the meal before it grew cold. Her Grace must eat well, he added with concern. Chloe lowered her eyes to her plate, but suddenly her vision blurred. Feeling dizzy, she stood up. My apologies, I should take my leave. Before she could finish, her body swayed. Damien's eyes widened as he rushed forward, catching her just as she collapsed into his arms. Her face was pale, and she groaned softly in pain. Later, the physician explained that the cure for the illness Chloe had contracted was not definitive and advised waiting. Damien immediately countered that reports showed improvement with a certain medicine and demanded it be administered. The physician hesitated and explained that when Chloe briefly regained consciousness, she had firmly refused any treatment that might harm the child. While the medicine could help the patient, during pregnancy it carried a risk of miscarriage, and Chloe, being knowledgeable about medicine herself, understood this well. Since the patient had explicitly refused, the physician could not proceed. Lady Thisse stepped closer. Damien, Chloe values the child's life more than her own. Do you not understand that? I have no intention of losing my wife, Damien replied firmly. And the child of this is not so fragile. Bring the medicine. At that moment, Chloe slowly opened her eyes, still struggling to breathe. Damien, she called softly. He lifted his head at once. How are you feeling? She looked at him and smiled faintly. I had a dream. In it, I saw my mother. She was smiling, and she gave me a handful of forget-me-nots she had picked by the river, just like when I was a child. The petals were blue. She reached up, gently brushing his face. Just like your eyes. Her other hand rested on her stomach. I wonder what color our child's eyes will be. Yours or mine. Perhaps my mother was trying to tell me. Damien helped her sit up. To find out, you must recover. Drink this, he said, holding out the glass. Chloe immediately recognized it. I refuse, she said weakly. I do not wish to force you, he replied, his voice steady. But if you refuse again, I will have no choice. I will not take anything that could harm my baby, she insisted, clutching her dress. If you do not, you will die, Damien said calmly. So you must. Anger flared in Chloe's eyes. How dare you? How dare you ask me to swallow something that could kill our child? Damien gripped her shoulders. Listen to me, Chloe. There is no guarantee it will harm the child. But if you die, the child has no chance at all. Trust me. The child of this will not die so easily. Chloe fell silent, listening. Damien was a man who had never accepted failure, and this time would be no. Different. He would swallow every sorrow, endure every sin, and force happiness upon her if he had to, praying only that she would live. Damien leaned in and administered the medicine himself, pressing it from his lips to hers. A few days later, as winter fully arrived, snow began to fall outside. How does Chloe seem? Lady Thisse asked Margaret quietly. Since regaining consciousness, she has immersed herself in embroidery, Margaret replied softly. She keeps herself distracted and appears composed. But it worries me. Lady Thisse stopped mid-step. That calm is only a mask. How could she forget the pain of losing her child? She said heavily. All I can do now is pray that the Lord grants Chloe and Damien another chance. Inside the room, Chloe stood by the window, watching the snow drift down in silence. Damien came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her. Chloe, he said gently, once you have fully recovered, we should depart for Swain together. Her gaze remained fixed outside. It was winter when I first arrived here, she said slowly, and it seems it will be winter again when I leave. She turned to face him. I will always remember this for its cold. Damien smiled faintly. It seems winter left a deep impression on you. Fortunately, winters in Swain are not as long. The warmer climate should lift your spirits. Chloe raised her head and met his eyes. When we arrive in Swain, she said evenly, I intend to file for divorce. Damien froze. His hand on her shoulder trembled. What did you just say? I am asking for a divorce, Your Grace, Chloe replied firmly. You once told me we would have only one child. You said no more children would be born to us. Now that there is no heir, I assume you would want the same. Chloe von Thisse, he began. Do not call me by that name, she shouted. You deceived me. You pushed me to the brink. You forced me to endanger our child. I should never have taken that medicine. Her voice broke as sobs overtook her. If you had not taken it, you would not have survived, Damien said, trying to steady her. Then you should have let me die, Chloe cried. My child was the only fragment of truth I had, when everything else here was a lie. I saved your life because I love you, Damien replied calmly. After everything I did to make you mine, you cannot abandon me so soon. Chloe looked at him, her eyes trembling. How can you talk about love? You have no right, she said. Damien straightened. No, Chloe, you have no right to make assumptions about my feelings. This is my way of loving you. But I have never once desired such a love, she argued. Are you sure? Damien asked, raising his hand to wrap it gently around her neck. Can you confidently say that I do not occupy your mind and soul? Yes, you did. Until I discovered your sordid secrets that night, she answered. Oh, don't be absurd, Chloe. Those documents were hardly significant, Damien said, leaning closer. If they had been, I would have destroyed them the moment you confessed your love to me, she added calmly. Chloe flinched. Damien lowered his head, pressing his lips softly against her neck as he whispered, Ah, Chloe. I should never have left you alone. What a fool I was. That was my mistake, but I love you, Chloe. Tears slid down her cheeks as she sobbed, yet Damien continued to murmur those words, again and again, his lips brushing away every tear. His voice came in heated whispers between kisses. Divorce will have no part in my life, and the same goes for you. He squeezed her hand and pulled her closer. I know you love me. And everything that has happened is because I love you. Chloe looked at him with tear-filled eyes. Yes, and I regret it deeply, she said, her voice breaking. No, Chloe, you will never regret it, and I will make sure of it, he replied calmly. He guided her down onto the sofa and sank to his knees before her. Chloe flinched at his touch. Meeting her gaze, he said softly, Chloe, you are the only woman who can bring me to my knees. His kisses followed, and Chloe remembered the words she had once spoken with quiet certainty. Your Grace, if I cannot forgive someone, I cannot love them either. But what was she to do now, when she found herself unable to forgive the man she had already fallen in love with? If her heart could not hold both love and hatred, then what was she supposed to choose? Those unanswered questions lingered in Chloe's mind as the man before her consumed her thoughts entirely. Her senses blurred, until a sudden knock echoed through the room. Your Grace, an urgent message has arrived. The citizens of Swain have begun a rebellion, and Prince Johannes's whereabouts are currently unknown. A voice announced from the other side. Damien rose immediately. I have to leave for Swain. You remain here and protect the Duchess until the situation is resolved, he ordered. He turned to go, but Chloe swiftly caught his sleeve. Please allow me to accompany you. I do not wish to remain here in this turmoil, she pleaded. Damien gently pulled his hand free. It would not look good for the future Queen of Swain to be seen walking toward a church with divorce papers in hand, he said firmly. I will not do such a thing, Chloe whispered. Damien fell silent for a moment, then grabbed his coat. Inform all the staff. Until I grant permission, the Duchess is not to set foot outside this castle, he commanded, before striding out. The door closed behind him, leaving Chloe alone in the quiet room. In Swain, people murmured endlessly about how Duke Thisse had crushed the rebellion the moment he arrived. With Prince Johannes's whereabouts still unknown, it was all but certain that the Duke would soon ascend the throne. The people welcomed the idea. After all, Duke Thisse was known as a man who did not hesitate to mingle with those of no noble title. The fact that he had taken a woman from a low-ranking noble family as his wife only strengthened that image. To the public, Duke Thisse was the only one capable of tearing down the kingdom's rotten system. And the Duchess, once the daughter of a humble house, now standing on the brink of becoming queen, was the subject of endless envy. Many whispered that she must have performed countless good deeds in a past life to be born into such fortune. Back in this, after being confined within the palace for many days, Margaret finally suggested that Chloe take a stroll. As they walked together, Margaret's concern was evident. Chloe thanked her gently for always looking after her. You haven't given up on your dream of becoming an actress, have you? Chloe asked. Margaret smiled shyly. Do you truly think someone as timid as me could ever be an actress, my lady? Chloe turned to her with certainty. Of course you can, and the day you step onto the stage, I'll be cheering for you from the front row. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. As she wiped them away, she added, Actually, there's another reason I suggested we go for a walk. Chloe looked at her. Another reason? You have a visitor, my lady, Margaret said softly. And I hope this meeting will lift your spirits, even if only a little. Chloe followed her gaze. Standing there, dressed in a monk's attire, was Gilles. Later they sat in the nearest cottage to talk, while Margaret waited outside. You look quite distinguished, Chloe said gently. Like someone from a distant land. Gilles laughed. A monk's robe doesn't suit me, does it? It suits you, Gilles, Chloe replied calmly. He hesitated before speaking again. Margaret told me how you've been faring, my lady. Chloe paused, then smiled faintly. I'm fine, Gilles. You must have been worried. He fidgeted. My lady, do you know why I helped Lady Alice escape? I can imagine, Chloe said softly. Because she begged you with tears in her eyes. Yes, but she said she wanted to be happy. Gilles added. That does sound like Alice, Chloe replied with a small smile. Gilles looked at her, then spoke again. Lady Chloe, I can offer the same to you. I thought about this for a long time. If you were content here, I planned to remain silent until the day I died, but you discovered something, didn't you? Chloe asked quietly. Gilles clenched his teeth. The Duke had a scheme in mind when he approached you. You have no idea what methods he used to obtain you. Chloe stood up. Gilles, there is no secret in this world that can remain hidden forever. His eyes widened. My lady, you already knew? Chloe nodded. Then, did you forgive him, even knowing the truth? Gilles asked, stunned. I loathed him, Chloe answered. So much that it was almost unbearable. She paused, then continued softly. But strangely, I felt no resentment toward our child. No matter how much I despised the name this, I found myself wishing to bestow that same name upon the child. Though, none of that matters now. Her hand rested over her empty stomach. Gilles rose to his feet. Lady Chloe, if you wish, I can free you from this endless winter. He knelt before her. Please, run away with me. I came here knowing the Duke would kill me for this. I know it is a sin for someone of humble origin to harbor such feelings, but seeing your unhappiness makes me feel as though I am slowly withering away. Tears streamed down his face. So please, my lady, please run away from here. Chloe knelt before him as well. Gilles, thank you for coming here and risking your life to propose this. She wiped his tears gently. The moment you risked everything to come to me and confess your feelings is something I will never forget. She added softly, your face is cold. Let us make some tea. Before she could rise, Gilles grasped her hand. Will I never be worthy of you, my lady? Slowly, Chloe leaned closer. Gilles, if I relied on your kindness, I would live with guilt for the rest of my life, and you would never find true happiness, because you are not the kind of man who keeps others by his side through coercion. You are the kind of person who preserves someone's world rather than destroying it. Gilles looked at her in surprise, then smiled sadly. There is no arguing with you, Lady Chloe, but please promise me one thing. Promise me that you will be happy. Chloe paused, then nodded. I will, Gilles, but remember this, whatever choice I make, it will be one made of my own volition. Gilles nodded. With a heavy heart, he turned and left the cottage. Behind him, Chloe whispered with quiet resolve. I will find happiness, Gilles. Later, Chloe sat in the study, writing a letter to her husband, determined to end everything with these words. My dearest Duke, I have had ample time for reflection during your absence. I have come to realize that I was childish, allowing my grief to take precedence over you. At this station, Damien stepped off the train and noticed a woman arguing loudly with other passengers. He recognized her at once. It was Eliza. He smiled, relieved to see that she seemed to be doing well. He pulled a letter from his pocket, thinking Chloe would be pleased to hear of Eliza, and continued reading. Though I know my concern may be unwarranted, I felt compelled to write out of fear that your goals might be compromised because of me. I hope you will successfully settle all matters and allow me to join you by your side soon. I hope I have not become your source of weakness. I eagerly await the world you will shape. A smile appeared on Damien's face. To him, it did not matter whether her words were born of sincerity or restraint. She was the only one for him, and he would be the only one for her. That was enough. Determined to begin anew, Damien headed for the palace. As he neared it, he saw flames rising from the woods. Maids rushed toward a cottage, carrying buckets of water. Everyone, hurry! They shouted. What is happening? Damien asked sharply, stopping Margaret. She turned toward him, trembling. My lord? The cottage has caught fire. Her grace is still inside. Damien's gaze snapped toward the cottage, now completely swallowed by flames, smoke billowing skyward as the fire roared out of control. Shaking himself out of his daze, Damien rushed toward the cottage. The staff tried to stop him. My lord, you must not go inside, someone cried. But Damien heard nothing. He only called her name again and again, his breath ragged. He wrenched himself free from the hands restraining him and stormed inside. At the center of the room lay a body. Damien's legs gave way. Around the corpse's neck was the necklace he had given Chloe when he proposed. There was no doubt, it was the Duchess. Chloe, my love, he murmured hoarsely. Aren't you going to welcome me? My love. Outside, rain began to pour, beating down on the flames and smothering what remained of the fire. Lady Thisse rushed in and froze at the sight, her son kneeling there, calling out to his wife. Chloe, how can you abandon me? Damien whispered, his voice trembling. You gave your heart to me. You promised to stay by my side. Chloe, my child, Lady Thisse cried out, collapsing as she saw the body that had already turned to ash. But Damien turned to her, tears streaming down his face, his eyes empty, unhinged. Mother, don't speak like that, he said softly. The Duchess of Thisse cannot die such a pitiful death. Outside, the rain fell harder. And to everyone watching, it became clear, the Duchess was gone. Damien sat alone in his study, his gaze fixed on the portrait hanging on the wall, his and Chloe's faces frozen together in paint. His eyes were empty, unmoving. Lady Thisse entered quietly. Damien, she said, holding a telegram, a message has arrived from Verdier. Viscount Verdier collapsed after hearing the news. He is gravely ill and has been hospitalized. She hesitated, then added gently, It seems he will not be able to come. Should we enter Chloe in her birthplace instead? For the first time, Damien moved. He rose to his feet. Mother, he said coldly, she is the Queen of Swain. She will be entombed in the royal crypt. The Queen's funeral will be held 2 weeks after the coronation. He turned away. I will return to Swain at once. When matters here are settled, join me at the royal palace. Without another word, he passed her and left the room. Lady Thisse remained where she was, her eyes drifting back to the portrait. A memory surfaced, clear and cruel. Chloe, she had once asked softly, did it hurt when Damien held your hand so tightly? Yes, mother, Chloe had replied calmly. That is why I let go of his hand. That had been Chloe's answer. On the day Damien returned to this, he had seen Eliza arguing with a crowd at the station. She was pleading with them, trying to help a woman escape unnoticed. That woman was Chloe von Thisse. Eliza had helped her because Chloe had once shown her kindness, because she had saved her grandson. Please take care, my lady, Eliza said quietly. And write to me if you ever need help." Chloe nodded. From the platform, she looked toward the direction Damien was leaving, the letter still clutched in his hand. "You lost," she murmured softly. Then she boarded the train. And as it carried her away, Chloe hoped that in the perfect world Damien had constructed, her absence, imperfect as she was, would not matter at all. As spring passed and summer arrived, Damien Ernst von Thisse knelt before God and vowed to devote his life to Swanton's prosperity as he placed the crown upon his head. A great reward was announced for the capture of Prince Johannes, who had abandoned Swanton and fled. And so began the reign of the Thisse dynasty. Later, as Weiss sat with Damien, he reported quietly, "It's possible Prince Johannes has taken refuge in the Duchy of Carter. Rumors say the King of Carter is completely mad. He once shot his own subordinate for insulting his lover. If someone like that joins hands with the prince, there's no telling what may happen." Damien nodded. "Then we prepare for war," he said casually. Weiss stiffened. The ease with which those words were spoken unsettled him. After a brief hesitation, he asked, "If I may, when do you plan to hold Her Majesty's funeral?" Damien's pen froze mid-stroke. "It has already been 2 months," Weiss added carefully. "The nobles are watching, closely." Damien stood and walked to the window. "If you don't wish to witness true madness," he said flatly, "I suggest you leave." Weiss frowned. "Damien, your current state is far from normal. Please, act like yourself." Silence followed. Then Damien spoke, without turning. "The funeral will be held in 10 days. 10 days later, Chloe's body was laid to rest in the rose garden of Swanton, the very place where they had met that night." Damien stood by the window, staring into the distance, as memories surfaced one after another. He regretted his choice that day, leaving for Swanton alone. If only he had taken her with him. If only he had realized his feelings sooner and proposed to her properly. Then perhaps, instead of feeling the impulse to slit his own throat in defeat, he would have been kissing her at that very moment. A knock came at the door. A butler entered and handed him a parcel, stamps Chloe had commissioned before the accident. Damien opened it. Inside were countless stamps, some of him, some of them together. A bitter scoff escaped his lips, as memories of their outings flooded his mind. His grip tightened around the glass in his hand until it shattered, blood trickling down his palm. As he stared at the shards cutting into his skin, a thought crossed his mind. If I were to die now, would I be able to reunite with her? A slender hand suddenly plucked the glass away. "That's a ridiculous joke," a familiar voice whispered. Damien looked up. He knew it wasn't real, yet the figure before him laughed softly. "Damien," Chloe said, "the river of death splits into heaven and hell, and surely the Lord would not send us to the same place. Don't you agree?" Only then did Damien cover his face, because in that moment he understood, even if he were to die right now, he would never be able to reunite with her. As Damien and Weiss walked out of the castle, Weiss spoke up. "Your Majesty, did you go through the list I gave you yesterday?" "I glanced at it once," Damien replied calmly. "The demands those leaders are making are reasonable." Weiss hesitated, then clarified. "That's not the list I meant. I was referring to the list of potential brides. I selected ladies from the nobility, and it has already been half a year. I believe it's time you—" Damien stopped and looked at him. "Weiss," he said lightly, "why don't you choose a bride for me instead?" Weiss stiffened. "Your Majesty, please don't jest like that. And please take this." He presented a newly released phonograph, fitted with a record of Damien's favorite music. "I bought it from a merchant," Weiss added softly. "I hoped the music might bring you some solace." Damien accepted it in silence. The moment his fingers brushed the casing, his mind drifted to that night at the Swanton function, how Chloe's face had lit up when she heard the same melody, how she had smiled and said she wished to dance with him. That night, alone in his chamber, the phonograph played. As the music filled the room, her memories surfaced again, sharper with every note. Her laughter, her eyes, the way she looked at him. Unable to endure it, Damien struck the phonograph with his fist. The music died. The room fell silent. It wasn't right. How could Chloe leave him like this? How could she abandon him so completely? Unsteady, he staggered out into the night and into the garden, stopping before Chloe's grave. "You can't sleep here forever," he murmured, "leaving me alone like this." Like a madman, he began digging, calling her name again and again. When the grave finally opened, he found the necklace, the one he had given her when he proposed. She was wearing it. His breath caught. It was absurd. How could she still wear it, even after rejecting him? "Your Majesty!" a butler cried from behind. "What are you doing? Are you all right?" Damien straightened slowly. Ending things like this, wasn't that far more absurd? "Bring me a list," he commanded coldly. "Every passenger who left this by train that day. I want every record." It didn't matter if they called him mad. He could live as a madman if he had to. But he would verify every fact. He would not accept this ending. He was not a defeated man. And even if it took the rest of his life uncovering the truth, he would find her. With that resolve burning in his chest, Damien turned and walked back inside. The next day, Gilles Watteau arrived at the castle and requested permission to lay flowers at Chloe's grave. Flowers? Damien murmured, extinguishing the cigarette in the tray. That might be difficult. Why? Gilles asked, confused. Damien looked at him with unsettling calm. Because I have exhumed her grave. Rage flared in Gilles' eyes. You are no man. You are evil, he shouted, striding forward before soldiers restrained him. Damien raised a hand. Leave us. I would like to speak with him in private. Once the room was empty, Gilles lifted his tear-streaked face. How does it feel? He demanded, after killing her. You pushed her to the edge. Are you satisfied now? No, Damien replied quietly, kneeling before him with a faint smile. Gilles stared at him. Why are you smiling? You believe she is dead? Damien murmured. That means she didn't run away with you. He rose slowly. I knew my wife is a wise woman. Gilles stepped back, stunned. Are you out of your mind? He had always known Damien was not of sound mind, but now it seemed he had completely lost it. Denying Lady Chloe's death will not absolve your sin, Gilles said firmly. I will retrieve her remains and bury them in Verdier. With that, he left. He went to the garden and, as he had declared, retrieved what remained from Chloe's grave. Inside the mansion, Damien stood by the window watching. Perhaps Chloe had foreseen this, that he would question her death and eventually seek out Gilles Watteau. Perhaps that was why she never joined hands with him. She had wanted to protect him, if burying his heart in ashes and reducing him to defeat was the judgment she chose to pass upon him, then he would bear it. But once he found her, Chloe too would bear the consequences, and together they would traverse even the depths of hell. A few days later, in Castle Birch of this, Damien lined up all the servants for questioning. You were the one who sent letters on behalf of Chloe, weren't you? He asked Margaret. She flinched. Yes, your grace. I delivered the letters because her ladyship was unable to leave the castle under your order. She sent some greetings to her family, and some to you. Damien's gaze hardened. He was almost certain the letters sent to Verdier had not been mere greetings. They must have warned them of what was about to happen. The whereabouts of Viscount Verdier, who was said to have collapsed and been hospitalized after the fire, remained a mystery. Even the letters from Alice had stopped at some point. When was the last time you saw her? Damien asked. In the evening, around 7, Margaret replied. She told me not to prepare a bed because she was busy. Damien stared ahead, silent for a moment. Then he asked the final question that had been weighing on him. How long does it take for a candle to burn out completely? Margaret looked confused. About 4 hours, your grace. After the staff was dismissed, Damien began piecing everything together. Around 7 that evening, Chloe had bid farewell in her own way. Around 9, she had been seen at the cottage, personally inspecting the items to be sent to the poorhouse. If she had been alone during that inspection, then she must have arranged everything inside the cottage herself, and whoever helped her must have arrived earlier with the carriage delivering those items. It has been a while, Eliza, Damien greeted coldly when he summoned her. Eliza bowed. Your Majesty, I ask. Thus not as king, he said evenly, but as the Duke's heir whom you raised from birth. Where is my wife? Eliza remained silent for a moment. I do not know, your Majesty. Damien smiled faintly. Are you speaking the truth, Eliza? I value my life, she replied calmly, and I am not foolish enough to forget the character of the man I raised. But Damien had already followed the trail. After being released from Castle Birch, Eliza had obtained a position at the hospital through Chloe's recommendation letter. It must have been her who transported an unidentified body from the hospital to the cottage. No one could have known the truth, because the Duchess had been the only one inspecting the items that day. So, no one except you and her knew, Damien said quietly. Am I wrong? Yes, Eliza admitted. The paper in Damien's hand crumpled. I am giving you one more chance. Tell me where Chloe is. His voice trembled with restrained fury. Eliza stood firm. She truly did not know. Chloe had refused to involve anyone further, unwilling to let harm fall upon others. But I saw you at the train station that day, Damien added sharply. Eliza sighed. She explained that she had gone there on her own. It was true she had transported the body, but Chloe had told her nothing more. Suspicious, she had followed her to the station. The moment Chloe saw her, she had tried to run. I grabbed her hand, Eliza said softly. I gave her my cloak and covered her face with the hood. Then I helped her board the train. Damien exhaled slowly. The truth settled heavily between them. You must have known she would not return, he said. Yes, Eliza replied. Then why, he demanded. Why did you help her, knowing I would never forgive you? Why? Eliza met his eyes without fear. Why, you ask, young master, she said quietly. Would it be enough if I told you I helped her for the same reason she once helped me? After confirming that Chloe was alive, Damien returned to his study. He opened the hidden frame door, the one Chloe had once discovered, and burst into laughter, sharp and unrestrained, almost mad. Inside lay the brace he had once gifted her. So Chloe Verdier had left this place without a single trace of this upon her. She had known. She must have known that one day he would find his way back here. She had once told him that to understand a person, one must observe them quietly. She had understood him better than he understood himself. As he stared at the broken brace she had stored there, he wondered. Had she imagined the look on his face when he found it? Had she pictured his horror? He picked up the brace and pressed a kiss against it. "Thank you, Chloe," he murmured, softly, almost reverently, "for breaking me." Because he was already looking forward to the day when his fragmented pieces would gather themselves again and lay claim to her. 1 year later, in the city of Genevois, located in the south of the Duchy of Carter, a woman smiled warmly. "Thank you, Claire. I am so grateful that you are Sophie's governess." Chloe sat near the window, watching a small girl play outside with a puppy, laughter ringing in the garden. "I envy you," Chloe said softly. "You have such a lovely child." "Oh my, it's beginning to rain. I should bring her inside," the child's mother exclaimed, hurrying out. Chloe listened to the sound of rain against the glass. A year had passed, yet the memories still clung to her. The dance in the rain. The stormy night she uncovered his secrets, the warmth of his embrace, and through everything, she had clung to her unborn child, believing that as long as she had that child, she would endure. But when she lost the baby, all her hope shattered. If he had even a shred of respect for her, he should have apologized. He should have begged for forgiveness. But he did not. And that was when her patience finally broke. She trembled, not from fear, but from anticipation. For the first time in her life, Chloe felt an overwhelming desire to bring him absolute despair. After her escape, she had gone to Winsbury. She sent a letter to Alice, telling her she would wait at the post office on their mother's death anniversary. On that day, a man approached her. "Lady Chloe, Lady Alice is waiting for you." He led her to a palace hidden on the outskirts. "It's been a long time, Chloe," Alice said, standing outside with her young son. "How was your journey? Shall we speak inside?" Later, as the child played nearby, the sisters sat together, and Alice told her everything. Eddie, her lover, was no wandering bohemian. He was the hidden heir to the Duchy of Carter, and now he was king. Alice wept as she spoke. "He told me he loved me more than anything," she sobbed. "Yet he kept me hidden while remaining betrothed to another. All I wanted was to be happy." Chloe calmed her gently. But when Alice asked her to stay, Chloe declined. Watching her sister wait desperately for a man she claimed to despise reminded Chloe too much of herself. To love and hate at the same time. She was not so different. "Miss, it's time to go to church," Sophie called brightly. Chloe came out of her thoughts. "There will be a new missionary today," Sophie added happily. Chloe smiled gently. "Yes," she said, taking the child's hand. "Shall we go?" As the carriage rolled through the rain-soaked streets, Sophie's mother, Miss Stella, spoke softly. "Have you heard? The King of Swanton is soon to marry his new queen. The rumors are everywhere. He delayed the late queen's funeral for so long, and yet within a year he is marrying again. I suppose men are the same everywhere." Chloe kept her gaze fixed outside the window. The fact that her existence was slowly fading from his world should have felt like victory. It was proof that she had succeeded in leaving without a trace. And yet, the memories of their time together still clung to her stubbornly. She shook her head. There was nothing left to dwell on. All that remained was to begin anew, in a place where he did not exist. The carriage suddenly lurched as it struck a pothole. The coachman stepped down and suggested they cover the remaining distance on foot. All three of them began walking, but soon they reached a river they needed to cross. Miss Stella hesitated, worried. "It's all right," Chloe assured her gently. "Please go ahead. I will follow shortly." They crossed first and called back, pointing out a stone that would make the crossing easier. Chloe looked down at the flowing water, fear flickering briefly in her eyes. She relied on her cane for support. Slowly, she lifted her trembling foot and placed it onto the stone. Her eyes widened. A hand was steadying the stone beneath her. "Please be careful, my lady. It's slippery." Gilles' voice. Chloe lowered her umbrella slightly and looked at him. "You must be the new missionary," she said softly. "Would you hold my hand?" Gilles lifted his tear-filled eyes. "I'm afraid my hands are too soiled for that," he replied, his voice heavy. Chloe smiled gently. "That is not true, Gilles," she said quietly. "Please, take my hand and help me." The next day, Sophie's mother spoke excitedly to her husband. "We met a handsome missionary yesterday," she said cheerfully, and Claire was smiling so brightly when she saw him. "It was the first time I've seen her smile like that. I truly hope things go well for her and the young missionary." As she continued reading the morning paper, she suddenly gasped. "The king has announced he will marry his mistress," she read in shock. Until now, he showed extraordinary protection toward his lover, yet now he has cast his fiancée aside. She sighed. "Will we really have to accept a woman from Swanton?" "Oh, speaking of Swanton," her husband added casually, "would you object to allowing Laurent Taylor to stay here?" "Who is he?" she asked, raising a brow. "A businessman from Swanton." She hesitated. "A man from Swanton? I'm not so sure, but you seem fine with Claire," her husband pointed. "Out." She sighed again. "Well, that's different. But if you insist, it's fine. I do wonder how Claire's outing is going." That day, Chloe met Gilles again. They walked through the city together. Gilles watched her quietly as she spoke, then asked softly, "My lady, are you happy here?" Chloe paused for a moment before answering. "I returned from the brink of death. Of course I am happy." Gilles nodded. That is all I needed to hear. Later, as Chloe sat on a bench holding the flowers Gilles had brought for her, a memory surfaced. Once, she had promised Damien she would present him with flowers. He had smiled and said that not once had any lady ever given him flowers. She turned to Gilles. "Gilles, why did you become a missionary?" He explained that he wanted to understand why humans must suffer. After hearing the news of her death, he regretted not seizing her hand that day and running away with her. Though she had told him that any choice she made would be of her own will, he had never once doubted that she was truly gone. Chloe sighed softly. "I wanted you to believe it," she admitted. "If you had known the truth, you would have tried to save me, even at the cost of your own life. That is not what I wanted." She lowered her gaze. "I never wanted those I care about to be hurt, and so it had happened exactly as she intended." She smiled faintly, believing she had finally found peace, unaware that the man she had fled from was already on his way to find her. When Chloe returned home, Sophie's mother came to her room at once. "So?" she asked eagerly. "How was today's date?" Chloe blinked in surprise. "It wasn't a date," she said lightly, "though it was pleasant." Sophie's mother smiled warmly. "Think about it, Claire. A pastor's future is secure. He would be a fine marital prospect. I know I may be silly, but I truly want you to be happy." Chloe looked at her quietly. The idea of her and Gilles marrying felt completely outlandish. She let out a soft laugh. "I am not quite ready for marriage," she replied gently. Sophie's mother patted her hand. "Don't overthink it. Just ask yourself one thing. When you're with him, does your heart flutter? If it begins to pound, what else could possibly matter?" Chloe sighed. "I suppose you're right." Days passed like that, and soon the town held a bazaar. Sophie excitedly played with the toys she had bought, while her mother looked anxious. "Claire, could you please keep an eye on Sophie? I need to find my husband." "Of course," Chloe nodded. She walked with Sophie through the stalls when the little girl showed her a music box. Carved upon it were birch trees, just like those in this. When it began to play, Chloe froze. It was the same melody from that day, the day she had danced so freely with him. As the music lingered in the air, a voice called out, "Claire!" She turned. Sophie's mother hurried toward her with her husband and another man. "I finally found him," she said brightly. "My apologies, Claire. He went to attend to a guest. He is from Swanton. Let me introduce you. This gentleman is Laurent Taylor, a merchant from Swanton." The man removed his hat and bowed politely. "I beg your pardon for keeping you waiting," he said calmly. "I have successfully settled all matters, though it appears I have still arrived late." His words answered every question she had once written in that letter before leaving this. Chloe's eyes widened. It was him. He had found her. Her heart began to race as Damien stepped forward, extending his hand toward her. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Chloe." Later, seated in the ballroom, Sophie's mother leaned closer and murmured in mild irritation, "No matter how many times I tell him, he keeps getting your name wrong. That is why I am not very fond of artistic men. But you see, he invested quite a bit in this festival, so I hope you are not offended." She reached over to adjust Sophie's dress. Chloe nodded silently. She had never doubted that one day he would suspect her death. In fact, she had been certain of it. But as time passed and she heard the rumors of his remarriage, she had assumed her existence had slowly faded from his world. Yet he had figured everything out. So why was he still playing along? He was a man who cut off every escape route of his opponent and struck at the most critical moment without hesitation. So why was he waiting? "Miss Stella," Chloe said softly. "If you do not mind, may I leave first with Sophie?" But Miss Stella insisted. "Stay a little longer. At least dance once. That young missionary is here as well." Only then did Chloe realize Gilles was in the same room. The three of them were under one roof. If Damien discovered she had already met Gilles, she could not even imagine his anger. Knowing him, she had to leave before anything happened. But before she could move, Damien approached. "If it is not too much trouble," he said with a courteous smile, "would you honor me with the first dance, or should I wait for my turn?" Chloe remained silent for a moment. "No one else has asked me to dance," she replied evenly. "However, I am afraid I may step on your foot." Damien stepped closer. "I do not mind being stepped on, so may I?" She knew he would not back down. Arguing was useless. She placed her cane aside and stepped forward carefully, limping slightly. But before she could take his hand, her foot caught on one of Sophie's toys. She stumbled. Before she could fall, Damien reached out and caught her hand. His other arm circled her waist, steadying her. He leaned over her slowly, his face close, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Have you been enjoying yourself?" he murmured. "In a world without me, my love?" Chloe steadied herself, straightened her posture, and met his gaze. "And how about you, Your Grace?" she asked calmly. "But I asked you first, Duchess," he replied. So she answered, "Yes, I have quite enjoyed my days here." He flinched almost imperceptibly at her words. "I suppose he murmured. "It must be thrilling to live as someone else. I understand now how the King of Carter must have felt when he visited Swanton to see your sister. His hand tightened at her waist as he twirled her gently. Now then, he continued, lowering his voice, to answer your question. After you set my heart on fire and left, how do you think I felt? He leaned down and brushed a kiss against her neck. Chloe stiffened. Please stop. Did you come here to kill me then? She asked, her voice trembling. No, Chloe, he replied evenly. Wouldn't wiping out that new family who treats a queen as common hurt you far more? She looked at him sharply. Is that another threat? I think you misunderstand me, he said. Misunderstand? She swallowed. How? Do not play games with me. He seized her hand. Does this look like a game to you? He asked quietly. Despite the heightened political tension, I came here alone, without guards. Does that still sound like a game? Her back trembled as she answered, breath uneven. I do not know what you are thinking. But I do not want you to destroy my world again. That is not why I came, he replied. Then why are you here? She demanded, frustration breaking through. Suddenly, the lights in the hall flickered and went out. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Please be careful. In the dimness, she heard his voice close to her ear. Because I missed you, he said softly. I wanted to see you, to speak with you, to dance with you. Her legs wavered. Please stop that, she whispered. Stop what? He asked, lifting his hand to brush his fingers lightly over her lips. This? Before she could answer, he leaned in and captured her lips with his. Her eyes widened. The warmth was real. She tried to push him away, but the rush of memory and emotion threatened to shatter her resolve. Then someone shouted, Oh, the lights are back! Chloe tore herself free. My apologies, she said breathlessly to Miss Stella. I am not feeling well. I believe I should leave now. Miss Stella rose at once to escort her out. Across the hall, Damien's eyes remained fixed on the figure retreating from him. Before coming here, Weiss had made a great fuss, warning him it was too dangerous. His face was too well known. Even if he insisted on going, Weiss had urged him to at least bring soldiers. For what? Damien had answered coldly. To start a war? In defeat, Weiss had suggested he go instead and bring the Duchess back. But if taking her by force was what Damien wanted, he would have done so already. He was not foolish enough to repeat the same mistake. So what are you planning to do? Weiss had asked, troubled. Damien had looked straight ahead. I plan to make her come to me of her own will. I want to remind her that I am already part of her world. And if she refuses? Weiss had asked hesitantly. Damien had turned slightly, his voice calm. Then Swanton will have a new king once again. If she rejected him, he would return the final gift she had given him. After all, he was a man who believed in fair exchange. Chloe rushed home after leaving the hall, breath uneven. She opened her bag and began packing her clothes in haste, his words still echoing in her mind. When Sophie entered the room and saw her, the child froze. Miss Claire, are you leaving? Did something happen? Chloe flinched, then quickly crouched down in front of her. No, of course not, Sophie. I was just tidying up, she assured gently. The child, afraid she might disappear, hugged her tightly. Chloe stroked her hair softly. It's all right, Sophie. This was the peaceful world she had created for herself, without him, and she would never allow anyone to destroy it. He certainly believed she still loved him, but she vowed to shatter that arrogant certainty. She would not repeat the same mistake. She would not crumble and return to him. She would make sure of it. The very next day, however, she froze in shock. The man she was trying to escape was already inside her house. Miss Stella had brought Damien, explaining that he was here on business. He was a special guest, and he had specifically requested Chloe after their previous acquaintance. Chloe could not refuse Miss Stella. With no other choice, she accepted. Shall we? Damien said, offering his hand to help her into the carriage. From behind, Miss Stella watched in surprise at how naturally they looked together. During the journey, Damien gazed out the window before slowly turning toward her. Beautiful, he murmured. Chloe shifted uncomfortably. Yes, Genevois is a lovely place. He smiled faintly. Indeed, a perfect place to forget everything. He rested his chin against his hand. So? Has its beauty managed to erase the countless memories we shared? Chloe kept her eyes fixed outside. After a while, she answered, quietly. What if it did? He studied her. If it truly did, then I would not hold on any longer. I would let you go. She bit her lip. There are some painful memories that are difficult to forget. Chloe? He asked softly. If it is painful to forget me, then what does that make me? Insane? Her anger flared. Before knowing you, I was living just fine. But now that you've appeared again, I even considered starting a family with another man. He listened without interruption, then nodded slowly. I see. Well, you married me even when you did not love me, so I would not find it strange if you chose to marry again without loving him, while carrying me in your heart forever. Do not delude yourself, Chloe replied sharply. I will not cherish you forever. Damien rose from his seat and knelt before her. If you believe I am delusional, he said quietly, then reject my existence. Tell me that I stir nothing in you. Let me hear you say it. He pressed a kiss against her hand. Chloe pulled it away at once. I do not like you. I cannot even bear your touch. It makes my skin crawl. Are you serious? He asked. Yes, you truly repulse me. Is that enough of an answer? She frowned and glanced at him. He slowly nodded. I see. Just then, the carriage struck a stone and jolted violently. Damien caught her shoulders before she could fall, but the pouch she had been carrying slipped from her grasp and tumbled to the floor. Its contents scattered. His eyes lowered. He bent down and picked up the pendant he had once given her. With a soft click, it opened. Inside was their photograph. Chloe's face drained of color. She had never intended for him to see it. But Damien only smiled faintly. He looked back at her and said quietly, Yes, Chloe, that is a sufficient answer. At dinner, Miss Stella turned to Damien with a polite smile. How was your trip, Mr. Taylor? It went well, he replied smoothly, glancing at Chloe. Thanks to Miss Claire. Miss Stella brightened. Mind if I ask you something about Swanton? I heard the king will soon be married. Do you know anything about it? A new queen, Damien said lightly. Well, the people of Swanton are certainly hoping for that. His eyes shifted toward Chloe. But I don't think bringing her will be easy. Why is that? Miss Stella asked curiously. Damien raised a brow. Miss Claire, you are also from Swanton. Why do you think that is? Chloe's brows furrowed. She averted her gaze. I am not well aware of such matters to give you an answer. The topic had clearly intrigued the couple. Miss Stella's husband leaned forward. Mr. Taylor, why is it difficult for the king to remarry? Damien calmly cut into his steak before answering, still looking at Chloe. Because the list of potential brides has been rejected before it even reaches the king. Oh? Who would reject such a list? Miss Stella asked eagerly. His mother, Damien replied. You see, she is very fond of Chloe. Oh, she must have been quite beloved, Miss Stella remarked. But in contrast, our future queen's origin is completely unknown. Her tone sharpened slightly. Rumor says she once wandered about as a bohemian. To think such a woman is becoming our queen is outrageous. What do you think, Miss Taylor? She was unaware that the woman she spoke of was Alice, Chloe's sister. Damien noticed Chloe's discomfort at once. With a faint smile, he intervened. I believe it is not an appropriate topic to discuss in front of a child. Chloe raised her head, understanding he had done it intentionally. Mr. Taylor, she said quietly, I truly appreciate the concern. I already envy your future wife. You are so kind and considerate. A slow smile spread across Damien's face. I also believe I will make a fine husband, he replied, his gaze lingering on Chloe, whose face had already paled from the weight of the conversation. After dinner, Chloe returned to her room, her mind racing. She remembered Alice's words, Come to me if you ever need help. Perhaps it was time to disappear again without a trace. But there was a problem. Asking Alice for help would mean relying on the power of the King of Carter, who was openly hostile towards Swanton. What if he used this opportunity to harm Damien? She could not allow that. Yet she also knew she could not remain here forever, hiding her identity. She needed to make Damien give up on her and leave as soon as possible. Lost in thought, she reached for the door handle, only to freeze. He was standing outside. What are you doing here? She asked sharply. He smiled faintly. Who knows? Perhaps I drank too much and mistook your room for mine. Her brows furrowed. It was an obvious lie. Before she could respond, she heard Miss Stella's voice in the corridor, speaking to her husband about Chloe, saying she looked pale at dinner and that she might come check on her. Chloe reacted instantly. She grabbed Damien by the arm, pulled him inside, shut the door, and covered his mouth with her hand before Miss Stella could see them together. Are you feeling all right, Claire? Miss Stella called from outside. Sweat trickled down Chloe's temple. I'm fine, she replied steadily. Just a little tired. I wanted to rest. After a moment, the footsteps faded. Damien looked down at her. Is there any reason for us to sneak like that? He asked quietly. Once she was sure Miss Stella had gone, Chloe stepped back. Please get out. Instead, Damien took out a pendant. I was here to return this. Chloe glanced at it. You can keep it. I don't need it. I only kept it in case I needed money. Really? He asked, raising a brow. Let's open it and see. He clicked it open. Inside was the wedding anniversary stamp she had commissioned before faking her death. Chloe stared at it in silence. It turned out quite well, didn't it? He murmured. Her voice trembled. Why are you doing this? Why are you tormenting me? He knelt, picking up the pendant she had thrown aside. I'm not trying to torment you. I thought you might be curious to see how it turned out. Now that I've satisfied one of your curiosities, may I ask something? He raised his head. The man you are considering marrying, is it Gilles Watteau? Chloe's hand clenched around her dress. What does it matter to you? I'm simply curious. You always approach things with caution. I never imagined you would marry someone else, and certainly not that Gilles Watteau would have the audacity to ask. I am almost tempted to marry him. Chloe shot back. Just to see your arrogance shatter. But you know better that he wouldn't be the right choice, Damien said evenly. And are you? She scoffed. He slowly rose to his feet. Chloe, that day when I saw you through the Verdier window, I wanted to run into your room that very moment. I couldn't dare admit it to anyone, but the impulse I felt was real. Had you run into my room, she replied coldly, I would have taken you for a ruffian and screamed. What if I had confessed my love in that forest? I would have thought you mad. He stepped closer. I suppose I knew deep down that would have been the case. Then, more quietly, but I am merely stating a fact, I have loved Chloe Verdier from the moment I first laid eyes on her, and that has not changed. She looked at him. What does any of that matter now? His hand, which had been brushing her hair, fell away. He turned toward the window. Chloe, he called softly. If I were to fall from here and hurt myself, would you tend to me, or pretend you hadn't seen anything? Her breath hitched. What are you planning? Before she could finish, he had already stepped onto the ledge and jumped. Damien! She rushed to the window and looked down. He landed lightly on his feet, straightened himself, adjusted his gloves, then looked up at her. With a casual air, he sent her a flying kiss and winked. Chloe nearly scoffed at his unbelievable behavior. Below, he gave her a small bow of exaggerated courtesy before turning and walking away as if nothing had happened. She let out a long breath, steadying herself. Truly, a madman, she murmured. The next day, as Chloe walked beside Gilles, he spoke quietly. I have been worried about you ever since the day at the bazaar. The man who returned, I am certain he did not come here without purpose. Chloe nodded. At first, she had believed he came to kill her for deceiving him. But after spending a few days in his presence, she understood that was not his intention. I only wish he would accept reality, move on, and leave soon, she whispered softly. She had no intention of running away again. When they returned home, Chloe stopped abruptly. What is this? She asked in confusion. In the arena stood Damien. Oh, Miss Chloe, you are here. I've been waiting for you, he said smoothly. Then his eyes shifted to Gilles. And who is this? Miss Stella stepped forward, introducing Gilles as a missionary from Swanton. Damien's grin widened. My apologies. I did not expect to find a missionary here. But if it is not too much trouble, would you care to be my opponent? He extended his hand. Soon a crowd gathered. What began as a simple exchange turned into a spectacle. Chloe felt unease coil within her. Why are we doing this? She asked Miss Stella. Miss Stella laughed lightly. Oh, you know men. They do not use their minds much. They prefer to display their strength. But it is quite something to watch. Gilles turned to Chloe. My lady, if I win, will you take a walk with me this evening? She looked troubled. Yes, but you do not need a wager for that, Gilles. A rough voice cut in. So when are we starting? This conversation is dragging on. Damien smiled, but his demeanor did not match the expression. The bell rang. The fight began. Damien strode forward first, rage barely concealed. His fist struck Gilles hard across the face. What shall we do? Damien mocked lightly. It seems you may have to walk alone. Gilles lifted his head. I was merely being courteous. Before he could move, Damien stepped back strategically and struck him again. Pathetic, Damien laughed as Gilles hit the ground. But when he looked up, the smile on his face faded. Chloe stood there, worried. Yet her worried gaze was fixed solely on the man on the floor. In that split second of distraction, Gilles landed a punch on Damien's face. Ah, the face is off limits, Damien murmured arrogantly, wiping blood from his lip. Gilles, fueled by anger, lunged at him. Considering what you have done, even smashing that face would not be enough. He punched Damien relentlessly. Damien did not resist. Go on, he taunted quietly. Give me everything you've got. He took every blow. And then, finally, he saw it. Chloe's gaze, tearful, shaken. And this time, it was for him. He turned slightly toward her. It hurts, Chloe, he whispered softly. Before he could reach for her, Gilles grabbed him again and threw another punch. Damien laughed under the assault, accepting every strike. Chloe could not bear it any longer. She turned and rushed away, breath uneven. Even as she left, the image of his bloodied face followed her. Everything had become a mess again. Are you okay? A small voice asked behind her. It was Sophie. Chloe steadied herself. Yes. Where are you going? She asked. Oh, I am going to Marmot's house. She is scared of the dark, so I am giving her this so she won't be afraid at night. Chloe looked down. But that is your favorite doll, Sophie. Sophie nodded. Yes, that's why I'm giving it to her. I like her. She is my friend. And you told me not to hide my true feelings, right? Chloe had once told her that showing your true feelings was far harder than hiding them, and that she should be brave. Remembering her own words, Chloe felt her emotions overwhelm her. She knelt and hugged Sophie tightly. Miss, are you okay? Should I give this doll to you instead? Sophie asked innocently. Chloe shook her head gently. No, I've already found my courage, Sophie. At last she understood. She had been hiding her feelings, and in doing so, she had been deceiving everyone around her. But that had to end, especially when the person she was deceiving most was someone dear to her heart. As the fight ended, Chloe kept her promise and took the evening walk with Gilles. Until last year, Gilles said quietly, I never thought we would walk together again. I am truly happy that we can share a walk like this. One last time. Chloe turned to him startled. One last time? What do you mean? Gilles smiled gently. My lady, it was a miracle to meet you again. To be honest, at first I was resentful when I realized he was right and I was wrong. When he never stopped searching for you, I never once doubted your death. I buried what I believed were your remains in Verdier, with my love. He paused. But now I understand. It is only natural that you cannot be with me, Lady Chloe. Chloe listened in silence, then closed her eyes. Thank you, Gilles, she said softly, for laying the burnt remains to rest. And I am truly sorry. He waved his hand lightly. You never need to apologize to me. From his pocket, he took out the handkerchief she had given him the day he asked her to run away with him. Do you remember this? I think. It is time I stop crying. I swear I will be happy, my lady. His voice trembled, but he smiled. Chloe felt relief wash over her. She knew he would find happiness, because that was the kind of man Gilles Watteau was. What tormented her, however, was the truth. She had believed she could return to a peaceful life, like before he had trampled through it. But now she understood that it had been her arrogance to think so, not his. Tears slid down her cheeks as she sat alone on a bench in the rain. Footsteps approached. It has been a long time, my lady, Weiss said gently. His Majesty is waiting for you. Chloe said nothing. She stepped into the carriage in silence. Soon it brought her to where Damien was waiting. We have arrived. Allow me to help you, Weiss offered. She ignored his hand and stepped down on her own, walking straight. Inside. Weiss sighed under his breath. Like husband, like wife. Chloe entered the hall, her eyes fixed ahead. Along the wall, guns were lined in display. She took one down and stepped into the room where Damien stood. Why must you torment me, she shouted. Why did you have to barge into my peaceful world and throw everything into chaos? Damien turned slowly. Chloe, he said calmly, stepping forward. What have I done? You make it sound as though I dragged you here against your will. Stay back, she cried, pointing the gun at him. He paused, then spoke quietly. Did you not enjoy your walk with Gilles? If you were upset about that, it would be unfair. He took another step. Stay back. Come any closer, and I will shoot. Without hesitation, Damien grasped the barrel of the gun and pressed it against his own chest. Every gun here is loaded, he said. If you wish, you can kill me. Go on, Chloe, shoot. I am certain you have wanted to, at least once. Her figure trembled violently. Not once, she shouted. Many times. When you mocked me for my leg. When you deceived me. When you humiliated me with your arrogance. At every moment, I wanted to kill you. Then why can't you? He asked, staring straight into her eyes as he tightened his grip on the weapon. Right now? He leaned closer. Chloe, the reason you cannot kill me is because you love me enough to want to. She stared at him through tear-filled eyes. Where does that confidence of yours come from? She asked softly. How can you be so certain? He exhaled slowly. If I were not, he said quietly, how could I have remained sane until now? All this time, I held on to the belief that you still loved me. That hope brought me this far. And if it were not for that, he lifted the barrel toward his mouth. I would have placed this here and pulled the trigger long ago. Chloe's trembling hand finally gave way. The gun slipped from her grasp and fell to the floor with a dull sound. Are you aware that you suffocate people? Chloe asked, her voice unsteady. Damien looked at her and smiled. Then he pulled her close by the waist. I'm not, he replied lightly. But I do know one thing, I drive people absolutely insane. But, Chloe, my love, do you think you are the only one who hates me? After you trampled on my heart and ran away, what do you think I feel about you? He whispered against her ear, brushing a kiss over her earlobe. Chloe trembled at his touch. Then why don't you punish me? She whispered back. You are good at that. Why don't you lock me up and deprive me of my life? Damien lifted his head and looked at her carefully. If I could, I would, he admitted quietly. But Chloe, there is one thing you should know. We are only doing this to each other because we love each other. So, it is all right to tell me you love me now. Tears slid down her cheeks as she met his gaze. If I admit that I love you, she said slowly, I could never forgive myself. Damien reached up and wiped away her tears. My love, he murmured gently. Tell me. Why would you not be able to forgive me? She held his gaze. Because you made the people I love suffer just to have me. Forgiving you would mean betraying my family and my child. So please. She moved to push his hand away, but froze. His hand. It was burned. Likely from the night she fled, before she could withdraw. Damien clasped her hand firmly. Chloe, you wish for their happiness. Then you must understand. The people you love also wish for yours. Your family. Even Gilles. None of them want you to sacrifice yourself for them. He smiled faintly. And do you know how I know this? By observing them, just as you once told me. Chloe stared at him, hearing her own words spoken back to her. Damien leaned closer and kissed away her tears. Of course, he murmured softly. Not everyone can love with the same devotion you give them. But that is all right, because loving you in that way is my job. Chloe closed her eyes. What if I had never opened that secret vault? She asked quietly. What if I had never discovered your secret? Damien cupped her cheeks gently. Then you would never have left Swanton. You would never have felt that reckless desire to scar me in return. You would never have experienced hating yourself for loving me. His voice lowered. And as for me, I, a Thisse, would not be standing here begging for your love like this. He held her face, his expression stripped of pride at last. Chloe's grip tightened on her skirt. Then apologize to me until you truly mean it. Before she could finish, Damien lifted her effortlessly and set her down on the large table behind her. Then should I apologize even for loving you? He asked softly. If that is what you want, I will kneel before you. Not 100 times, but 1,000. He leaned in, pressing slow kisses along her delicate neck. Chloe flinched, her head tilting back slightly. You must be thinking everything is finally over now, she whispered, her breath uneven. You must be smiling with relief that everything went the way you wanted. Damien lifted his head, meeting her gaze. Well, I cannot deny that, my love, he admitted quietly. Overwhelmed by the storm inside him, he eased her back gently, his hand steady despite the emotion in his eyes. His fingers moved to unbutton his shirt, his gaze never leaving her. In 2 years, he said in a low voice, for the first and last time, I shall enforce a harsh law upon you and fulfill the marital duties we have postponed for so long. He bent closer, his lips brushing hers. Congratulations, he whispered, for bringing this to his knees, my queen. He captured her lips again. Chloe trembled, her breath uneven as she clutched his arm. Lost in the rush of feeling, she could barely think straight, her voice breaking softly as she called his name. Damien. He hovered above her, his eyes searching her face. You still only call me by my name in moments like this, he murmured, her fingers tightened around him as she whispered again, lost in the emotion of it. Damien. He leaned closer, his voice lower now. Come back, my queen, and I shall gladly kneel at your feet. There was no pride left in him, only longing. Chloe's hands slid around his neck, pulling him closer. And in that quiet moment, she surrendered her heart to him once more. The next morning, Chloe stepped out onto the balcony wrapped in Damien's shirt. The morning breeze lifted her hair gently. From behind, Damien slipped his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? He asked softly. Chloe let out a small, anxious breath. I was just wondering, how am I even supposed to explain this to Miss Stella? Damien laughed, tightening his embrace. Do we really need to explain it? Simply showing them will do, and it's a relief there are no neighbors nearby. Otherwise, if they heard you calling my name last night— Damien, please stop, Chloe said, pushing him lightly, her cheeks flushed. He smiled and leaned down, pressing a slow kiss to her shoulder. This is the first proper night's sleep I've had since you left, he murmured, so please, don't leave my side again. Chloe turned to look at him. But I still need to think some things through. Damien raised his head slightly. All right, think about it thoroughly. And I'll make sure you leave without any bitterness in your heart, he said firmly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I'll show you how much I love you. I'll do anything to see you deeply in love with me once more, my love. His resolve did not waver. He leaned in and sealed that promise with a kiss. Later, at the dinner table, Miss Stella asked Damien politely as his day of your departure was approaching. Was your stay comfortable? Of course, Damien replied with a smile. I had the best time here. Even best cannot describe my feelings. After all, I found my wife here. I couldn't be happier. Miss Stella blinked in surprise. Huh? What did you just say? Before? Damien could answer. Sophie spoke up innocently. Mister, why are you touching Miss Claire's back like that? Oh, Damien replied smoothly. She seemed to be trembling, so I was just comforting her. Miss Stella's expression turned worried. Claire, are you all right? Chloe's face turned crimson. How was she supposed to explain this? Before she could speak, Miss Stella's husband intervened with a knowing smile. Oh, darling. Sometimes the fate of a man and a woman can be decided in a single night. Damien smiled faintly. Thank you for your understanding. If you could accept my wife's resignation, I will ensure Sophie receives all the support she needs from the Palace of Swanton. Miss Stella's husband nodded. Congratulations on getting your wife back. We are truly happy for you. Damien wrapped his arm around Chloe's waist. Thank you. Seeing you all happy for us makes me happy as well. Elsewhere, a man arrived with urgent news. Duke Thisse is currently staying at a private estate owned by a farmer, and it seems a duchess arrived there beforehand. Before he could finish, a sharp knife flew through the air, slicing across his neck. How dare you call that traitor a duke? Johannes said coldly, lifting his gaze. His eyes dropped to the paper in his hand. My cousin truly is brave. Coming to the duchy and acting so brazenly. His laughter twisted into a cruel smile. Then it seems it's time we pay them a visit. To their little family reunion. After dinner, Miss Stella sat beside Chloe and asked gently, Are you truly all right with all this? To her, Damien still did not seem trustworthy. And the missionary had appeared to be such a perfect match for Chloe. But when she noticed the faint blush on Chloe's cheeks and that unmistakable smile of a woman in love, she understood how serious Chloe was about this businessman from Swanton. With a sigh, she pressed Chloe's hand lightly. As long as you are happy, I will let you go. All of us wish nothing but for your happiness. But— She paused, her voice turning firm. If you ever feel like divorcing him, just leave and come back to us. Do you understand? Chloe smiled with gratitude. Thank you, Miss Stella. When Chloe returned to her room, she found Damien sitting there. What are you doing here? She asked, surprised. Oh, Chloe, he replied, lifting his gaze. I was waiting for you. She closed the door behind her with a sigh. "Your Grace," she said calmly, "please maintain your dignity. It is not proper to enter a lady's room like this." Damien stood and offered her his hand. "What can I do, Chloe? I am nothing but a pitiful man burning with desire in front of you." He leaned closer, kissing her hand lightly. "I have no dignity left to preserve." Chloe sighed. "Sometimes you make me so awkward I truly want to slap you." Damien laughed and pulled her gently by the waist, seating her on his lap. "By all means, go ahead. But may I also slap you somewhere in return? Like last night?" he teased. "Damien!" Chloe called his name, flustered. "Please leave. The bed is too small for you to sleep here." "That makes it even better," he replied shamelessly. "You can lay over me and we can sleep listening to each other's heartbeat." Then his gaze paused on the brace around her pale leg. "Oh," Chloe explained softly. "I bought it from the market when my cane broke." Damien set her down on the bed and knelt to examine it. Clicking his tongue, he muttered that it was useless, nothing compared to what he had once brought her. Chloe watched him quietly. "Damien, will people really accept a queen like me?" she asked. He raised his head immediately. "Chloe, I will not allow anyone to judge your worth. If anyone dares to mock you, I swear on the name of this, I shall sever their head and present it to you." He was entirely serious. Chloe shook her head. "You have a talent for making good intentions sound harsh. It will be difficult for people to praise you." Damien looked down slightly. "Leaders are always criticized. I have never cared much for praise." Chloe reached out and caressed his cheek gently. "I know, and that is why I hesitated to say this. But Damien, I never once forgot you. Even when I hated you to the core, my heart always ached whenever I thought of you." She looked at him, the man who had taught her not to abandon her desires, the only man before whom she could truly be herself. "Damien, please make me your queen," she said with a soft smile. He went silent for a moment before speaking quietly. "Chloe, give me assurance, so I may be your loyal knight." Chloe pulled his face closer and pressed an affectionate kiss to his forehead. "I love you, Damien," she whispered. The words he had longed to hear were finally spoken aloud. Damien lifted her foot gently into his hands and kissed it, not as a king claiming a queen, but as a knight pledging himself to her. Finally, the day of their departure arrived. "Sophie is not coming out," Miss Stella said with a heavy sigh. "She doesn't want to say goodbye. Please understand, Claire." Chloe lowered her gaze. She, too, did not want to leave Sophie. Damien wrapped his arms around her from behind. "It is time to go, Chloe," he said gently. She nodded and said her goodbyes. The carriage began rolling down the street. Damien, seated across from her, spoke casually about writing to her father before they reached Swain, but Chloe was lost in her thoughts. "Chloe?" he asked, tilting his head. "Are you still thinking about that girl?" She nodded softly. "We spent so much time together. She always followed me around." Damien rose and sat beside her. "She's cute," he added. Chloe smiled faintly and began describing how bright and mischievous Sophie was. Damien simply watched his wife, remembering the day she had once asked him whether their child would resemble her or him. He understood how deeply Chloe cared for Sophie, almost as if she were her own daughter. "Should we kidnap her and take her to Swain?" he joked lightly. "Damien!" Chloe snapped. "Don't joke like that. Miss Stella will break your leg." He clasped her hands calmly. "Chloe, do you know where Sophie usually hides? Before we leave, let's find her and say a proper goodbye." Chloe turned to him, surprised. "Really?" Damien smiled and nodded. "Until I can give you a daughter of our own. I am just a helpless fool. This is the least I can do." He kissed her forehead. They soon arrived at the place where the wagons were stored, where Sophie often went to hide. Chloe searched the first floor, but there was no one there. Assuming Sophie might be upstairs, she hurried to the second floor. Damien remained below, smiling faintly, admiring the depth of his wife's motherly affection. "Sophie, where are you?" Chloe called gently. Then she saw Sophie's little shoes lying on the floor. Not far away, a door stood slightly ajar. Chloe picked up one of the shoes with a soft sigh. "Where is our Sophie gone?" "You are so clever it's hard to find you," she said lightly, assuming the child might be hiding inside. "Is our Sophie in here?" she asked, pushing the door open, and the sight froze her blood. Sophie's mouth was covered by a man standing behind her. A knife was pressed to the child's throat. The man gestured sharply for Chloe to remain silent. "If you want to save her," he whispered coldly, "answer me this. Is Duke Thisse here?" Chloe's face turned pale. Did this man know Damien? He did not look like an ordinary thief. What should she do? Before she could answer, Damien's voice came from downstairs. "Chloe, are you still upstairs?" The man tightened his grip and motioned for her to respond as if nothing was wrong. Chloe looked at Sophie. The situation was grave. She swallowed and forced her voice steady. "Yes, I'm still here. And Adele is here too," she said deliberately. "But she seems upset that I'm leaving so suddenly." She had intentionally changed Sophie's name. She prayed Damien would understand. "Really?" Damien replied from below. "I'm glad you found." Kerr. Chloe shut her eyes, hoping he had caught the signal. The next second, a door burst open with a bang. A gunshot rang through the air. It was Damien. Blood pooled across the floor as the man collapsed. Sophie broke free and ran straight into Chloe's arms. "It's all right, Sophie. Everything is all right now, Chloe whispered, holding her tightly. Damien scanned the room quickly. Chloe, it's not safe to stay here. She turned to him, shaken. That man knew who you were. He didn't look like an ordinary thief. Do you know what this is about? Damien's gaze darkened. It seems Johannes is here to see me. Chloe felt her heart drop. So, Chloe, he continued calmly, you take Sophie back home. There was only one bullet. Her anxiety surged. Then what about you? If they are nearby, they must have heard the gunshot, he said quietly. He bent down and pressed a soft kiss to her head. Make sure you and Sophie return home safely. I will stay and deal with them. Chloe looked into his eyes, unwilling to leave him behind, but he crouched down in front of Sophie first. Sophie, we're going to play hide and seek, all right? Stay with your miss and don't make a sound. The child nodded weakly. Then he turned to Chloe. Before they could move, a voice echoed from below. Damien, my cousin, are you there? Johannes called out. There was no time to escape. Damien quickly guided Chloe and Sophie toward a nearby wardrobe. Hide inside. But what are you planning to do? You don't even have a gun, Chloe whispered urgently. He closed the wardrobe doors halfway, his expression steady. Chloe, listen carefully. Johannes would not simply finish me here. So think about what comes after. She stared at him, trembling. My wife is a brave woman, he continued softly. I know that for a fact. And remember, courage isn't about acting on impulse. It's about holding back and maintaining reason. He reached out, brushing her cheek one last time. So if you love me, be brave for me, my love. With a faint smile, he shut the wardrobe door and stepped forward to face his cousin. Soon, Johannes stepped inside. Well, look who I've met after such a long time. My dear cousin, he said, smiling like a madman. Damien stood still. You finally showed up. You vanished without a trace, so I assumed you were dead. But I truly missed you. Johannes' smile froze. Missed me? Rage flashed across his face. He raised his gun and fired. The bullet struck Damien's shoulder. Blood began to drip down his sleeve. After all this time, this is how you greet me? Damien said, still smiling faintly. Johannes gestured sharply. His men grabbed Damien by the hair and forced him to his knees. It's a shame, Johannes murmured, that I can only see you like this. He pressed the gun beneath Damien's chin, forcing his face upward. Where is that woman? He demanded. I would like to repay her for bringing you here. Damien met his eyes calmly. I hid her far away from you. As you see, I am quite a considerate husband. Johannes' anger flared. Even covered in blood, you still carry that arrogance. Even after marrying that worthless, lowly woman. Inside the wardrobe, Chloe's entire body trembled. Every instinct urged her to run to Damien, but Sophie clutched her hand and shook her head. Tears filled Chloe's eyes. She remembered his words. Courage is not impulse. She held Sophie tightly and forced herself to remain still. Johannes, after venting his rage, ordered his men to drag Damien away. They obeyed. The room fell silent. After what felt like an eternity, Chloe slowly opened the wardrobe. She stepped out carefully, Sophie beside her. Then she froze. Blood was spread across the floor. Damien's blood. Her face drained of color. He had surrendered himself, so she and Sophie could escape. She had become his weakness. He was bleeding. Even if the shot was not fatal, there was no knowing how long he could endure. What should she do? Miss... Look, Sophie whispered, pointing to the floor. Chloe followed her gaze. Written in blood were the words, "Expect a gift, my love." Her breath caught. She remembered his words from that night, that if anyone dared mock her, he would present their head to her. Even in that moment, he had been thinking only of her. Chloe broke down, sobbing. She brought Sophie back home. Miss Stella rushed forward and embraced her daughter tightly. Her husband stepped toward Chloe, holding a newspaper. Who exactly is Mr. Taylor? Or rather, who are you two? He asked gravely, showing her Damien's portrait printed on the front page. I will explain later, Chloe said, her voice trembling but steady. But please, help me find the fastest transportation. Where do you need to go? He asked anxiously. Chloe forced herself to think. For a fugitive Prince of Swanton to remain in the duchy, he must have powerful support, and whoever supported him must harbor deep hatred toward Swanton. If that was the case, then she needed to move first. I need to go to the capital of the duchy, Chloe said firmly. I must meet the king of the duchy. She could not remain Damien's weakness, and as queen, she could not allow the sun to set on Swanton so easily. Determined, Chloe arrived at the royal palace of the Duchy of Carter. She was led into a chamber and made to wait. Ah, we are joined by a very esteemed guest, the king of the duchy drawled as he entered, wrapped lazily in his night robe. What brings you here so late at night, interrupting my sweet honeymoon? Chloe stood. It has been a while, she said steadily, and the first time we meet on such formal ground. Have we met before? He wondered aloud, then paused. Ah, you mean that evening. Welcome to the duchy. But what is so urgent? Please tell me the traitor, Johannes' whereabouts, Chloe asked directly. A traitor? He leaned forward with a faint smile. Isn't the real traitor the one who betrayed his cousin and took his place? It seems you are well informed, Chloe replied firmly. A traitor. Is someone who, during plague, fled to save himself without once thinking of his nation. Not the one who calmed the angry populace and handled everything, then rightfully succeeded to the throne. Even if Johannes took his majesty hostage, he would not be able to reclaim the throne. And why is that? The king asked calmly. Because anyone with the same spirit as Damien would dethrone him again, Chloe answered without hesitation. House this believes the capable should rule, regardless of status, gender, or physical limitation. And normalizing trade with Swanton would not harm the duchy. If relations deteriorate, it is the people who will suffer. The king listened intently. I see. What you say is reasonable, he replied at last, but I cannot answer you about Johannes's whereabouts. Please enjoy your tea before it grows cold. He rose as if the conversation were over. Why are you protecting Johannes? Chloe pressed. He tilted his head. You may not fully understand. Let us say, the people of Swanton are rather insufferable. Chloe's heart began to race, no matter what she argued. He did not seem convinced. Should she kneel and beg? No. A queen kneeling? That is absurd. Do not be hasty, my love. Just look for his weakness. Damien's voice echoed in her memory. Chloe lifted her gaze and studied the king carefully. His night robe hung loosely. Faint bite marks traced his skin. She understood. I would like to meet my sister Alice, Chloe said calmly. The king's expression shifted slightly. As a daughter of House Verdier, I wish to see my sister, she repeated firmly. You are mistaken, the king replied coolly. She chose me over her family. Why should I allow? The door suddenly opened. Arnaud? Alice stood there, her own nightrobe loosely tied, eyes flashing with anger. The king sighed. I told you to lock the door, he muttered toward a maid. Do not blame her, Alice snapped. I came out myself. Before she could move toward Chloe, Arnaud caught her wrist. Gently. You were sleeping. I did not wish to wake you, he reasoned, then added teasingly. Perhaps I should have ensured you could not leave the bed at all. Just shut up, Alice shot back sharply. Ah, my lady is angry. Perhaps I should calm her with a kiss. Go away. I need to speak with my sister alone, Alice said firmly. At last, the king relented. The sisters sat facing each other. I'm sorry, Chloe, Alice said, worry filling her voice. It's all right, Chloe replied softly. I was shocked to hear you were here. What happened? Chloe hesitated, then spoke. Alice, do you remember your promise? I need your help. I need to save my husband. In fact, I will save him. I just need to know where he is. Please, Alice. Memories of Damien overwhelmed her. Tears spilled from her eyes. I love him, Alice. As much as I love my own life. No, more than that, so please help me save him. Alice stared at her sister for a long moment, then grasped her hands firmly. Do you know why I was so reckless? Alice said quietly. Because you were always there for me. So, Chloe, you have no idea how happy I am to finally help you. She pulled her into a tight embrace. No matter what, I will do everything to find him. When Alice left to speak with the king, Chloe remained seated alone, her hands trembling in silent prayer. You did well, my love. She heard his voice in her mind. Damien, why do I only realize things when it feels too late, she whispered. It is never too late, his voice seemed to answer. But she did not know where he was. She did not know what he was enduring. One thing, however, was certain. She could no longer live apart from him. Elsewhere, not far away. Damien stood in chains, his wrists and ankles bound, his bare chest streaked with blood and dust. He hoped that by now Weiss and Cormier had taken Chloe safely back to Swanton. And if, for some reason, he could not return, he had already prepared for it. If I fail to return from the duchy, Swanton will welcome its first queen rightfully. Those had been his words, naming Chloe as his successor. Still, he wished to see her once more, to hold her just one more time. As he exhaled heavily, Johannes entered. What a sight, Johannes mocked, the mighty this trembling, in fear. Damien simply looked at him without speaking. Johannes's anger flared. Why are you silent now? Have you finally wet yourself in fear? Damien laughed lightly. What's wrong, Johannes? To me it looks like you're the one desperate enough to wet yourself. But remember, there is not a single thing you can beat me at. That is the truth, whether you accept it or not. Johannes's teeth clenched. He strode forward. Must I cut off your prideful manhood to silence you? He barked, pressing the knife dangerously low. Damien met his gaze calmly. You are still naive, Johannes. If you wish to hurt me, start with my heart. Why dirty your hands there? Johannes laughed harshly. Very well, I will rip your heart out and crush it. Then shred that perfect body of yours. Damien glanced at the ritual markings around them and scoffed. Do you truly believe this ritual will make you king? Johannes froze. I am more remarkable than you, he shouted. But you interfered with everything I did. That is why I lost my rightful place. Damien laughed again. How pathetic, to blame your own madness on me. He tightened his fist deliberately, forcing his thumb out of joint. And remember, Johannes, not everything that glitters is gold. Johannes lost control. Die, you demon! he roared, lunging forward. In the next instant, the knife shifted. Damien twisted, breaking one finger free from its restraint and wrenching his hand from the chain. Johannes was thrown back with a brutal punch. The guard beside him froze in shock. Damien hurled the knife into the man's leg. The gun slipped from the guard's hand. Damien seized it and fired. The man dropped dead. Breathing hard, Damien broke free of one wrist and one leg. But before he could fully free himself, a violent explosion shook the temple. Johannes staggered back, laughing wildly. "Die like that! I will return for your corpse." He fled. The ceiling cracked. Stones began to fall. The mountain trembled. Meanwhile, Chloe, having learned Johannes's whereabouts from Alice, rushed toward the old temple on the mountain hill. When she arrived, the place was in chaos, fire and smoke everywhere. Behind her, Cormier assessed the destruction. "I think no one is here anymore," he muttered. But Chloe refused to accept it. She ran forward, searching desperately. Only scattered stones remained. Tears streamed down her face. There were still so many things she wanted to tell him. The once proud Chloe Verdier had long disappeared after meeting him, so how could he leave without taking responsibility for her now? "Damien!" she cried out. "I am waiting for you, even if it means forever." Below the collapsed structure, Damien lay pinned, one leg still chained. Was he truly going to die like this? He wondered if Weiss and Cormier had enough sense not to let Chloe see his corpse. "My love, help me leave with a smile," he murmured faintly. Then, his eyes widened. "I am waiting for you," her voice echoed above. "Chloe." A grin slowly spread across his bloodied lips. "How can I allow myself to die when you are here?" he whispered. Above, Cormier urged her urgently. "Your Majesty, we must leave. It's not safe." Chloe shook her head fiercely. "Let go. He cannot be dead. Damien Thisse cannot die like this." Then, a voice sounded behind her. "You are right. But why are you crying? Why do you look as if you've already seen your husband's corpse?" Chloe froze. She turned. Damien stood there, injured but alive, supporting himself. Her breath caught. It was him. Without thinking, she rushed forward and threw herself into his arms. Damien embraced her tightly despite the pain. "Chloe," he murmured softly, holding her trembling form. "It's all right. I'm here. I'm still here." After calming herself, Chloe looked up at him, eyes wet. "What? Did you really think your husband would just die like that?" he teased faintly. She shook her head and tightened her arms around him. "Ever since I met you, I couldn't be myself anymore," she confessed, her voice unsteady. "When you broke my cane in the forest, I hated you so much, yet my heart still raced. Because of that, I hated you even more. But I still married you. If I had truly hated you, I would have run away." She tried to reason with herself, as if proving her own love aloud. Damien smiled and rested his forehead against hers. "I know," he murmured. "However," he added softly, "even if you had run away, you would have come back to me in the end, and loved me anyway. Isn't that right, my love?" Chloe's lips curved into a small smile. She lifted her hand, cupped his face, and rose on her toes to kiss her husband. From the side, Weiss and Cormier witnessed the scene. "Are you thinking the same as I am?" Weiss muttered. Cormier smiled faintly. "Who can understand those two? But must they do this at the edge of a cliff?" Both men sighed at the sight of the husband and wife who had completely forgotten the world around them. Later, Weiss and Cormier led the carriage down the mountain, while Chloe and Damien sat behind. Chloe carefully treated Damien's wounded hand, setting his broken thumb with a splint. Damien chuckled. "Why are you laughing?" Chloe scolded anxiously. "What were you even thinking, breaking your own finger? And why didn't you shout to us instead of climbing out with that hand?" He listened to her complaints patiently, then leaned forward and kissed the corner of her eye. "What can I do?" he whispered. "I was in a hurry to kiss my wife." As the carriage rolled forward, Damien suddenly noticed movement in the woods. He grabbed the gun and aimed, though his injured hand made it difficult. Chloe followed his gaze. Johannes, the man who had nearly taken her husband from her forever. "Give it to me," Chloe said quietly. Damien's eyes widened. But before he could react, she took the gun from him. Her hands trembled as she aimed. He leaned close, his voice low and steady in her ear. "Chloe, don't rush. Focus on the target. Hold your breath. Don't feel pressured. If it's too much, just help me with the splint." Before he could finish, a gunshot rang out. Johannes fell to the ground with a heavy thud. Damien stared at her, then broke into a grin. "Chloe, that was a perfect shot. Is this your way of showing your love to me?" But Chloe was trembling. The weight of what she had done crashed down on her. Her vision blurred. The gun slipped from her fingers, and she collapsed. Damien caught her instantly, pulling her close, fear replacing the smile on his face. He pressed his forehead against hers. "I love you, Chloe," he whispered softly. "With all my heart. 3 years ago at Birch Castle, Your Grace, you cannot delay any longer." "Please think about it," Weiss urged. "About what?" Damien asked casually, his attention still fixed on the game before him. "It seems Weiss is worried about your marriage being delayed, Your Grace," Cormier added with a laugh. "My marriage?" Damien repeated, lining up his shot. "Why do you think I'm delaying it?" That's exactly what we don't understand, Cormier replied. Every noble family is eager to marry their daughter to you. Why do you keep holding back? Damien straightened slightly, cleaning the cue stick with deliberate care. Tell me, Cormier, how is one marry someone he does not even wish to kiss? Both Weiss and Cormier exchanged sly smiles. Oh, we didn't know you were that romantic, Your Grace, they teased. You're overthinking it, Damien said coolly. If I am to marry, at the very least, I must like her. Weiss, however, knew better. After meeting her in the forest, Damien had spoken of that woman more than once. And it was Weiss who had gathered every detail about Chloe Verdier for him. At first, Weiss believed his master intended to ruin the daughter of House Verdier, but he soon realized it was the opposite. Damien had wanted to marry Chloe Verdier from the moment he laid eyes on her. Proposing properly, however, was not a virtue Damien von Thisse possessed. Perhaps God had granted him everything, but decency was not among those gifts. You need not worry, Damien said confidently. Before this season changes, you will hear news of my wedding. Cormier brightened. Any family would be honored, Your Grace. Indeed, Damien replied, striking the ball. But as he lifted his gaze, he saw a woman seated casually upon the table. He missed the woman from his thoughts, smiled faintly. You've lost again, Your Grace, she said softly. Damien's grip tightened around the cue. No, he never lost. With sudden determination, he set the stick aside and strode toward the door. I'm going hunting, he announced, to clear my mind. And as for the hunting grounds, I believe Verdier estate will suffice. Weiss and Cormier stood frozen in shock. But who among them would dare question their master's will? Are you really going to go like that? Weiss asked carefully. Yes. Is there a problem? Damien replied, raising a brow. Weiss hesitated. Well, nothing much. It's just that you look like a peacock showing off to impress someone. Damien turned to him, dressed in his royal fur coat. Ignoring the remark, he mounted his horse and set off. Still, Weiss's earlier words lingered in his mind. Your Grace, are you truly going to propose to Lady Verdier with sincerity and love? Damien had laughed at that. Love? Ridiculous. What brought him to Verdier was far more than that. Besides, he had shown her mercy that night in Rose Castle, and yet she had ignored him for 3 whole months. That was not like Chloe Verdier. From all the information he had gathered, she was the type to separate personal feelings from public duty. She was not someone who would withhold gratitude because of private resentment. But then, what if she truly disliked him so much that she could not even send a word of thanks? Damien's grip tightened around the reins. Even if that were the case, so what? He had calculated every possible scenario. And not in a single one did Chloe Verdier reject him. Every effort he had made, everything he had achieved, everything he would achieve, he had already decided to place it all in Chloe's hands when the time came. And now, that day had finally arrived. Hand in hand, the king and queen of Swanton walked toward the palace balcony. Are you nervous? Damien asked quietly. Chloe lowered her gaze. It would be a lie to say I'm not, she whispered, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon her. In the very next moment, Damien bent down and lifted her into his arms. Damien, she protested softly, covering her face in embarrassment. He smiled at her. Raise your head and look around, Chloe. Slowly, she lowered her hands and looked out. The sight overwhelmed her. Crowds gathered below, cheering for their king and queen. Chloe, Damien whispered near her ear, see how much they love you. Of course, not as much as I do. Her face flushed as she turned to look at him. She lifted her hand and cupped his face gently. Me too, she whispered back, tears gathering in her eyes. I love you too, Damien. He studied her expression, then teased softly. Chloe, do you know what a mess your face looks like right now? She leaned closer. Even if you see me when I am a mess, that's all right, Damien, she said quietly, and captured his lips in a kiss. My beloved sister Chloe, the letter began. When I saw your coronation ceremony in the newspaper, I was truly happy. I could clearly see how much the king loves his queen, showing such affection so openly. But there are things I must say as family. I hope you forgive us for what you and your husband had to endure in the duchy. Knowing Arnaud, it will be difficult for him to apologize properly, but please know that he is sincere. And, Chloe, even if we appear to fight constantly, we cannot bear to stay away from each other, so do not worry about me. By the way, father arrived, not long ago. He was so happy to see his grandson that he no longer speaks of joining mother. I also visited Genevois a few days ago and met Gilles. He has truly become a wonderful missionary. I am glad he has found his happiness. There is still so much I want to tell you, but Arnaud keeps demanding my attention, so I will write the rest in my next letter. With love, Alice, who is slowly but surely growing up. Chloe hugged the letter to her chest, smiling warmly. Just then, the door burst open. Chloe, my dear! Lady Thisse entered with a sigh. I am leaving for this today. I am rather worried about the castle in my absence. But before that, she leaned closer and fastened an earring onto Chloe. I really don't need this. You've already given me so many jewels, Chloe protested gently. Lady Thisse waved her hand dismissively. Your sister is dripping in jewels, so you should show some off as well. We are no less than the duchy, and with such a beautiful queen, I truly don't understand why you hesitate. She paused, then added, You don't have to see me off. Chloe stood quickly. Should I go with you? Lady Thisse smiled knowingly. Chloe dear, you truly know how to trouble my son. But don't worry, you are my daughter now, and I understand how children worry for their parents. Perhaps your mother once felt the same. Before the moment grew too emotional, Damien entered, wrapping his arms around Chloe. My, I'm jealous. I never received such a farewell. Even when I was heading to war, he complained lightly. As the couple bickered softly, Lady Thisse watched them with warmth in her heart before departing Swanton. Later, walking through the garden, Chloe said quietly, Everyone seems so formal, even your mother. It is only natural to respect the queen, Damien replied. After all, you are the owner of this palace. You are the true owner. Chloe corrected. Damien looked at her. Didn't I tell you? Castle Rose is yours. Chloe blinked. When did that happen? On paper? The day you left. But in my heart I decided that long before. Are you curious to know when? She smiled faintly. I think I know. Was it the night we first walked in this garden 3 years ago? Damien nodded. Do you also know what I wanted to do that day? He asked softly, remembering how her neck had flushed red, and how much restraint it had taken him to hold back. Then, without hesitation, Damien knelt on one knee. Chloe, I love you, even if I must shed all my dignity for it, he said sincerely. Chloe leaned down and embraced the man who had become the love of her life. As time passed, Chloe conceived again. This time, Damien guarded her and their child with unwavering devotion. And when the day of birth arrived, he was so overwhelmed at the sight of 2 tiny figures that tears of happiness streamed down his face. As a father, Damien taught his son and daughter the duties of royalty from a young age. As a mother, Chloe poured warmth, kindness, and love into their hearts. In the study wall that once held the story of 2, now held the story of 4, King Damien von Thisse, Queen Chloe von Thisse, and their prince and princess. And at last, the once restless king had found his peace, standing beside the woman who had brought him to his knees. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this and want to be part of our growing community, hit join to support the channel. Take care and see you soon.